Our story begins with someone standing on a cliff observing a horde of creatures approaching. Someone behind him remarks that they are getting closer. We notice that these winged creatures are demons and dragons flying side by side, until something gigantic passes through the midst of those tiny creatures, being Corntail, the king of dragons with 3 heads. The person with white hair points out that the Centaur's nest has already fallen, and they can no longer depend on anything since the knights, adventurers, and all the heroes everyone saw as a ray of hope ended up dying in battle. Then the girl states that only he is left. Now he remains the last adventurer, El Palm. The boy tells everyone to advance, saying this is their chance. The shadow of the gigantic creature approaches, covering the adventurers' bodies, and with the monster's mouth open, getting closer, our protagonist informs that this will be their last adventure. Sometime later, it's possible to see the completely devastated and flame-covered scene. Our boy is covered in blood with multiple wounds all over his body, and he falls to his knees with all the bodies beside him. The head of the colossal creature is now in front of him. With that, the boy wonders if this is his end, since only one of the heads ended up being cut from the incredible monster. And he realizes that the part that was cut is already regenerating and believes everything was in vain. With just 2 heads, the monster advances towards our boy. His eyes are heavy and tired, so he just closes them, and thinks that this is his end, and not just his, but also the end of the world, marking the last step of his entire adventure. But with a punch to the ground imbued with extreme strength, he ends up shouting and cursing into the air, asking if this is how everything will end, since even his friends like Philip, his closest companions like Jaden, and even his partner Alexis, who decided to abandon her life for his survival, ended up dying with a smile on her face and tears in a sacrifice along with the others. But in the end, it was all in vain, and with that, he lets out a cry of rage into the air, saying he can't believe this, and so he stands up with difficulty. In his mind, the name of the Dragon Emperor runs with extreme hatred, as he says it can't end like this, and with that, raises his bloodied hand towards the winged monster. And gathering all his rage, our protagonist forms one last spell, being a golden magic that ends up being extremely powerful to the point of distorting the wind around him. He has in mind that nothing else matters anymore as he will just kill the monster. But he ends up faltering next, feeling an extreme shock passing through his entire body that dissipates his magic. The ground is suddenly covered by the blood that falls from his mouth, and the enormous dragon prepares a purple breath to launch in his direction. So it unleashes a breath of purple flames, which ends up being many times larger than our protagonist, who in that situation can only curse that creature. Apparently in his mind before dying, he wonders why everything had to end like this, since if he were stronger, he could survive. While hallucinating that if he had another chance, he could have gotten a bucket of water, he suddenly woke up. Soon we see him with a worn appearance like that of a slave, while someone yells not to pretend to be sick. Looking forward, the boy notices a tall man shouting that his slave must know his place, and in his mind, he wonders what happened to the Dragon King. Then El Palm realizes he is really alive until he notices something else catching his attention. And looking around, our boy ends up noticing that this place is somewhat familiar. He tries to remember this place while moving his hands in his shackles, until he realizes it's the slave market. He becomes tense and breaks into a cold sweat, thinking that this can't be happening, since the slave market was abolished a long time ago, but he is still sure that this is indeed the place. And even the slave trader is the same from his memory. He remembers that this is the merchant who was in charge of him 6 years ago, when he was a slave, since he is sure it's the same guy. The man suddenly starts getting irritated while our boy finally realizes he has really returned to the past. When the furious man asks what the boy is looking at while preparing a punch to hit his face, the punch approaches his face while he thinks that on that exact day, it was the day he was brought back to the first step of all his stories. Sometime later, we see him in silence looking forward. At first he wonders if this is really real, but then agrees with the thought upon seeing that everything is very tangible and realistic. He can't believe it, but has no other explanation when the slave trader approaches with a group of adventurers and says they can all be used as bait. The fat one tries to say they were caught recently, but the man with the staff informs that they will only take 2 of them. With empty and dull eyes, he knows he doesn't need to think much since this is his second chance. Thus, we see him in a forest picking up a staff from the ground belonging to the adventurer who bought him, who is now dead. El Palm sees that this weapon is a staff with a fire arrow enchantment, which is not a bad skill, and in the end, it is perfect for his current skill level. But that's not enough, since an adventurer should have more than just a simple weapon. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for him to have come back until he notices one of the adventurer's legs lying there on the ground. Remembering that some people tend to hide valuable items in their shoes, thus our young man ends up finding a valuable ring. With a hidden glow in the ring, he realizes is a telekinetic ring. But suddenly, a strange sound catches his attention. Our young man ends up noticing that plant monsters are approaching in his direction, and he realizes that he has been tracked due to the blood. The monsters soon stomp the ground heavily. Immediately afterward, the creatures advance with extreme fury towards our boy. But with his spear, he quickly takes care of the monsters. One of them even tries to use its long tongue to make an attack, but with his spear, the young man ends up blocking it. However, the creature's strength was so great that it ended up breaking the weapon. Soon, fear and despair take shape on the boy's face, and behind him, one of the sharp-toothed creatures advances. But he ends up using the fire arrow and shoots it, ending the life of that monster. Immediately afterward, thinking that he will also test his new ring. Thus, the fire arrow is redirected and controlled, and with a hand movement that he performs, the arrow circles and pierces all the trees present there, concluding by dissipating into the air. With the destroyed scenery around him, he thinks he won't be able to do this for long. The other creatures keep advancing anyway, while our boy thinks it won't matter, until something suddenly catches his attention, and the boy realizes that the fire arrow is not working. It doesn't seem broken, so he wonders if it's some sort of cooldown for the skill. He tries to jump back, but the creature's mouth advances towards him again. Then the boy stops with a strong stomp on the ground, and strikes the creature physically with the staff, saying he has no other option. With a simple expression, the boy continues to strike the creature non-stop using that stick, finishing with a kick to the monster's mouth, knocking out some of its teeth. With the force of that blow, the tree monster ended up being thrown away, and with a vacant look, he wonders how much longer the cooldown will last. Soon, the young man realizes that the staff is already imbued with flames, signaling it is ready to attack, with the creature being a step away from devouring him. He maintains a calm and serious look, saying it's time. Thus, the boy fires another fire arrow. Then he uses his levitation ring, saying he needs to do it one more time, and thus he moves the arrow through the air, eliminating all the monsters present there. At the end of it, the calm look remains on his face. While he looks down at the mountain of corpses he ended up forming. Someone injured there speaks to the protagonist, saying he is not just any slave, which ends up impressing our boy, who wonders in his thoughts if she was really alive until now. The mage girl sees that he has mastery with spear and magic, so she questions who he is while our boy thinks and admits that she was very lucky, but maybe it's unlucky. With her face covered in blood, she stares at him, asking why he is with that staff, and mainly questioning about the thing on his wrist, asking how he awakened that being just a slave. But then the mage asks if by chance he planned all that. The look of silence is present on our boy's face, and with seriousness along with an empty look, he just stares at her. The silence of the forest permeates the entire place. The protagonist asks if she has finished speaking, leaving her confused. He apologizes, saying she misunderstood everything, since nothing would be different, even if it had been planned because they would die anyway, according to our boy. Suddenly, the girl is startled by the shadow formed by the boy's expression. As he says he completely abominates those who use slaves as bait, he finishes while charging his fire staff. With that, the focus returns to the city where our boy came from. People on the street question if this is really serious, saying that this is a completely impossible situation, since a slave who was used as bait returned on his own. He thinks that all this is in the hands of luck, since now he has to hurry to avoid the fate that may repeat itself. Looking at a place similar to a courthouse, he thinks that this is his first stop, since it will be there where he will achieve his long-dreamed freedom. Someone inside that building asks if the slave really returned alive. A man with tied hair confirms, saying that is the case. And the servant returned without a scratch, and the seated man asked what was wrong with that, since someone who serves only as bait should return safe and sound. He explains that all the adventurers died inside the dungeon, and the other man drops the embers into an ashtray, understanding the situation. The guy with the eye patch says that this is definitely strange, since above all, the boy returned on his own feet and didn't even try to escape. It's explained that people who are reduced to slaves because of debt will turn into that again, so our boy had no way to flee. The young man knows that this means he can't escape so easily, since the only way to escape them is through death. Soon the thoughtful man crosses his hands, saying that this is the only way the merchant union deals with slaves in general, then asking why he has to listen to a report on something so trivial. But the other man responds that he has an event to report apart from this, explaining that the slave responsible for this also unlocked the first circle, which ends up scaring the guy with the eye patch, impressed that a slave who was bait is now in the first circle. He knows that a slave will hold many negative feelings against the merchant union and can't imagine what will happen in the worst situation. The man informs that this boy asked about a contract change, leaving the other man confused. Our boy wants to register as an adventurer, which leaves the bearded man completely shocked. He tries to question, but soon the boy explains that a man named Mr. Racken ordered him to take care of it personally. Upon hearing this name, surprise takes over the old man's face, and he ends up thinking that an executive of the merchant union is showing interest in a low-class slave. He dismisses this notion, thinking it is because of a book on top of his papers. Then the man with tied hair leaves, slamming the door. The bearded man was so shocked that he left his lit cigar on the table. Looking out the window, the man is thoughtful about bait really wanting to become an adventurer. The Empress believes that the slavery system should never exist, but this is just a superficial conversation, since humans have always been slaves to money. Since if people fail to repay what they borrowed, they will compensate with hard work, even if forced. This notion was created by the world of guarantees, thus calling debtors slaves. And on the day his only family, his father, died after an illness, the boy became a slave. He bought medicinal herbs on credit from the merchant union, and the union raised the price and multiplied it, ending up being 1,000% of the original. In court, the judge called his name, saying that the convict was accused of failing to pay the correct amount by the due date, and for that reason, he is condemned to perform work equivalent to that value for the merchant union. That's how our boy was exploited for 6 whole years in that place. But in his mind, he keeps the thought that it's time for his revenge. With that, he introduces himself with his original name, saying he is Raken's left arm, one of the union's executives, admitting he has been very lucky. The man with the eye patch confirms, saying he has already heard the news but will get straight to the point. So the old man bangs his hot mug against the support, explaining that he will change his contract to an F-rank adventurer. Our boy is impressed by this and ends up thanking him, but thinks that the old man is being very cautious. But he informs that there is a condition to all of this. Jack wants to be an E-rank adventurer, saying to himself that he has no intention of playing the man's game. The man is surprised by such audacity, saying that the association hasn't even given him a rank yet, but the boy informs him that he has explored 100 of these portals during his 3 years. Then the old man asserts that this was only an experience as bait since he never caught a monster. But the boy informs him that hunting a monster is not a virtue for an adventurer. The reason the first adventurer was able to make his name was survival, and thus the virtue of an adventurer is to return alive. Alpam admits that this information, as someone who has returned, is extremely useful in his mind, and the old man admits that it is true. But he has only entered low-level dungeons and then asks if the boy would really survive in high-ranking dungeons. He concludes by saying that the boy believes they are fools for changing the contract to a risky one without the guarantee that he would even pay what he owes. In his mind, the man admits he must be thinking he will die without even taking 3 steps, but still, something strange occurs within him. In his chest, he feels a repulsive feeling and wonders what is happening. Soon, the boy is impressed to hear about a portal that only 5 people can enter and has about 12 marks. With a smile, the bearded man affirms that this is exactly what the boy is thinking, since in that place lie the bones of all 12 groups. With this, he wants proof that the boy is really as valuable as he claims to be. And if he can do that, then the old man will do everything he wishes. Then we move to another place with a quite dense forest. Next, we see a group of 4 people with one person at the front saying that the boy is a novice who will go with them this time. He soon introduces himself with great pleasure, saying he is Chev and is a tank, admitting that he has heard a lot about him being a bait slave. The boy admits he doesn't care about that and says the same goes for his group. Then the boy hopes they can work well together, and the leader informs him that he has heard he can use fire magic. The boy confirms, and the dark-skinned man says his element has already been decided, and his companion talks about wizards not being able to use elements different from the one they were born with. Apparently, any item related to other elements is useless and states that this is quite complicated. Everyone decides to stop chit-chatting, and the leader says their goal is not to kill monsters but to safely collect items from the other 12 groups. Soon they must return the items to the Union and end up informing that they are offering 3,000 in money for each item collected. The blonde one complains, saying that these items are being bought for a very cheap price, since it is not even half the price. But another group member tells him to stop complaining. So everyone decides to stop, and the leader asks if everyone is ready. With that, he states to make some money with this situation. Inside the place, it is possible to see dense vegetation with the roots of the trees exposed. Then the dark-skinned man says that this place is very depressing, while the leader informs everyone to set up camp since they might have a prolonged battle there. One of them suggests making a shelter up in a tree where branches are great for hiding and moving to another tree, and so everyone agrees. They then dump the items on the plank's root. The dark-skinned man then says that our protagonist can relax since his specialty is setting up the camp. With the base ready, they decide to split into 2 groups to search the surroundings. Tom, Max, and Ruel will stay in Group 1, being just 3 people. He will stay with the protagonist. In this, they must separate, going east and west, and if something happens, they should signal and run back to the base. After that, the pair follow their path alone in the forest. Sheb is curious because they haven't found any monsters and thinks he set up camp in the wrong place, so they will have to move farther next time. But then he asks a question, ending up questioning if our protagonist is enjoying the adventure. The boy says he feels nervous, and with laughs, the other guy says that's normal. He explains that he has been an adventurer for a long time, but still always feels scared when entering a portal, and in the end, feels like a scared kitten. Besides that, he can find courage because of the people who follow by his side, and the people with him are really good guys. In the end, he felt very sad about our boy's story since he can't imagine how hard it has been for him, and then ends up making a proposal. He suggests that the young man join his group, but he is suddenly interrupted upon seeing our boy standing still, looking at something. Chef says he wasn't being serious, so he shouldn't worry. Soon the group is gathered around a campfire, talking about how they will make money, but one of them ends up saying that it won't be as easy as it seemed. The leader tells them to stop talking while they eat since they can always discuss it the next day. In this situation, our boy just takes a swig of his water. Soon after, night falls over this forest. Creaking sounds are heard coming from the camp, and someone holding a torch calls out to the young man. In a dark tone, he asks if he is really sleeping. Our boy just stays silent, pretending to be sound asleep. Max asks what his captain is doing. Since the boy is lost in his dreams, he couldn't have responded to this situation, and so he draws a dagger with a manic look on his face. They recall how they mixed sleeping herbs into his food so he wouldn't be able to wake up and he swallowed it all, and they would be very lucky if he's not dead. So Max, the dark-skinned guy, simply prepares to kill our protagonist as part of the job, then stabbing and plunging his dagger into the sack where our protagonist was lying. Or at least that's what he thought, as he ends up noticing something, realizing that it was all a trap and our boy is not there. Everyone is surprised and wonders how this is possible. Shug yells for them to find him since he couldn't have gone far. But suddenly, the bottom of the shelter is exploded with a blast of fire. Everyone is extremely desperate as the fire spreads. Meanwhile, our boy is watching from afar. They start to panic and say they need to grab the food and items, suspecting that this was all El Palm's plan and trap. But suddenly his colleague calls his attention, which makes him more sullen and irritated. And thus, they all end up seeing a gigantic monster's eye. Completely horrified, the leader wonders if this was all part of a plan and realizes that everyone was in that boy's hands from the start. And now they were all used as bait to lure that monster. With that, everyone jumps in desperation from the support on top of the tree. So suddenly, that enormous creature devours the part of the shelter. The boy thinks this was all ridiculous, since if they wanted to deceive him, they shouldn't have been so kind. It was obvious that in a portal where 12 groups of adventurers failed, they wouldn't accept bait, so this was obviously a plot. Changing the subject in his thoughts, he knows that this creature is the boss of that place, which he already suspected since he had seen something like this before. The immense monster then passes through the trees as if they were paper in its path. Shev realizes that this type of monster puts them at a great disadvantage. One of them asks what that thing is, and the leader explains that it might be a golden slime. It is not something normally seen since this type of boss is extremely rare, only appearing in red portals. The monster's body is completely acidic, and it is the worst type of enemy against people who fight up close. And there's something even more dangerous. Suddenly, the leader notices something, so he throws his companion to the side, telling him to dodge the large amount of acid that was thrown. The man with the scar on his face asks what that was, realizing it was a long-range attack called Acid Arrow. Being a skill that allows shooting acid from its body, the man thinks in despair that this is a kind of cheat. The leader orders everyone to pull themselves together, and then they ask what they should do to deal with this. They will just get out of there first since the skill is on cooldown. They will first recover and find an opportunity to aim at the creature's head core. Max laughs, realizing that the creature's ability is on cooldown. And with that, he starts running back to attack the creature. Everyone wonders what he is doing, but the guy says there's still time. He advances and tells them to leave this job to him. Shep tries to intervene, saying they have to attack together, and asks the man to wait. But suddenly, the guy's body is split in half by the acid arrow. Confusion and despair are evident on Shev's face, because the cooldown should still last for another 10 seconds. Even so, the creature fires the acid arrow again, reducing their bodies to just bones. Our protagonist observes from afar, thinking that it's finally over. He thinks to himself that the leader's words were not wrong, since a golden slime gets stronger as it consumes more items and the cooldown of its ability also decreases as it strengthens. The abnormal size is because it has already eaten various things before, like the previous groups, and thus the monster has surpassed its own class. It has grown so much that it is now 2 levels above the portal, and still, it is not a monster that any first circle adventurer can handle. In the end, the only certainty he has is that there are no more items in this dungeon, making his mission a failure. But before he can leave, he remembers the man's words asking him to prove his worth. Then he ends up giving a slight smile at that. The unconcerned monster just crawls around the place, until it notices something strange approaching. Suddenly, it gets hit by a fire shot right in the middle of its head. The acid drips from it and slightly corrodes the ground. The creature lets out a grunt while regenerating. Our boy thinks he aimed directly at the core. But as the damage is observed, our protagonist is sure that 5 shots will at least be useful to expose the core. However, he keeps in mind that it doesn't matter for now, since his only goal is to prove to that guy that he can handle this situation. The slime soon fires another acid arrow in the direction of our boy. He dodges by jumping from the tree while it gets hit. The creature fires again, launching a series of bursts, but our boy manages to stretch his rope in time, and then with visible difficulty on his face, he uses the ring on his finger, thus being able to control the rope with telekinesis while thinking he needs to hit exactly the same spot without error. But the boy in the end is not an ordinary mage, as he held the title of Best Telekinetic in his past life. So in the air, our boy uses his staff as a base to create a bow and fire arrow, and thus shoots another fire arrow right on the same spot he hit previously. The wounded monster attacks him with another burst while our protagonist thinks he needs to shoot 4 more times. Then the young man uses his rope to dodge the attack. Then with difficulty and agility, he manages to plant his feet on the trunk to gain momentum. and thus evades another acid burst that hits the tree trunk. While suspended in the air holding the rope, he decides to use his fire arrow again, and hits the same spot again, now needing 3 more to defeat the creature. The monstrosity, while regenerating its head, continues firing our young man, who swiftly dodges all those attacks at once while preparing his fire staff. Then he shoots another arrow that ends up landing another hit, and in his mind he admits he needs 2 more attacks, then controls his rope along with the dagger. Still in the air, the boy shoots another arrow. Above the tree, he notices the creature managed to dodge, and considering its size, is quite fast. But he admits it is futile, while controlling the fire arrow using his telekinesis ring right in the direction of the slime's face. Thus, he hits directly in the center of the creature's core. And with that, the cracked core is exposed right in the middle of the monster. Without delay, our protagonist advances to strike that core and finish it off. Then he holds the staff tightly, saying this will be the final attack. And behind him, the creature's colossal hand advances to crush him. When that gigantic hand was a few meters from reaching him, the boy notices it before it touches him. Then with extreme intelligence, his telekinesis ring is activated. With that, his rope along with the dagger pierces the ground. Thus, he gains enough momentum to dodge the blow. Gaining distance, the young man slides across the ground. And with his flame staff, he prepares a magic arrow. The flame arrow is then shot. The creature, predicting it will be hit, tries to block it with its gigantic hand. But an enormous smile spreads across our boy's face as he uses his telekinesis ring to control the magic and redirects it to the weak point. With that, the explosion hits exactly where it needed to. The flame core ends up being hit and begins to reverberate inside the monster. Suddenly, the monster's gelatinous body starts to swell. The monster becomes confused as its eye begins to bulge. Then suddenly, it explodes while our protagonist runs. The acidic liquid released by the monster's death starts to flow. It moves toward the boy, who prepares his rope. With serious determination, he imbues the telekinesis spell into the dagger and rope. As the wave of acid comes at him, he shoots his weapon, which wraps around a tree branch. With the momentum, he climbs onto the branch while the acid floods the area. His expression remains serious as he observes the scene, but his eyes stay vacant. The acid flows through the area, covering and melting the weaker trees. Soon, the acid begins to dry, clearing a path for our protagonist. He descends from the tree, stepping onto the now safe ground. He then walks slowly through the area, maintaining silence while observing the ground, until he notices something that catches his attention. He uses his levitation ring to bring the red glow closer. With that, a red core rises from the ground toward him. The boy holds it while a blue flame covers the object. The orb, upon contact with our boy's body, begins to emit a potent glow. Soon after, it emanates a large amount of red mana. A mana barrier forms around the young man. Then we see him back at the Merchant Union. The silence in the room is palpable, with the eye patch man still smoking his cigar. He comments that the boy wasn't just showing off after all. But the young man, without any of the requested items, explains that those placed in his group were hunters who wanted to steal his items. When he left to prevent that from happening, the boss appeared and found them, resulting in everyone being killed. The man, suspicious, asks if it was really the creature. The boy explains that it was a golden slime, which the man quickly understands meant all the portal's items were melted. In his mind, he admits that this is a great loss, but it can't be ignored since all those items were rented. But the problem is that our protagonist managed to return alive. It is explained that there are some rules, with the first being that the number of entries into the portal and the number of people is limited until everyone is annihilated. The second rule is that there is a limitation depending on the portal's color, which ranges from red to purple, and if the adventurer's level is too high, they cannot enter. The third and final rule is that you can only use the portal once. If someone enters, survives, and exits, the portal used will be destroyed. The man thinks the portal is already a lost cause, and it would be difficult for a first circle mage to deal with a golden slime, and says he understands the situation. But regardless of the reason, it is a fact that the boy failed mission. The young man says he is too impatient as he hasn't finished explaining completely. Then the boy pulls something from his sleeve, saying the golden slime gave him something. The bearded man is astonished upon seeing it, as the boy managed to obtain a second circle by devouring the golden slime. Shocked and impressed, the man shouts that this is something crucial as he managed to absorb the mana stone from the golden slime. The boy says this is enough to prove himself and that he now wants to be E rank, but he becomes confused when the man says he will go to D rank. Completely excited, the man says he will grant him D rank, and if the young man works with the old man, he will even receive the treatment of a C rank. With that, our protagonist just signs the paper. Normally, giving C rank to someone who's not even in the third circle is considered preferential treatment. Adventurer rankings are heavily influenced by circles as they symbolize power, and the difference is clearly evident. But he ends up thinking that this guy is not normal since it's not possible to ascend a circle just by absorbing a mana stone. The man recalls the survival instinct the young man mentioned. Then the old man with a smile says he has a crushing talent and that someone who became a first circle mage quickly returned as a second circle mage. The bearded man has never seen anyone grow so fast and therefore needs the boy. Our boy keeps in mind that his treatment improved much faster than imagined. But there's not much time left for the first portal raid. where 100 red rank members can enter. This will be the first major event that the observing guilds will be interested in, and most likely the merchant union will also be interested. There is nothing wrong with this for now, and he is also in a hurry, so it is good to start advancing his plans. He then calls the old man Abyss and says he needs a favor. The man promptly asks what it is. Our young man extends his hand very lightly, ending up asking to borrow some money. The man keeps his smile in silence, then thinks that this boy is going too far. Some say the portals began in the Age of Adventurers. However, this was a trap made by the Dark Mage. Many adventurers died in the portals, killing all the potential of this world. And then the last day came when all the monsters that waited for their time ran through the portals. That's when humanity lost. Exactly 3 years from now, the fate the world will face is not so distant. Abyss, smoking his cigar, watches through the window. His eyes stay on our protagonist, who ends up leaving the place. He thinks that this money is not enough, but still quite good to start. The portal of 100 found this time is a red level 1 where only those with 2 circles can enter. Usually, the merchant union selects those adventurers with more circles, but the reason for investing in someone like him is because they are aiming for that portal. He obtains some money, but spending it all on items is foolish since items that fit his level are very expensive. But there's something useful he can use to spend his money. So the young man arrives at a place with a shining golden sign. He can understand those letters, but we spectators cannot. But it is possible to perceive the silence in which our protagonist remains. We end up discovering from a newcomer that this is a slave market, and he asks if he can guide him around the place, asking what kind of company the adventurer is looking for, whether it be a bait slave or a warrior to fight alongside him. The young man says he has someone he is looking for and asks to be shown the way. Confusion is visible on the young man's face. Then the bandana-wearing man presents him with the punishment field, where they use this place to punish those who deserve it. Palm suddenly stops upon noticing something. The young man, a bit tense, says it is over there. We then see someone tied up with chains restraining their arms. The young man gulps dryly at the sight. He soon asks if the client really wants this person, and our protagonist says he is aware of their situation. Staring at the person who is tied up, Palm ends up saying that it is exactly him he was looking for. The death of a certain individual accelerated the world's destruction in his previous life. This person who ended up being murdered was the heroine of the Axa, and the author of this murder was the only apprentice she ever had, known as the hero slayer Debo, and this incident marked the beginning of the end of the world. The man then asks why he came to him, since he doesn't know him, and orders him to leave. The merchant tries to apologize, saying that his mental state is quite severe. Then he realizes that his behavior is a bit different, and now he is just a slave, yet he still treats adventurers with disdain, being quite rude. Soon the merchant says there are other mad dogs like him. The boy thinks that his ability is also quite impressive. Beside him, he was one of the few who gained attention, and sometimes were even compared since they are from the same region and awakened their abilities simultaneously. But there was one thing that was the greatest similarity between the two. The boy asks how much it costs, and the man says he is from a wealthy family and asks if he can pay whatever is asked. Then he hears a smile, saying it costs $1 million, and asks if the boy is ready to pay all that. Alpon keeps in mind that he desperately needed money, just like this slave, since this guy has a younger sister with a disease called black blood. Soon the man asks him to leave since he doesn't have the money, but our young man just rummages in his bag, and suddenly something glimmers in the slave's eye, because he has just realized that our protagonist actually has all the money. The guy wonders if the money is real and questions if he is a money launderer or something, and even the seller is extremely surprised. Completely tense, the man swallows hard. The boy says there are some terms in the contract where there will be a year of benefits divided 7-3, and he will have complete priority in choosing items left in the portal. So the merchant himself is confused to see that he is making a group member contract instead of a slave contract. Our young man hands over the contract, telling him to take a good look. But quickly the guy grabs the paper, saying there's no turning back. With that, he bites his finger until it bleeds. Our boy notices that he is accepting without hesitation, wondering if it's because his sister's life is at stake. But a slight smile quickly appears on our boy's face. He then says that with the contract signed, they will go straight to the portal, and the other agrees. But he warns that he will have to prove his worth, and the man accepts with determination, saying he will work harder than anyone else. Soon they arrive at the forest. At the place, the guy calls him boss, saying he is grateful for having bought a new weapon, but normally he uses a longsword, so they should go back and exchange it. The protagonist informs him that an axe will be his weapon while working with him, and if he doesn't like it, he can just end the contract. Soon they arrive at the portal where he plans to be tested, a red level 1 with a limit of 8 people marked at the entrance. Then the guy asks where the rest of the group is, and if he is a boss with deep pockets, he must have good team members. He asks if the boy at least has a healer, since fighting is fighting, but having a healer is useful, and then wonders why the young man is staring at him. Starting to get desperate, the guy tries to guess something, but the young man explains that there's no need to worry because there are enough members, and the big guy relaxes a bit with this news. Quickly the boy raises his finger, saying that all the members are right there now. Silence ensues between them while the warrior is confused. until suddenly despair takes over, telling him to wait a moment, saying it can't be what he is thinking. But our young man, impatient, kicks him from behind, telling him not to waste time and go already. As he crosses the portal, the man screams in despair, and thus both are taken to a red portal inside a desert. The muscular man falls to the ground, letting out a scream. Then he questions if the boy is crazy, saying that doing an 8-person portal with just 2 is complete madness, and assumes angrily that this must be some kind of joke. He says he needs a weapon, but suddenly the protagonist's completely serious face intimidates him and makes him say he needs to get used to it better. Suddenly something scares him, a huge cloud of dust. The ones responsible for this cloud are a group of monsters shaped like tree trunks. The man thinks he messed everything up with his yelling, since these creatures are known as hard trunks that swords and spears have difficulty penetrating. But our protagonist quickly intervenes, telling him to get out of the way. The guy tries to say to wait a moment. However, with a single fire arrow, one of those monsters is already down. Gibbo is completely confused to see this scene. Then suddenly, the same arrow flies through more trunks, shattering other monsters completely. The speed of the arrow is unbelievable and passes through the creatures like a jet, until suddenly the last of the creatures falls to the ground. Then our young protagonist says this is disappointing, saying it's pathetic to think he would act like that when they enter the portal. And he warns him not to make such mistakes again, and the warrior wonders who this boy is. Elsewhere during the night, someone informs that the merchants took the bait. The woman explains that they are already buying time for the plan to work and have captured the people they will send. Someone with a long black glove swirls their wine glass. The girl asks if she has permission to proceed, and the man shrouded in darkness gives her permission. Soon, the girl bows with a reverence. Then she disappears with traces of shadow. The old man with long hair says that all this will be done according to one person's will, and he consecrates the freedom of this world along with his wine glass. The plant monsters continue burning on the ground, and the warrior says he has gathered a total of 27 mana stones. The boy understands and tells them to continue, and the muscular man agrees. In that place, the sun is high, shining in the sky with unimaginable heat. Debu thought the guy was crazy, but in fact, he is very powerful and wonders if his magic is telekinesis, since he has never seen a mage do that. But then he smiles happily, believing he will save money on medical expenses until his thoughts are interrupted by the boy. They recognize it as another group of monsters. The warrior notices there are 9 of them in total, and our protagonist says it's a perfect number. The guy initially feels confused by this strange statement, and then he stares the protagonist's serious face with even more doubt. Suddenly, a small stone is thrown, catching the attention of one of the monsters. But from above, Dibu advances like a demon and strikes the creature, cutting it in half. All the creatures become highly alert due to this strange occurrence. He thinks it is really a problem to have to fight all of them at once, since he has never used this type of weapon before, which makes him irritated. Assuming that even with 10 attempts it wouldn't be enough to defeat all these monsters, he advances while cursing his boss as crazy. Our protagonist observes from afar, saying it is clear that the guy has only used a sword all his life. But soon this guy will realize that the axe is the weapon that will make him much stronger. There is no doubt that he is talented, since the only apprentice of the axe heroine was him. The monster advances like pincers toward the guy, but quickly the muscular man attacks it, noticing something strange. He realizes that the reach of his weapon is much greater than a sword, and the axe seems much lighter, wondering what will happen if he handles it differently. So he does, making his weapon move much faster. Then he strikes the creature with an extremely clean cut, killing it instantly. His movement speed increases, and his dexterity with the axe also increases along with his speed. Our protagonist notices that he has already gotten the hang of it, and that he hasn't even awakened a circle yet, but is already extremely strong. Suddenly, the guy feels something that makes him stop attacking, wondering if what is happening is an earthquake. But soon the rocks from the wall begin to fall, revealing the paw of an enormous monster. Dibu is paralyzed with astonishment until this thing strikes the ground near him and throws him away. The boy is safe and then wonders what that is, recognizing the monster as a stumpy. The creature makes another attack in the man's direction, but our protagonist manages to get him out of the place in time. Then he drops him to stay on the sidelines, saying that the creature's size has nothing to do with the threat it poses, since this colossal size only makes it easier to land an attack. The guy on the ground is surprised and smiles, saying that the magic might work. But then he realizes that the monster managed to block that attack from the protagonist. He notices that the creature's reaction speed is faster than expected, so he decides to use his technique, and thus activates his telekinesis, making the fire arrow fly around the tree. The magic goes behind the monster, while the boy thinks he only needs to land one shot. But even using telekinesis, the tree still manages to avoid the attack. Surprise is stamped on our boy's face, realizing that it managed to block even such an attack. Dibu realizes that magic also doesn't work and asks why the boy is standing still instead of running to avoid getting killed. Elpalm thinks that the attacks do work, but the problem is that the creature doesn't give openings to make a proper attack, and he considers the branches as the real problem of the situation. Soon, the gigantic monster ends up stomping the ground again, making both of them fly into the air. Then another one of its branches advances. this time heading towards our dear muscular man. But our young man is prepared enough to use his telekinesis ring, thus pulling a huge boulder from the nearby ground. And soon he forms a foothold for both of them. The big guy recognizes his boss is coming and praises him. He thanks him, saying he thought he was going to die, and our boy says it's no problem. Our protagonist tells the guy to handle the smaller ones while he takes care of the bigger one. Ditto tries to tell the young man to wait, but then our boy quickly goes after the monster, and he quickly fires another one of his fire arrows. The muscular man thinks that this monster cannot be defeated without a plan and considers that they need to flee. The explosion occurs right next to the creature, and the warrior thought he was right. When the monster's expression changes to visible surprise, it gets hit by a fire shot right in the cheek. Ditto is completely astonished to see that he actually managed to hit it, but our young man remains firm and focused. He thinks the branches move faster than he expected, but still, he fires another arrow. Because of this speed, it becomes impossible for him to use telekinesis and attack at the same time. However, being in the second circle, Palm can cast the same spell twice in a row, and with that shot, one of the monster's branches is cut off. The warrior just smiles as he looks sideways, adding that it's incredible. The strategy of hiding a fire arrow behind the first one is extremely precise, since the monster can't block 2 attacks in a row. At the moment, the only thing he can do is praise our protagonist because it's really something unbelievable to pull off. But suddenly, he notices something that catches his attention. He lets some of the small creatures pass and head toward our hero. Thinking that he lets some through, the man yells for Palm to look behind him. But Flash quickly shifts focus from the giant creature and helps by attacking the smaller creatures coming from behind him. Irritation is visible on his face as he says he can't even handle the small ones. But suddenly, the creature's eyes widen, perceiving opportunity, and it advances with its claws toward our young man. The protagonist thinks he will die if he shows an opening even for a second, and with his immense dexterity, he manages to dodge. But one of those giant branches comes at him. The young man can see this sudden attack inches from his face. However, suddenly a strong hand touches his shoulder. It's Ditto who pushes the protagonist back and cuts a huge branch with his axe. The protagonist then lands smoothly on the ground safely. Then the warrior says he just saved his life, so he should take back what he said before. A smile of relief spreads across our boy's face. It informs him that he's finally being useful. With that, they both agree to finish off this boss once and for all. Palm fires 2 fire arrows again, cutting off another branch of that tree. The creature lets out a piercing grunt of pain, but another arrow already advances toward another branch. Ditto grips his axe tightly with both hands, then cuts the creature's gigantic branch while the fire arrow diverts. The spell hits 2 other branches of the monster, making it scream in pain. But suddenly something surprising catches our young man's attention. He realizes that the monster is attacking his companion from both directions, so he informs his colleague that he will attack from the right. The warrior smiles and shouts that he will handle the left, and thus both attacks end up cutting other branches of the enormous beast. Then the muscular man falls to the ground and slides to safety, but quickly runs back into danger, going after the monster and running around its trunk. He makes dozens of attacks that cut several branches present, but suddenly, a strong blow hits him in the back. Blood comes out of his nose and mouth as he is thrown away. The creature prepares to bite down and completely swallow the man, but from afar, a strange boulder flies toward the warrior, accompanied by telekinesis magic. And so he is saved before the monster devours him. However, the creature was smart enough to break the rock that was moving the warrior. Our young man thinks this is becoming too problematic and quickly uses his telekinesis ring once again, but this time on an insanely larger scale, making dozens of rocks fly at the same time. The warrior lands on one of them with extreme caution, until he notices another one of those monstrous attacks coming from behind him. Then he shouts that there's no way to escape, but still, he keeps jumping from stone to stone. Our protagonist's fire arrow is also used to burn several of the creature's branches, and the creature suddenly shifts its focus to our protagonist. Like a demon, the warrior attacks while our boy tells Debo to finish it off. He ends up hitting the creature's eye, causing it to bleed. The Colossus even tries to retreat, but Debo stays attached to it as it continues to scream. But suddenly, the man drops his axe, landing on a nearby canyon rock. With seriousness, he prepares for something. Advancing again, he says it's not over yet. Our protagonist gathers all his telekinesis into one hand, and keeps the spell focused directly on his companion's weapon. Soon the boy simply pulls his hand back. The axe follows his movement, heading toward the other eye, and it lands directly in the hands of our warrior, who tells the monster to get ready, because he will be its dessert at this moment. So Dibble makes another attack on the enormous and monstrous creature's eye. The monster falls with a scream, letting out a piercing roar of pain. Our warrior is thrown away, but with extreme dexterity, he manages to land safely on the ground. The still-living monster tries to attack to swallow Debo. However, 2 arrows appear from behind him and head toward the monster. The 2 end up entering the giant beast's mouth and completely incinerate the monster's core. A piercing scream of pain is heard as the creature writhes in flames. The warrior falls to his knees on the ground, breathing heavily, while our young man approaches, saying he did a good job. Our young man stands with his hand on his hip staring at the scene. And the warrior is still breathing heavily, says the boy also did a great job. Both end up watching the enormous monster fall to the ground. At night, in a more suburban area of the city, we see someone saying they should eat soon and go to bed. And they clasp their hands, thankful for the food they have that day. Until suddenly, a knock on the door catches the young girl's attention. She gets curious, then opens it, asking who it is. But soon, the look of surprise is on her face, because she has just realized it's her older brother who finally returned home. She grips her dress as the man says he's back. The girl tries to keep her composure, but tears start to fall from her face. Even so, she gives her brother a tight hug, saying he is very welcome. Then we see a cabin in the middle of the forest. Our protagonist observes someone lying in bed. His gaze is serious and empty as usual, but this time there seems to be something more. This is the house he grew up in with his father, but now what lies in that bed is just a corpse of what was once his family. He then takes a cloth to cover the body, and then gathers enough mana with his staff ready to cast more fire. After that, we see him leaving his house with a deeply melancholic tone. He keeps his emotions in the background while just listening to the sound of the burning wood creaking. We see the bearded man in his office thinking that all this will be a problem. The portal for 100 people is about to open, and he wonders how he should organize it, but his supervisor will take care of it if he fails. This time, all 10 major merchant unions will focus on this portal, with the chance of even a legendary item appearing among the many epic ones that will show up. But he knows that none of this will be easy. Since there are the 3 Nadisha sisters from another merchant union, they are so powerful that they can't even be compared to second circle mages. If he stops to analyze, all 10 unions will send their best teams, and the union he is currently part of will easily be surpassed. The man looks at a poster of our protagonist, saying he is a bit hesitant. Suddenly, someone opens the door, and the bearded man asks who dares to enter without knocking. Until suddenly, he is startled to see the person who entered. He quickly recognizes him by his demeanor. It's obviously Mr. Racken. The man asks if the list of groups going to the portal is ready. The old man apologizes, saying he hasn't done it yet, and the seated man says it's not like him to be late, and asks what he thinks of that person. He ends up saying that there's no way to test El Pon's level of talents, since last time an entire group ended up dead, and that's why he is so skeptical. The supervisor suggests testing him again, since this is the perfect opportunity to do so, and of course he should gather all the groups he is considering to be more practical. With a wicked smile, Racken says that this time there will be many witnesses. Soon we see someone arriving in a certain location. It's our protagonist along with his companion, who says there seem to be many people this time. Someone approaches, recognizing them as members of the 5th group. Everyone there looks at them suspiciously, since they are 2 people with a history of slavery. Our protagonist narrows his eyes looking around because he realizes that everyone there is not at all friendly. They must be thinking that the slaves will only be a hindrance, and he thinks this is normal in experienced groups. Everyone seems to be between the 1st and 2nd circles, meaning they are complete professionals who don't need bait. Then suddenly, the operation leader calls everyone to gather. The protagonist recognizes him, and then the man says he will be direct and that they will proceed with the test, giving them a chance to show their skills. One of the men is confused about what was said about having a chance, and the man says it is exactly a chance for them to clear the portal of 100. Everyone there is astonished by this news. The man announces that they will receive special treatment while our protagonist thinks this is a big game of his. So what the old man wants is for them to demonstrate their value. And suddenly the portal starts to emanate a red glow. So everyone crosses to the other side. Everyone realizes it is once again a forest, and they say that everyone will join forces only to fight the boss, and the others agree. Everyone then decides to split up and regroup, and there is a signal. Our protagonist and his companion remain in complete silence. The other groups continue walking through the forest, and the mage says they will kill anything that gets in their way since they don't have much time, and his companions agree. But suddenly a sound catches their attention. They realize it is a monster mushroom and feel disappointed. He says it's a waste of time while imbuing his staff with magic and forming a ball. Then he fires a beam of energy at the small creature. The thought of boredom covers his mind as he orders them to grab the magic stone to move quickly. But from under the smoke, the monster appears still there. Everyone is extremely surprised to see that the creature is still alive. He wonders if his magic couldn't penetrate and says this won't work, so they should do something else. But they quickly start hearing sounds coming from the forest. The mage yells for them to wait and be careful, realizing that they are completely surrounded by monsters. Sometime later, one of the monsters falls dead. Everyone remains with heavy breathing and slightly severe injuries. They are happy that it's finally over. The dark-skinned girl asks what they should do since the monsters are stronger than usual, but the mage remains silent for a few seconds. He thinks he shouldn't count the deaths as that's out of the question, and if they continue like this, their resistance will end before the main boss. But he thinks it's better for them to break the contract and just go straight to the boss to avoid exhausting their energy. Our protagonist says that's what most will think. The warrior, totally exhausted, says it makes sense and says he was standing still without helping, but the boy says there were only 3, and he should be able to handle them. He assumes what he's trying to say is that they can't waste time, and the protagonist agrees, saying they will continue. Debo says to eliminate the boss, but the boy says they will just clean up the trash. Confused, the warrior thought they were going to kill the boss, but the boy says he was referring to the others and that they will actually go with the numbers. He ends up saying that the other groups will focus on the boss and will completely focus on getting points from it, but what they want is to catch the small fry. The warrior thinks that our protagonist always talks as if he knows everything. Then the boy emphasizes something more, as he can sense something very dangerous about this portal. We then see another group walking through the forest, and the dark-skinned girl finds something and calls the leader. They have just found an escape portal and recommend leaving marks from here on, until they are interrupted by hearing a scream. The guy behind the mage starts laughing loudly, and the mage asks what all the noise is about. The man keeps laughing louder with each second. Then the guy with glasses angrily approaches, asking if he can't hear him since he will attract the surrounding monsters. But he gets scared when he sees the man's face. He looks around and realizes that everyone has started laughing suddenly due to a purple gas. He realizes it's poison and thinks he needs to escape from there even if alone. So he runs towards the escape portal. The monster responsible for releasing that poison reveals itself as a horrendous mushroom. There are holes in the creature's body that release the gas. The mage is completely horrified by the scene, and the only thing that can be heard is the laughter of that monster. But suddenly, he also starts laughing and being affected by the gas. The creature approaches and you can see the desperation in the guy with glasses' eyes. We then see a clearing where a river runs. Our protagonist and his companion walk across it, while the warrior thinks the boy hasn't fought once that day. Until suddenly, he notices something coming from the sky, a strange red glow that the warrior informs is the signal. The warrior knew they should use the flare if they found the boss, but is still a surprise. Our boy narrows his eyes looking ahead, realizing there is a group missing. The guy with the bandana says that since everyone is here, he will explain the situation. A girl tries to say that the mage's group isn't there yet, but the man says it doesn't matter as there's no reason to wait. Then he informs them that they found the boss. They heard and witnessed the creature completely massacring Dull and the mage's group. This was all caused by the boss of this place, a madness-inducing poisonous mushroom. The girl is completely shocked to learn it's that creature. While everyone discusses that this is really a problem, the warrior asks his boss if this mushroom is really dangerous. The boy is lost in thought, believing this is the worst type of boss one could encounter in a dungeon of this level. The warrior thinks he is being ignored on purpose, but the boy starts thinking of various strategies to try to defeat the boss, even though it is a very arduous task. The dark-skinned man informs that the boss is on the path to the escape portal, making it impossible to escape without facing it. The convinced warrior says that with a fire arrow, his boss can finish it, but the protagonist just tells him to shut up. Dubo gets irritated by this, but the boy explains that they will die if they go in without a plan. He explains that his fire arrow won't even scratch it, which surprises the warrior. He explains that all the mushrooms in this small portal are tank types, so they can assume the boss is too. The dark-skinned man gets irritated by him saying something so obvious, but one of his companions says they need to think of something quickly. But suddenly, our boy raises his hand saying 50,000 in money. The guy is confused by this statement. He explains that if they pay 50,000 per person with 30 people there, they will receive 1.5 million. If they pay that, he and his companion will serve as bait for them. Silence completely envelops the place. Dubo wonders in his mind what our protagonist is trying to do. But suddenly, the guy shouts at the boy not to be conceited, shouting that he may be used to this type of strategy, but this boss is not the type that is easily attracted. He explains that if they follow what is being said, they will end up dying and says that slaves only get in the way in high-rank portals. He also says that the slave next to the protagonist doesn't even seem to have awakened, and then he asks what they can do. Our warrior gets completely irritated, saying that this is unnecessary talk and that the guy is just trying to pick a fight. Our protagonist asks what his plan is since he fired a flare, so he must have one. The young man also needs to clarify something, saying that his group consists of someone from the second circle and someone from the first circle, surprising even the warrior who hadn't realized it. Our warrior gets completely excited about this, while the young man says that the dark-skinned guy's group only has 2 from the second circle, making him completely nervous. Then the girl from before decides to intervene in the discussion. The girl says they are willing to pay, but they don't have all the money with them right now. The boy says that's not a problem since they can pay when they get out, and if they can't get out, they should interpret everything as a sacrifice. However, there's something he has to say. He will only agree to be bait if everyone agrees. Then he tells them to decide. Sometime later, we see the location of the escape portal. There, the mushroom devours the bodies of those it killed, until suddenly something is fired at it, a fire arrow that leaves it stunned. The arrow hits directly on its head. Smoke starts to billow out in the area. The protagonist, with his masked companion, says they will move when the boss notices them, and the warrior asks why they have to do this. From the purple fog, suddenly we see the creature's multiple eyes. It suddenly starts advancing at high speed. They both start running, and the warrior wonders why the creature is so fast. The monster assumes a quadruple pattern as it chases after them. The girl from before wearing a mask says for everyone to go now and that they should activate the portal before the bait dies. and so one of them does by touching the symbol. The portal opens, and the girl shouts for everyone to cross at once. The huge monster keeps chasing our protagonists, but suddenly the warrior notices something in front of him. Realizing that several smaller monsters appeared out of nowhere, he shouts that it doesn't seem to be something easy to kill, and then gathers mana into his axe, letting out a shout for all those creatures to go away at once. He performs an explosive slash that kills all the creatures present, but behind him the enormous mushroom advances with its mouth full of teeth open. However, our protagonist saves him by firing a fire arrow right into the creature's mouth, throwing it back. Yet that strange mushroom, even though injured, starts laughing at the situation. The protagonist then fires another arrow at its head, but this time the creature manages to dodge. However, our boy, fully prepared, uses his telekinesis ring, making the arrow take a direct turn. And as the mushroom leaps towards them with a wicked grin, the arrow tries to hit, but it's so fast that it dodges the strikes. Even so, it keeps chasing the boys while the arrow continues attacking it to the point where the warrior shouts that the mushroom is catching up to them. Our small boy remains skeptical and cold as he notices a hole in front of them. Then he shouts for his companion to jump with him. The creature, just before reaching them, makes another attack trying to catch them. As they fall, the warrior shouts for her to pay attention, and giving the middle finger, he tells her to swallow this barbecue well. Our protagonist, with extreme determination, stares into the creature's eyes, then fires an extremely powerful arrow that hits the monster. And so the two end up falling into the stream running through the area. The current is extremely strong and ends up carrying their bodies underwater. The warrior then reaches the riverbank, saying he almost died in that little stunt. He is with the protagonist, who stands beside him. Soon the dark-skinned man asks what's wrong with that creature. Our hero then explains that this is the boss of this place, and it seems they will have to prepare better if they want to kill it. Hearing this, the guy falls silent, confused for a moment, stammering as he asks if he is really serious about killing that thing. The young man just confirms, leaving the warrior completely furious. The two start arguing, with the warrior wanting them to flee, but the boy says that won't happen. Dibbo is completely apprehensive because the protagonist himself had said before that they would die if they tried to face that thing. Palm says the situation has changed since the competition is gone, and they are now a free meal for the monster. Plus, they will get a bonus. He then asks if he forgot about his contract, leaving the warrior silent. Dibbo stands with his mouth open, recalling. Then he scratches his head, saying he wasn't thinking about that and still wants to get a bonus for everything. With a slight smile, the protagonist agrees to his demand. The guy then asks how they will manage since close range and long distance attacks didn't work, and he doesn't plan to risk his life for an impossible chance. He starts thinking of something, then looks at the protagonist and asks if there is a way to kill that thing. Soon we see a light coming from the portal. The operation leader realizes they are already coming out and wonders if that wasn't too fast for a 40-person portal. He asks the girl how it went and notes that some people are missing, especially the young delinquent, but the girl says everyone failed. She explains that one of the groups ended up being killed while our protagonist is still there with another guy serving as bait. Saying it's impossible to kill the boss of this place with just one group, leaving the old man in silence. And with anger, confusion remains in his gaze. The man then suggests they did nothing but run with their tails between their legs, but the girl says it was because the boss was the infamous poisonous mushroom of madness. As she yells that there was nothing they could do, the bearded man steps on his cigar. Then he turns around, telling them to go back, which confuses the young woman. She ends up saying that the protagonist group hasn't come out yet and the portal is still active, meaning they are alive. But the leader ends up saying it's just a matter of time since, as stated, the poisonous mushroom of madness is impossible to defeat. If they want to wait, they can, but the man doesn't have time. In his thoughts, the man curses them as useless, saying they had a lot of bad luck. After all, it's impossible for a two-circle mage to kill such a creature, and these mediocre adventurers are of no use to him. We then see the mushroom in the forest, and we see the leader's thoughts about wanting someone who can overcome any obstacle. What he desires is someone who turns the impossible into possible. Our protagonist, with seriousness, then says they will start the hunt, and then he fires his enormous fire arrow. This spell seems stronger than the previous one and travels at enormous speed in a straight line. This boss is faster and tougher than the others they faced before, and in this situation, it's better to keep distance and attack with strong power from afar. Our young man still can't reach this level with the power of the fire arrow, but it might be possible if he uses telekinesis to make the arrow spin at high speed. With the penetration, the power will likely increase drastically. This is something he developed for this world, inspired by a bullet, and it's a skill it is normally impossible to perform. He called this ability Natural Revolver, and with that, the bullet heads toward the mushroom, hitting it directly in the chest area. A piercing scream of surprise is heard from the creature. The arrow starts spinning forcefully in its chest, penetrating the strong body of that monster. The young man remains serious, observing the scene. We then see that the blow was so powerful it went through more than a dozen trees. But his goal was to hit the head along with the core, but it seems he missed. The mushroom hears someone saying it will be even more troublesome, and it roars in the direction from which the sound came, running madly to the location while a strange glow comes from above it. But the monster promptly dodges another revolver attack. Our protagonist thinks it is very difficult to use while moving, the biggest problem being the recharge time. And in the end, he needs to finish this before the monster climbs to his location. The creature dodges another of those explosions as we see someone behind the trees. The bloody monster then lets out a grunt of confusion. Our protagonist gives a shout, saying the time has come. Then Dido firmly grips a rope, pulling with all of his strength while letting out a scream. The rope is pulled to an extreme distance, creating an unexpected scenario for the creature, causing it to trip. It then falls into a mud puddle. The furious monster rises, realizing it has fallen into a swamp that hinders its movement. Our protagonist, supported by the breeze, just stares at the beast. With his pores covered, the monster can no longer release its gas and thus screams. Suddenly, someone shouts at the mushroom while throwing an axe at it, hitting the monster's head directly, making it bleed. Dido pulls his axe back using the rope he tied to it, then grips its handle firmly. The beast is confused by this while hearing someone say they can finally breathe. With that, the warrior calls for it to come closer, saying the air is quite fresh for them to have some fun. With that done, all the conditions were fulfilled in the end. The focus of this mission is to lure the monster into a swampy area, and this should ensure that its strongest weapon is neutralized. Soon the Axeman questions if he is angry for having covered up all the holes coming from his face, and thus, swinging his weapon, he says it's a pity, but only for the creature. With a single movement, his hands let go of the handle of that object all at once, thus holding the rope and hitting the creature from a great distance. The monster was still able to block, but it is visible that damage was still done to its body. Even so, the warrior does not give up and continues attacking persistently, while the creature can only scream and defend itself. Soon the beast ends up spotting an opening and thus dodges the axe all at once. Our protagonist thinks that he did not lure this monster here just to block the holes, since a muddy swamp is the worst place for fast monsters like this to move because of the water and mud. From the top of the cliff, our boy uses the revolver skill once again, thus firing a fire arrow that hits the mushroom's hand. It is seen that the strike is so powerful that it creates a new hole in the creature's limb. An explosion occurs all over the area, surprising the warrior at first sight. He then questions if the monster has finally been defeated and if they can rest. But upon seeing its silhouette, he says he thought too soon and believes this creature is extremely hard to bring down. The mage shouts to aim for its core, as it must be close to where the head is. With that, the warrior understands and launches his axe toward the monster in front of him. The mushroom beast watches it coming as if it can see with the faces atop the mushroom on its head, thus holding the axe that was coming to decapitate it at that moment. The man is confused by this, questioning how it can be possible, and then he is suddenly pulled by the overwhelming force of the giant in front of him. But our protagonist, quickly thinking of something, uses his ring skill, this being the movement of a wooden log that was nearby. The object strikes the creature's face while the ally holds onto one of its branches. The beast promptly tries to throw the object aside to grab the warrior all at once, but behind it, the man was already standing with a kick directed at it, thus hitting the shell of the enormous being, which screams in agony. Quickly, Debo ends up jumping onto another nearby tree while pulling his axe. With it in hand, the man changes his posture to something more serious, thus shooting at high speed toward the beast. It is visible that his movements are circling the enormous creature while it is confused about what happened. Our protagonist, with perfect synchronization, raises his hand using his ring skill once again, thus creating enormous water barriers that completely scare the monster trapped inside. The water is shot out to obscure the giant's vision once again, and the warrior's silhouette appears amid the water, ready to attack and finish the beast's life. But now, with the holes in its face completely clean, the monster finally senses his presence, thus advancing with its hand to strike him all at once. However, it is startled to realize there is nothing in front of it at that exact moment, because behind it, the warrior was already ready and thus delivers a strike with his axe. His gaze is skeptical and firm like that of a true assassin, and soon he completely severs the head of the creature that had taken so many lives. It can be seen that the upper part falls far from the lake at that moment. A rain made amid the swamp begins due to the enormous scale of the battle. It is visible that Debo is completely exhausted and breathing heavily, but soon he gives a thumbs up to our protagonist with a smile beneath his mask. The boy returns the gesture, feeling the wind on his back as he watches him. But then something causes his eyes to widen suddenly. It is the creature's body, which is still alive and charging at the warrior, thus striking him on the head and knocking him to the ground all at once. The axe ends up flying far away at that exact moment, as if the man had died. Thus it can be seen that even without the upper part, the creature continues to unleash screams of extreme fury and agony. Our boy questions how this is possible, since he is completely certain he blew up the creature's head where the core should have been. A shot can be seen fired again, hitting the water but completely missing the beast. Smoke begins to form all over the place, showing that the monster managed to dodge. With enormous agility, even in this muddy terrain, the body continues moving towards the protagonist. The boy moves his hands skillfully, wondering if he must have forgotten something. Quickly, the beast's support is lifted to unbalance it, but that only ends up helping, and the creature jumps towards the boy. The body does not have enough strength to even come close to its maximum height. However, it is now stuck to the cliff wall, ready to climb and reach the mage above. Our young hero knows he only has enough for one more fire arrow and that there won't be another chance, so he must shoot wisely. But suddenly someone rises all at once, shouting loudly at the sky. It is the warrior, his mask damaged along with his axe, saying he is getting more and more irritated. With a quick movement, he uses the explosive strike at that exact moment, thus charging toward the enormous beast trying to climb the cliff. The power is such that it splits half of the corpse in that situation. The legs fall into the swamp, showing that they do not contain the core. The warrior gets excited because he believes he has finally defeated the mushroom beast. But suddenly, the body without a head and without legs continues desperately climbing towards our boy. The warrior tries to warn his leader that it is extremely dangerous since he is almost out of mana. Thus, a shot is fired, which the creature skillfully dodges, revealing something in its chest. It is a strange slime that appears to be laughing at it all. It becomes clear that this is the true head of the mushroom monster that tormented them so much. Our boy is shocked by this, questioning if it is really true. Then he thanks it for revealing itself with such good faith. The warrior realizes he used a flare, meaning his last attack was a complete bluff. And so it is seen that the staff is already imbued with flames to fire a new shot. Thus the magic is cast with extreme precision, hitting the middle of the enormous creature that was partially dead. It is visible that its head begins to feel that anguishing pain and starts screaming in agony, but is soon silenced when the shot finally pierces completely through its body, eliminating it completely. Soon a huge explosion is seen while our boy strikes a pose in this situation. But suddenly, the torso ends up releasing a huge amount of poison coming toward the warrior. He screams that this beast is being a pain in the ass even to the very end. And suddenly, using the protagonist's ability, he pulls his companion up the cliff. The man thanks him, saying he thought he was going to die. It's clear that the enormous amount of poison is spreading through the entire forest, but not rising very high. When asked if it is finally over, our young hero calmly says yes, and he thanks his companion, saying he did a great job all the way to the end. They will retrieve the mana stone once the poison completely dissipates. But suddenly something catches his attention, causing his eyes to widen at that moment. It is the torso of the enormous creature that just jumped onto the cliff, still releasing poison. It is clearer than ever that the core is still there, meaning the creature's life continues, and it screams in agony and rage. It then releases a massive amount of poison at both of them all at once. The warrior, completely tense, can only laugh at that moment, feeling death approaching. Soon we see again both important men, where one is laughing and saying his companion came back empty-handed. Amid that laughter, he states that his temperament hasn't changed at all recently. The one with the eye patch apologizes, saying they should have let the knights handle the situation. Suddenly a knock is heard at the door, and the man says to go away and not disturb them. But the person ends up saying they are coming in anyway, immediately irritating everyone there. And then a look of astonishment is visible on the man's face as he watches him at that moment, because this is our protagonist who claims to have returned to them with a confident tone in his voice. It can be seen that the man who was sitting now has a huge smile on his face, saying that the boy is really interesting just as he had thought before. The one sitting in the chair questions what is happening there, as it looks like someone just came back from the grave or something like that. He then introduces himself as Rakan, saying it is a pleasure to meet El Palm and that his surface abilities are just as the rumors say. These are the kind of people they need in Gafor, making the young man thank him for the compliment. However, the dark-skinned man says he will only ask him one question. With a smile, he asks whether that ability could be shown again at a gate of 100 men. Our boy starts narrowing his eyes and stares for a long moment at that place. Then he closes his eyes, saying it would be extremely difficult in the end. Such a statement surprises the one sitting, leaving him in silence. Then his companion shouts that it's a bold way to speak to Mr. Heikan and says he's not the kind of adventurer who can simply pick and choose his missions, because the young man is still a slave who must fulfill his own debt in the end. However, the one sitting laughs, saying that it wouldn't be impossible after all. Then he says he doesn't like beating around the bush and thus says he will change his question. He then looks into the eyes of our protagonist and asks what his deepest desire would be for his services. We can then see some time later when Dibbo is already spitting out the golden liquid at that moment, thus questioning how 5 million meso could have been asked per person, which is a lot in the end. However, upon realizing he has splashed his boss, he immediately apologizes because he feels it was wrong. But then he says the boy is being very ambitious because they will surely give up on that offer. And the boy, wiping his face, says it's not a problem because they are the ones who will decide. The axe wielder says that acting so indifferently is really the protagonist's style, but he should be careful with his actions. Someone suddenly approaches, saying they seem to be pretty relaxed, unlike them who feel like death itself is knocking at their doors. Completely irritated, the warrior questions what he has to say to him, wondering if that's how they thank the people who saved them the other day. However, suddenly both present there simply bow and immediately apologize, thus saying that they judge them unfairly and therefore are ashamed as adventurers and wish to truly apologize. They then hand over a bag of money, saying this is the promised amount for the 30 people, and everyone added a little extra as thanks. However, the protagonist says they don't need that since the agreement was for 1.5 million for them. In the end, the boy only did the job he was paid to do, and therefore they can forget the thanks. And with a serious tone, he says they should not jump to conclusions again like they did at the previous portal. Thus, it is clear that both of them become tense with the heavy aura coming from El Palm. Realizing the situation, the warrior gets irritated, saying he got excited for nothing since now he'll have to count all the money and remove the bonus that was given. The boy calls out to the pirate, questioning if his name is really Iburo, thus saying that maybe he is not fit to do the work he is paid for. Then we can see elsewhere where someone is shouting that they can't do this. It's the one wearing the eye patch saying that 10 million is an exorbitant amount that pays 3rd and 4th cycle mages and adventurers. In the end, it is possible that the protagonist is just playing it safe, and it's better to call them there to decide on the payment terms. However, the man questions if he really thinks that way in the end, because it wouldn't be strange to ask for double that amount, thus confusing his companion even more. Quickly, he extends a paper ordering him to read its content immediately, thus saying they will be sending El Palm's group to represent the Gafor Merchant Union this time. Upon finishing reading the words, it can be seen that the man is trembling, questioning what this could mean, thus shouting that this can't be serious, to which it is said that the old man would be in trouble if it weren't true since he paid a great amount for this information. And it is revealed that the Dark Lord Jim is beginning to act, and it is clear that the companion is completely tense at this moment. With a pen in hand, Rakan orders Abyss not to deceive himself, because from now on the war is already being waged at this moment. Soon a field of trees bathed in sunlight can be seen, where a huge tree with a portal is extending while other people are camping around it. Several groups can be seen talking loosely and even friendly, and thus we can hear someone saying they didn't think they would accept these terms. This being our protagonist and his partner, who states that now he is already an experienced adventurer and therefore shouldn't get too excited. It can be seen that on their cloaks there is clearly an insignia representing the Guild of Gafor. Those around observe it with intrigue while whispering. Others prepare their weapons while staring at them with closed and even heavy looks. The warrior says that the atmosphere there is strange until someone states there are new faces around. This being a blonde man who says they must be the new people, saying it is a pleasure to meet them and introducing himself as Sheldon, an E-rank adventurer. Our protagonist promptly introduces himself as El Palm, someone from the guild's C-level. Startled, the man questions how this can be possible since he thought only 2 circle adventurers could enter through the gates due to restrictions. However, the young man remains silent at that moment, listening to the doubts of that adventurer. Someone ends up approaching, saying that this old man should give them some space. This being a blonde woman who says she has business to discuss with the person who just arrived. Clicking his tongue in irritation, the old man leaves, questioning whether those guys are really accompanying these people. It can be clearly seen that our protagonist maintains a skeptical look at that moment, where he remembers that in a conversation he questioned why he had to do this, to which he was told he should only do what was spoken because questions are unnecessary. And thus it is explained that the Gafor Merchant Union will be working with the Cygnus Might Order at this dungeon gate to achieve better results. They follow the teachings of the Empress of Cygnus, the strongest in the Night Order group, who also receives the title of Symbol of Power and has shown greater interest in this gate recently. The entry quota for the place had already been filled by the other unions, so they decided to work together, and even though they are still Knight trainees, the chance of success is very high. Although they may have hidden motives for coming to this gate, their offer was not bad, and therefore they will maintain friendly ties during the work. The protagonist understands this, saying it will not be a problem to make this cooperative, to which his boss says he does not think it will be easy, because something about them ends up having a strange smell to his adventurous senses. Thus, the blonde woman introduces herself as Kiri, saying she is the one leading the beginners of the Cygnus Order and hopes they won't mistake her for someone the same level. With an arrogant tone, she states that she does not want any extra problems because her orders must be followed in silence, causing Dibbo to get irritated by this attitude. Quickly, the woman asks if they are the only ones sent by the Merchant Union, to which it is answered that apparently yes. Annoyed, the blonde questions if they are really taking this seriously or if they think it's some kind of joke. Thus, someone can be seen approaching with heavy steps from there. This being the group of Krokos representing another union. At the side, the representatives of Kubels are clearly visible, present to challenge the portal. Debo is impressed by this because it is the elite of the respective merchant unions and the atmosphere there completely changes. Further away, someone else can be seen approaching, catching everyone's attention. These being the 3 Nadisha sisters representing the Goldrich Merchant Union. On their chests, the symbol of their union with that merchant order is clearly visible. The blonde promptly states that they are being very arrogant after all by arriving with such swagger. Quickly, someone tells everyone to pay attention, thus greeting them, saying they are the chosen ones to be the guards for this invasion and are there to support those coming out of the location. Although there are problems with the information, he will explain it once again as a reminder to stay alert. It is said that the legendary item that will come from this gate will not belong to any of them, even if the one who obtains it, but will belong solely to the merchant unions who will divide it. However, if any of them do something that is strictly forbidden, such as getting caught trying to steal any of the items from this place, they will have to deal with their group of adventurers categorized as rank B in the end. Soon, it can be observed that the man's arm has several circles different from our protagonists. And thus, Dibbo clearly realizes that those adventurers are extremely powerful by the number of marks on their arms, and thus he questions whether all of them have that exact amount of marks. It is then said that this concludes the warnings, and now everyone is free to enter. The woman says to follow her since she will lead the way from here, then speaking in a confident tone that they will be the victors in the end. The warrior questions what her problem is since she is being completely arrogant with people who will work by her side. However, our protagonist remains skeptical, saying that he finally made it, because all of his efforts were for this gate, as it is a place he couldn't experience in his past life, and now he must succeed. This is the beginning of everything in the end, and he asks his companion to follow him, who understands and promptly obeys. A clear red light begins to permeate throughout our vision, and thus we observe that one of the groups has just appeared, and the leader orders his people to start moving immediately. The warrior watches this, realizing that the grass at the site is really tall in the end. However, the knight questions if he thinks they are on a leisure walk and tells him to stop fooling around and just accompany the group. Dibbo, completely irritated, questions his boss if they are really going to accept this kind of treatment. But looking back, he notices his companion crouched down with his head strangely close to the ground. He promptly questions what is being done, while the boy tries to listen to the vibrations of the ground. And thus, several animal legs can be seen advancing in a certain direction at that moment. A man wonders what it could be because he thinks he heard something. But suddenly, a herd of ribboned pigs can be seen running towards them. In the end, there must be at least thousands of these creatures coming. The blonde woman promptly shouts that they must dodge because most of the groups have not yet arrived there, and thus affirms that it is a tactical rule not to attract danger to the entrance portal. Soon everyone starts running in different directions, saying they will ensure their own survival. All the groups split up at a crossroads while that enormous mass of creatures advances with extreme speed. The knights continue running while the monsters continue screaming and running in their directions. Thus, the blonde says they will lure them to a place with more obstacles and hunt them there. But it is said that there is a problem, because the people from the Gaffer Merchant Union are currently missing. Soon we can see the tall grass bathing the area while someone says it is refreshing. It's the warrior who can finally relax and says his boss did well to guess that the pigs were getting agitated. The boy states that it was only possible thanks to his experience because there are many herds that travel across these plains. It is explained to us that these monsters have a violent personality and usually attack in groups consisting of hundreds of thousands of them. Although they are difficult to deal with, they are not impossible to kill, and the people from the merchant group will be able to handle them, but they should conserve their energy. No one knows which monster they will fight at this portal, and it is possible that killing the pigs will not result in completing the portal. Before his return, the attack on this gate of 100 men was a complete failure, with all the adventurers who participated ending up having horrendous deaths. Quickly, Dibbo starts walking, questioning what his boss is doing and thinking about so much at that moment. But then his foot ends up passing over a rope, drawing his attention. Quickly, a sound can be heard from the place while the man widens his eyes. And quickly, his boss pulls him out of there, who screams asking what that could be, but soon realizes it is a type of trap that was placed there to eliminate him at that moment, and thus questions who in the world would do such a thing if not humans. Another place can be seen where someone is cutting ropes at that moment. Thus, a huge log flies toward a bald man who appeared distracted with something else. A sudden slash is made through the air with a defense, and it ends up cutting the trunk that was coming towards him to eliminate him. Thus, he states that all of this is very childish, and another of his companions says he just finished clearing the area, and that must have been the last one. A man approaches, telling Babel not to lower his guard in the end, and everyone that recognizes him as Crocus, their current leader. Although they may have dismantled some small traps, there is still the problem that these monsters have a high level of intelligence. Thus, it must be ogres they are dealing with who are difficult to handle because they have a strength equivalent to a final boss of a red portal. With that, they have an idea of what to expect and can be sure that the difficulty of this portal is high and everyone would be dead if there wasn't someone his level there. He then turns around saying they should make use of this situation to their advantage, promptly asking to be followed. But upon hearing something fall to the ground, he warns them to be careful not to leave anything behind. However, when he looks, he realizes it is the head of his companion that has just hit the ground. Suddenly, a massacre begins to form throughout the area, completely slaughtering that entire group that was there. Quickly, the one responsible for it appears, thus finishing off the local leader without giving him any chance to retaliate. The remains of the old man fall to the ground, questioning who could be capable of this. And then the man says that the one standing before him is a complete fool for acting as if he knew everything. Soon we can see another place where someone says that using ribbon pigs to distract the people entering the portal is really interesting. Not knowing whose idea it was, but it worked very well for them, and this is a good opportunity to start acting. The man promptly sighs, saying that this is extremely irritating in the end. And thus he stands up with his staff, saying that they can't do anything anymore since they are running out of time and will start soon. The three red-haired sisters can be seen paralyzed at that place as if they were statues. Their hands try to move to attack the person standing before them. However, the mage warns that it is no use trying to move since his magic will not allow it for the next 30 minutes. And one of the women with difficulty questions why he is doing all of this. Quickly, the older man is surprised because she is incredible for being able to speak even under the effect of his magic. Since she is the most dangerous there, it's better to get rid of her as quickly as possible. Seeing that scene, the other two begin to tremble and cry in fear because of it. However, the mage crouches down, saying that it's a very difficult question to answer, thus questioning himself why he is doing it. But quickly an idea lights up in his mind to solve that problem. Thus enchanting his staff with flames, he says it will be easier to understand if he does this. Then with an evil smile, he states that this is for his master, the Dark Mage. The fire arrow spell is promptly used toward the sisters who are paralyzed, and thus it can be clearly seen that their lives were suddenly taken by that extremely brutal blow. The corpses fall to the ground while the ketchup flies through the air at that moment. Quickly the man hears someone else entering the portal and sighs that this never ends. All he ever wanted was just to be able to rest peacefully at any moment in this situation. We quickly see a scene from the past where a man calls in by the name William and he responds to his lord. It is said that they have remained in the shadows for a long time, hiding from them, growing their power and spreading their image across all corners of the globe. Finally, it is time to reap the fruits of their efforts and thus overcome the humans. The tired man says he will not disappoint him no matter what happens. And thus the old man extends a feather of fire, saying that it is a gift given by that person and therefore will not tolerate any kind of failure. The old man becomes tense at that moment because it's not as if he could half-heartedly do anything after what was done to him. Quickly he strikes his staff on the ground, saying he has no choice in the end, and thus questions whether he should take this a little more seriously than the last times he committed such acts. Soon we can see that night has finally fallen, where a fortress is illuminated amid the darkness of night. The creature is panting from extreme exhaustion and drooling at that moment, and thus we can observe that they are ogres present in multiple numbers at that location. In the distance, our protagonist alongside his companion observes the scene confused, and thus Dibbo questions what this could be in the end as he begins to internally panic. He then whispers, questioning if all these monsters are boss level, to which it is said that only one of them is the true leader in the end. All of them have high resistance and are naturally strong, and just facing one is already risky enough, and apparently they are stealing items. Since some adventurers' weapons allow the wielder to use abilities, this will become a problem during the battles to come. Quickly, the warrior questions what they will be able to do since this amounts to an entire army facing the two of them at once, and if the blonde were there, it would help more. Our protagonist is surprised that he now wishes for the woman's help, to which it is said that at least their chances would increase if they had one extra companion. Sometime later, a small patrol can be seen walking around the fort in an orderly fashion. The wind is blowing strongly as if it is not another dimension but rather a flora and a completely unique place in the world. Soon someone can be heard approaching, drawing the ogre's attention as it turns in that direction. Dibbo tries to attack it with his axe, which the creature quickly dodges, surprising him. The man shouts, saying he is sure the protagonist did it on purpose because he said he would never want to face this thing alone. It's clear that the monster is preparing a strike and then launches it towards the warrior. But quickly and smartly, he uses his axe to strike the ground. And with this initial impulse, he is able to perform an acrobatic move to dodge that heavy blow. Quickly landing on the ground, the warrior remains tense at that moment, and thus a long fight between them can be seen, where the axe-wielding man manages to dodge all the strikes being thrown by the ogre. Using the handle of his axe, the man quickly strikes back at the huge creature in front of him. And then, taking advantage of the rebound, he uses the blade to cut off one of the limbs of the green monster that is his current enemy. The beast promptly tries to advance but is quickly stopped by the warrior, who dodges its blow, causing it to fall to the ground. The axe starts to be enveloped by the very life energy of the berserker, who is about to finish his enemy off while shouting that he wants its soul to go to hell. However, the young man did not foresee that the creature would be able to dodge the blow all at once, thus confusing him. Sliding across the ground, the ogre prepares a strike with its fist to launch against the airborne human, thus delivering a powerful attack against the protagonist's companion, who takes the heavy blow, and is thrown against a nearby tree, revealing that he managed to block it with his axe. However, with an expression of extreme fury, he questions why his opponent won't die no matter what and continues fighting with such ferocity. But completely insane, the ogre continues advancing with extremely heavy roars of rage, and thus strikes the tree since the warrior managed to dodge by throwing himself to the ground at that moment. Quickly, he manages to plant his foot firmly on the ground, stabilizing his stance to avoid falling with what is about to come. Then he uses an explosive attack to cut off one of the creature's main weapons. However, he did not foresee that the monster, with its other hand, would grab his head and squeeze it, causing him to groan in pain. With extreme strength and brutality, the creature begins slamming his body repeatedly against the ground. But with extreme cleverness, Dibbo manages to lock his legs around the arm holding him, and thus applies an arm lock to cause extreme pain to that extremely powerful monster. The orc throws him away out of fear of losing another limb in this battle. However, without giving space, the warrior promptly jumps towards his opponent to try to finish him off. And it can be seen that this clash, which had dragged on for so long, finally seems to be reaching its climax. Soon the night is howling after a few hours have passed. We can observe that one of the creatures is already lying against the ground at that moment. Debo, still injured, says he thought his companion would intervene to help him. However, our protagonist states that it seemed to him his friend would be able to handle it, and now he knows they are not impossible to kill, thus irritating the other. But the one with darker skin suddenly widens his eyes upon seeing something that scares him. It is a bunch of corpses lying before him, making him question what all this is, because they are the Cygnus Knights who were sent along with them, and thus they suspect this could have been the work of the orcs. However, someone ends up groaning in pain while their teeth are stained with ketchup due to an injury. The warrior promptly asks his boss to look ahead, which our protagonist does silently at that moment, soon noticing that it is a survivor of the massive massacre that occurred at this place. And thus he approaches, questioning what happened there since they seem to have been attacked by ogres that live within the portal. However, the light-haired survivor says it's not like that because the one responsible for it was actually an assassin. We see Abbas sitting in his chair in the middle of the night while smoking a cigarette, and thus looking up he realizes that none of it seems to make any sense in his mind. Since assassins are people who can enter certain portals that others cannot to gather information and kill other adventurers. However, this time it's just a fight with no winner, and since they would need to overcome the portal, it doesn't make sense to take such risks, as someone could easily flee from there. The adventurers are the elite of the merchant unions, and even if a third union were involved, there would be no profit for the assassins to come to this place. Quickly, the warrior questions his boss if that is really what it seems, to which he replies yes without any doubt, since it's been a long time since he saw that blonde-haired girl among those corpses. And thus the severely wounded man punches the ground, cursing at the skies at that moment, because it's all his fault as the world didn't think there would be a traitor among them, and he questions why Lady Kiri would have committed such an act. Our protagonist hears everything, saying he doesn't understand since there's no reason for her to be one of the assassins sent to this place. To which the other replies that he doesn't know either, as it's still hard to process, but all the attacks seem to be part of her orders. And before ending things at that place, she said one last thing that was the most important, that she was a follower of the Dark Mage. Debo was startled by this, questioning whether it could really be possible for someone like that to be there. It is explained that this being existed 800 years ago as a transcendent who threatened the entire world with his followers. To stop him, the 6 heroes took command, and the battle turned entirely against the sorcerer until all of them ended up being sealed at once. With the Dark Mage's army in chaos, the allied forces began to advance, thus eliminating all the followers of that nefarious being. Any citizen of Maple would know this, and thus Dibbo says there's no way this could be true, as he still doesn't want to believe it. However, our protagonist thinks that now is not the time to worry about others, and thus they will go after her. He then questions whether the wounded man will go with them, since he must be prepared to fight her when they find her. And with extreme determination, this man says is exactly what he wants in the end because he feels the desire to avenge his companions. We can observe someone running at that exact moment with extremely light steps. It is the Nigus, who is fleeing from something that left her completely tense. However, something ahead catches her attention, making her stop immediately. And a man in front of her welcomes her, saying he had been waiting for her at that exact moment, thus calling her Lady Kiri along with her assassin companion in that poorly lit place. With laughter, he states that she handled the ribbon pigs and even managed to make their plan flow without any problems, and thus questions whether she received the gift that was sent to her, leaving the woman in total silence in that situation. Quickly, with her sword in hand, she questions who these men are, making her waste for time like this. Elsewhere, Debo states that they can go a little slower since the boss is going ahead anyway, but the man insists he is fine. Thus, the warrior reassures him by saying that his chief is extremely skilled when it comes to finding things, and therefore they are certain they will find it. The man, secretly holding a dagger, claims it is great news after all, imbuing it with his dark mana at that moment. Soon after, we can see the morning sun finally rising over that troubled place. A person is running at this very moment, heading towards their opponent. It is the knight, who is attacking one of the assassins, who is defending against one of her strikes. The mage says it is incredible, as it was expected from the captain of the Cygnus Knights. However, he wonders how long she will manage to endure until her death finally approaches. With an extremely firm step, the woman begins to emanate a golden aura at that moment. She then uses a martial stance called Rising Sun. One of the assassins charges forward, saying it is time for her to die right now so that she can complete her work. However, the blonde is able to block the strike, and with her blade in motion, advances towards her attacker at that moment. The woman even tries to beg for mercy and to wait, pleading for her miserable soul. But the blonde already uses a solar strike at that moment to completely eliminate the filthy assassin standing in her way. We can see her breathing is heavy, and she is currently tired due to the time spent. Still standing firm, she demands that they reveal their purpose if they don't want to die immediately right there. But the mage complains that it is all very annoying, as his companions must hurry and kill her immediately. Thus, they all charge at the woman at once, shouting for her to die already. However, a shadow suddenly jumps out of the forest, surprising everyone. This newcomer easily eliminates all those present with a single powerful blow of his heavy weapon. Even the mage is startled by it, as it was something completely unexpected since he believed all the others were dead. But the blonde is even more surprised, feeling her heart beat faster with hope as she recognizes that figure. It is the warrior, companion of our protagonist, who observes her with extreme sharpness in his eyes. We are then shown a scene from the past where the man is confident that they will find her very soon. The wounded one says that it is all great as he channels his aura into the dagger in his hand. He then grabs Debo's neck, ordering him to send his regards to Lady Kiri when he meets her in the Kingdom of Hell. However, a sudden flame attack causes his hand to be completely severed without warning. With a scream of pain, the knight falls to the ground while the warrior is extremely confused, not understanding what just happened. But our protagonist looks at him skeptically and listens to the desperate cries and barks of that assassin dog in front of him. The dark-skinned man calls for his boss, questioning what is happening as it is still difficult to comprehend. However, the protagonist states that everything went just as he suspected in the end, because that really was a very lame lie they had been told after all. He then says he is sorry to tell the assassin, but there is something he should know about him. Our protagonist does not have the habit of trusting someone so blindly despite appearances. We then return to the current battlefield where the mage admits that everything is strange in the end. The idea that an uninvited guest would appear had never even crossed his mind. A woman tries to tell Mr. William that he is from the Gaper Merchant Union, and their survival means only one thing. It means that the cowardly rat who could not end his own suffering ended up being killed by them, and that a mistake was made. Nevertheless, he sighs and admits it is irritating after all, as the two seem extremely strong at that moment. Therefore, it is time for the elite to enter the battle and start playing with them. The blonde tries to shout to be careful with those people, but the warrior says he knows it very well. He then claims that they are extreme perverts, surprising the girl who does not understand the joke. Quickly, the mage extends his arm, saying they will finish this quickly while his allies charge toward the warriors. The man asks her to at least take care of one of them while he gets rid of the rest, warning her not to lower her guard. Quickly, one of them uses a strike called Savagery, forcing Debo to dodge to the side. He then uses the momentum to perform a lateral cut that forces the already familiar man to crouch at that moment. With a completely confident smile, the warrior states that this man is about to have an utterly painful death. However, he is interrupted by a piercing ability shot towards his head, which he manages to dodge while questioning what this threat to his life could be. We can then see an archer aiming at him at that very moment, looking tense as well. Debo, surprised on the battlefield, fails to notice the attack coming from behind as he curses at all of them at once. When he glances over his shoulder, he sees the glow of magic coming toward him at that moment. An attack called Superior Charge is then fired, cutting his back and causing extreme pain to the warrior. However, it is easily noticed that it was not deep enough, causing the assassin to curse internally, as this was supposed to be his trump card. He then starts laughing, saying there's no need to worry because he will end his misery right at that moment. Another extremely powerful strike is launched towards Debo, who is standing still at that moment. The woman tries to tell the idiot to start moving since he seems to be underestimating the situation. However, the assassin's blade ends up striking the ground, not realizing that the warrior's presence is already behind him with extreme violence. Debo then tells him to stop shouting because he had been just playing with him the whole time. Immediately afterward, he performs a lateral cut, completely slicing through the man standing in front of him in a single move. Another one tries to charge forward, cursing the warrior while wielding his spear. But the man dodges these attacks with extreme agility and without any apparent difficulty. He then uses an explosive cut to strike the man, who manages to dodge but ends up having his spear cut in the process. Debo manages to reposition himself and maintains a firm stance until the end, as he is very experienced with that. The assassin then questions how he can be so strong after all, since it makes no sense for someone from a circle to be like that. However, someone ends up saying it's extremely disappointing while tossing a body toward that man. We can see that the apparent corpse is actually still alive, even groaning in pain as his face scrapes across the dirt floor. The knight, with her leg raised, then questions if that mage really dares to call these useless guys the elite after all. Completely irritated, the spearman claims that they are the most powerful force of assassins and that they won't accept that kind of insult. However, the man says he will have to intervene from here on because the situation is already getting ugly. He states that this is the furthest they will go since they wasted too much time dueling against incompetent allies. The warrior quickly realizes that a fire arrow is about to be fired at him at that moment. It becomes clear that the arrow is heading toward him, making him freeze. Upon noticing it, he realizes it's much faster than his boss at arrows, who was already considered a monster. It can clearly be seen that an explosion forms in that place, apparently due to the attack. The mage smiles, saying he must have lowered his guard because of the spell, and comments that this ability is on a completely different level. However, he says that it couldn't even be dodged in the end, smiling as he claims it's over, and that they will soon destroy the portal to finally leave. But something makes his eyes widen suddenly because it was strange. Our protagonist appears amidst the flames, completely unscathed at that moment. He shows his extreme determination in his beautiful and serious eyes in such a challenging situation. The mage questions who the hell this guy is and how he managed to survive his most powerful attack. However, our protagonist points forward using his gravity and telekinesis ability. He says that they will leave that matter for later since there are other guests waiting to be welcomed. We can then clearly see a chief of the ribbon pigs approaching the assassins to pursue the one being led by our protagonist. Both are startled by it because it is exactly the strategy they had used earlier, but now it is being turned against them. It can be clearly seen that the massive herd is charging wildly toward them to devour them. A few hours finally pass where we can see the creature screaming while its teeth are breaking. After so much damage suffered, it eventually falls to the ground, finally being defeated at that moment. The mage, completely exhausted, says that thing gave them more trouble than he thought, and they managed to escape by throwing it on top of them. He then calls for his companion, who immediately apologizes. It is revealed that he is finishing off the other creatures present at that place by his side. However, the mage says there is no time to regroup, so they will just proceed, and the others understand the order. If the protagonist group somehow manages to get out of the portal, then the situation will become a major headache for their entire organization. But there is something about him that ends up sparking the mage's curiosity, and he states that he will take care of that man in the cloak personally. The warrior says there is no need because that person didn't seem like just any fool, which annoys his boss, who says he doesn't need that concern. After all, in that portal, there is no one as strong as himself at that moment. Soon we can see another part of the forest where someone is walking with heavy steps. It is the protagonist's group, and Debo says that the scene was very funny because he doesn't think they will survive the attacks from the pigs. He then smiles brightly, saying he is keeping a close watch on the surroundings, and asks why the protagonist didn't finish off the others. However, the answer surprises him because the boy states that the man was much stronger than himself. In his mind, he recalls that scene once again, especially the fire arrow, since it was flying at a terrifying speed toward the warrior. However, our protagonist promptly used the same spell to fire an arrow. Both ended up colliding at that moment, causing an explosion that knocked his companion backward. His gaze remained firm as he held the staff in his hand after firing that arrow. However, that attack was not enough to dissipate the strike that continued advancing even after the protagonist's spell. It can be clearly seen that he widened his eyes in shock in that situation, because his magic barely managed to alter the trajectory and didn't even affect the mana of the attack coming toward his friend. The warrior, smiling, says he must be joking because no one could be stronger than his boss currently. However, the protagonist states that he would never joke in such a situation, which irritates the other by realizing that they really did flee. But soon our protagonist begins to untie the leather from his forearm, drawing the other's attention. He reveals that the circle has grown to its limit and questions why that happened. It is explained that depending on its thickness, even using the same type of magic will result in differences in speed and power. However, that mage is difficult to understand because he was able to enter the place, meaning he is a second circle just like the protagonist. And something ended up strengthening him, making it fair to say that he is the strongest adventurer in that portal currently, leaving Dibbo scared and the blonde silent. They question what they should do since they have no idea what enemies they will face, and it is said that ogres are a great example to use against humans. However, someone says he is not understanding the situation they are currently in. The most important thing is that one of the Black Mage's followers hid among the Cygnus Knights, and that is information that must be delivered immediately. Therefore, they should head outside as quickly as possible. With a trembling hand, he says that the boy should give up trying to clear the portal. But the young man promptly says that would be useless in the end, catching Dibbo's attention. The blonde says he used to be a slave, as expected, but continuing to chase a small completion reward is futile. Our protagonist says that nothing will happen after warning the people outside since she really seems to believe they can handle those guys. These followers have been hiding for hundreds of years and have taken root, becoming parasites that will consume the kingdom of Maple, where no one will be able to see them. Such a statement completely enrages the woman, who grits her teeth at that very moment, having just heard something absurd. She screams that the young man is very pessimistic and asks what he expects them to do since the situation is desperate, because everything being said is nonsense thrown around without any plan, and they are being hunted and need to get out of there as quickly as possible. However, the boy gives a confident smile, saying they should let them know first, since the real prey are approaching the hunters, thinking they have a chance on their natural terrain. And so a few hours later, we can see the wind blowing through the forest at that moment. Someone ends up stomping heavily on the ground while running at high speed in a certain direction. It is one of the assassins who is searching for our protagonist after all the confusion. He shouts that they need to find them as quickly as possible because if they escape the portal, their necks will be cut off. But suddenly, someone appears behind him, catching his attention. With a confident smile, Debo greets this veteran standing before him. He immediately swings his axe, but the target manages to dodge by crouching down. The one wielding a spear says it's all stupidity because he will make sure to kill him this time. But someone from the other side ends up cutting a rope at that very moment. A huge tree trunk then strikes the spine of the man who is trying to charge at the warrior. The responsible one is the blonde who just sighs irritably because she can't believe it's actually working. Completely irritated, Duel raises his axe, saying that his opponent must not get distracted in the middle of a fight against such a strong enemy. And as he strikes, the man manages to dodge and uses his posture to lunge with his dagger at the warrior's neck. However, Duel was able to dodge with extreme agility, receiving only a small cut on his face. The blonde man promptly questions how that is possible, while something heavy flies toward his face at that moment. It is the warrior's leg, as he now engages in hand-to-hand combat against the blonde. He drops his axe, preparing to tenderize the flesh in front of him. We can see that a true beating is beginning at that moment, as the warrior is giving no openings for the man to fight back. His strikes are extremely brutal, and his vision is sharper than ever because he knows this is an enemy he cannot give a chance to. We see that the punches are so powerful, they even cause cuts on the man's face, who can only scream in pain. In the distance, we see the girl holding a bow and arrow while watching the scene. She questions what is happening and doesn't notice a killer presence coming from behind her. By instinct, she is able to dodge the strike that was coming down at her all at once. We can see that the knight continues advancing with extreme dexterity while the woman keeps trying to dodge the successful strikes. However, the blonde gathers all of her aura into her golden sword at that very moment. The archer is forced to use her own crossbow to block the attack, but the knight says she shouldn't look away in a situation like this since her fuse is already very short because of everything happening there. We are then shown a quieter place where the wind is blowing, foreboding something. The mage arrives saying that it seems they have started, but there is one person who piques his curiosity. He then questions the protagonist if they had been waiting for them all along. However, the boy remains silent at that moment, holding his staff while staring at the man. Quickly, both weapons begin to emit a mystical fire at that moment as they announce they will begin. The two finally energize their fire arrows to duel in this final clash. We see that both projectiles collide and the one from the assassin manages to prevail once again. Our protagonist runs to the side, successfully dodging it and avoiding being hit. His gaze remains firm as he tries to devise his strategy in his mind at that very moment. He then uses his fire arrow once again to fire a strike at his opponent. With widened eyes, the man admits that the protagonist is truly incredible after all. We then see that a huge explosion occurred at that moment. The boy covers his face with his forearm to avoid the dust getting into his eyes. Thus, only a cloud of smoke can be seen at that moment. However, this reveals a strike coming directly toward his head, startling him. He manages to dodge and notices it is not a spell but a rock thrown at him as a distraction. From behind, the black mage questions if that is all he has to offer during this battle. He then quickly fires a fire arrow at him to try and eliminate him once and for all. We can see that some time has already passed and the forest is engulfed by crimson flames. Within it, there is a figure recognized by us at that moment, and our protagonist also stares at it, still intact but remaining skeptical and firm against such an enemy. The mage states that he managed to avoid that with extreme mastery. He says it was completely unexpected because he wasn't sure he would be able to block that strike. He then asks how he managed to do it, receiving only silence from the protagonist. The man understands that the other is the type who doesn't talk much and says it is a good trait after all, as chattering during battle can be harmful. He then fires another fire arrow, saying he will find out for himself how he was able to do it. Our boy watches it firmly as it approaches him. He then uses his invented signature skill called Revolver at that moment. The other becomes completely shocked, his eyes wide as he questions how that could be possible. Because he is using telekinesis to spin the fire arrow, making it look like a drill piercing through his magic. This is something he has never seen in all these years of assassinating people. We then see a huge explosion occurring at that place from the clash of powers. That scene is completely unbelievable because strengthening a skill with telekinesis is something only one kind of person can be titled. Thus, he names the protagonist a true genius at that moment. With a smile, he says it is exactly this kind of title that makes him hate these people even more. He then fires another fire arrow, saying they are going to have some more fun and asks him to show even more of what he can do. Our boy promptly extends his fist forward using the ability of his ring. Thus, he forms a stone wall to hide his location while the projectile approaches. He throws himself to the side as the shot pierces through his protection, revealing his position. The mage says he is doing something very reckless because hiding is not the best thing to do in a battle. However, the boy again extends his palm toward the black mage, who notices it coming. He realizes it is better to duck because a fire arrow is being redirected at him. Our protagonist quickly moves his hand once more. Thus, guiding the attack, we can see the spell loses no strength, and now the man is having trouble moving. With extreme agility for a mage, he maneuvers among the attacks, completely avoiding being hit. The veins on his forehead start to bulge at that moment due to the extreme rage he is feeling. He then fires a fire arrow, saying he has grown tired of playing with our protagonist all this time. The boy watches it coming while keeping calm in his gaze. He uses Revolver once again to counterattack the strike. Another huge explosion occurs, making our protagonist shield himself with his forearm. However, this was exactly what his opponent wanted in the end. He then says that the boy must have used up all his charges while his ring glows green. He immediately uses the poison breath skill against the boy to eliminate him. We then see the young man's gaze as the smoke rapidly approaches him. The proportion of this simple object expand across the entire place at once, leaving no apparent space for our boy to escape. We can see the wind already stirring amidst that green smoke that was fired. The man states that this is a very useful skill, but that it leaves many openings while invoking it. He imagines he could seal his attacks by forcing his fire arrows into cooldown. Now the boy will not be able to do anything for the next 30 minutes from that point on. His abilities are also inactive at this moment, and thus he will have to beg for forgiveness by using his dagger. But this ends up being his favorite part, and he can't wait any longer, jumping with excitement. He wonders what the look of despair on our protagonist's face will be when he is finished off by his blade. However, surprisingly, the boy simply manages to move toward that difficult opponent. His hand is clenched with all his strength, and we realize he hasn't only increased his intelligence but also the strength of his body. The assassin mage is astonished by this, unable to understand, and becomes paralyzed for a moment. A moment that is seized by our boy, who proves that you can't be a mage if you can't hold your own in close combat. His strike is extremely brutal, knocking out teeth and sinking the face of that nefarious assassin with pure brute force. Thus, we see the face of our boy not at all paralyzed, just continuing forward with determination. We soon observe the assassin's body being thrown backward without any apparent chance of retaliation. We see a flashback where the pirate asks how he managed to do that, because he doesn't understand how they defeated the poisonous mushroom and says he will pay if the boy tells him. The warrior laughs, saying it will be useless, even if he says it, because it's not something you can do just because you want to. Our boy used an ability called Room, where he uses his telekinesis to pull all the poison from the area and expel it in another direction. All of this makes the man believe it's a huge trick by our protagonist, and Debo laughs, saying that's exactly what he always says, because the abilities of his boss are already complete cheating, since it would even be impossible to beat him in close combat. And the mage is experiencing this right now, beginning to salivate while trying to use his poison once more. However, the boy promptly shuts his mouth with a precise hook to the jaw, completely silencing the assassin. Without giving any chance, his hand immediately prepares another heavy strike aimed at his opponent. He delivers 3 quick punches to the abdomen of that weird and ugly man. The force is so great that it sends him crashing into a tree with extreme force, almost knocking it over. Quickly, our boy's staff begins to float at very moment thanks to telekinesis. It flies into his hand, which grabs it with extreme firmness. He then positions himself to perform his signature fire arrow spell. The wounded assassin mage can only look upward at that moment, feeling the pain. Then he widens his eyes, realizing something is terribly wrong from his perspective. We see that the strike was so powerful that it uprooted the tree and even severed one of the assassin's limbs. But as the arm falls to the ground, we realize that this is not the end of the black mage after all, because he is still trembling with rage and resentment while his green ring continues glowing at full intensity. He once again launches his poison toward the protagonist, saying he cannot lose to someone like him after all this time. But the young man is smart enough to raise his hand forward, using his own magical artifact. He uses telekinesis to invoke Rune once again and prevent the poison from affecting him in the end. The boy thinks he is trying to be deceived because the mage acts like a lunatic, but he must be plotting something to catch him off guard. Since the poison breath didn't work, a mage must be planning to grab his staff back, and he will wait for that moment. That will be the moment when he can finish him off, not realizing that a giant fireball is silently approaching his back. That attack strikes his back, causing him to feel a sudden, agonizing pain and pushing him away. We then see his terrified and confused expression because he doesn't understand how something could have been done without a staff. We see the assassin with his hand extended, laughing wickedly alongside a circle beside him. The one responsible was his bracelet, and amidst his laughter, the man curses our protagonist, saying he will break him into thousands of pieces as punishment. Thus, we observe the scene of the boy lying on the ground after that extremely powerful strike. His mouth ends up spitting ketchup because of the immense damage he suffered from that last attack. And so he states that he lowered his guard at the wrong moment, which is considered a mistake for someone of his experience, since he didn't expect that he had a flame orb as a trump card, and his former self would not have made that mistake in his past life. As the fireballs approach, we can see that the boy really ended up losing his touch as an adventurer after all. We are then taken far from that explosion, where the warrior stands with his hand bloodied after defeating his enemy in front of him. He becomes completely tense and calls for his boss, confused about what just happened, while his enemy is unconscious and groaning in pain from the blows. We can quickly see a flash of light being unleashed near Debo at that very moment. It is the knight who has just eliminated the 2 assassins she was fighting, mainly the one who used a spear and the unbearable archer. The blonde tells him to stop fooling around and finish it because the opponent is far too strong for our protagonist to handle alone. We quickly hear the sound of something bursting, that being the eye of the man pierced by an arrow, once again frightening the warrior. Then the sound of green, demonic creatures' footsteps is heard approaching all at once. They are the ogres who have just arrived with their weapons and ready army. The man tries to say that they would show up sooner or later, and the woman tries to convince him to leave as fast as possible, but warns him not to underestimate the enemy. Because this time, besides being very strong, they also possess something that is completely setting off all their instincts in the end. That being a strange one among them who appears to be the chief, staring at them with an extremely violent and bloodthirsty gaze. The mage looks at the flames in front of him, wondering if that bastard is finally dead after all. We can see that his magic circles are advancing along his skin, clearly showing his body's wear and tear and making him vomit what he ate earlier. He ends up throwing up a huge amount of ketchup there on the ground due to the extreme damage he suffered from our protagonist and the spells he used. However, he acknowledges that it wasn't bad since it was impossible to think it would reach this point, and he should have even asked his name before killing him. But the flames end up responding to him, revealing the name El Palm. Terrified, the mage questions how that could be possible since he was sure he had eliminated the protagonist at that exact moment. The boy emerges from within the smoke, saying that an assassin mage should engrave this well into his mind, because this will be the last name he will ever hear for the rest of his miserable life, which will end today. The man laughs, saying that he looks like a cockroach, and that bluffing is useless, since with his abilities he won't be able to hit him. The boy admits that it is almost impossible to hit him with only 2 circles in his body. The old man is quickly surprised that he possesses a mana stone with him, but then bursts into laughter at the situation. Amidst his laughter, he says that the boy is a lunatic because that last hope is nothing but a delusion. After all, just absorbing a mana stone won't be enough to evolve, since knowledge through countless experiences is needed. The boy quickly starts to demonstrate an overwhelming aura, saying that it is true after all, thus surprising the man, who becomes confused because he can't tell if he's serious or joking in that situation. We can then see the 3rd circle already forming on our protagonist's arm to increase his strength. The boy affirms that there's no need to worry because he already has more than enough of those 2 things to evolve. The mage prepares his staff, saying that this is a dirty trick, and launches his fire arrows, commanding him to die. The attacks fly toward our protagonist, who is completely wounded at that moment. He faces them with extreme determination visible in his empty eyes. He then uses the same ability to counter the strike of the man who is trying to kill him. We can see that his spell is so well crafted that it even manages to surpass that of the miserable man who is about to die. However, the man does not want to give up his life, and thus uses the flame orb to try to survive that fire arrow. But our protagonist, still with his hand raised, uses the telekinesis ring once again to perform a familiar feat. This is the revolver that involves spinning the flame arrow until it becomes a drill capable of piercing anything. The completely red gaze of that desperate old man can only widen as the sweet embrace of death approaches him. And so he watches that fire spell approaching to put an end to his life as a killer who lived miserably all this time. However, even then he doesn't miss the chance to keep screaming and pouring out all this hatred at that very moment of defeat. Soon the name of our protagonist is pronounced as the powerful spell finishes his life all at once, thus ending his speech with the last name he heard. We can see that the flames are burning amidst the forest, which probably won't spread for very long. The boy keeps his breathing heavy and observes what lies ahead with a serious tone at that moment. And then he sighs, seeing the body of his adversary completely charred in front of him. He then says he forgot to ask the name of the man who caused him so much damage at the beginning of his new life. We can see some time later where a foot of the enormous creature is stepping onto the grass at that moment. All the monsters are searching the area while the blonde and the warrior hide behind a tree at that moment. And so the knight thinks that things are getting increasingly complicated for her side at that moment. We can see the past where the man was having fun using his axe in that situation, thus eliminating dozens at once with fluid movements along with extremely powerful attacks. The knight observes this, saying that he even looks like some kind of monster while taking care of those nefarious creatures. With a smile, Dibbo ends up saying that it's very easy after all, since he can see all the movement patterns made so far. One of the ogres quickly prepares to attack him, using his heavy fist against him. However, the man is able to dodge quite easily by making certain jumps among the trees at that moment, and thus he jumps onto the orc, saying that it will be number 18 in his death collection from this battle. But a gigantic fireball ends up appearing and hitting him, thus preventing the death of that monster. We can see a huge explosion happening, thus demonstrating the immense power used to manage to contain the warrior. The one responsible for this was clearly the monster chief, who is currently laughing while the scar over his eye glows a deep reddish color. The blonde observes this, realizing something that completely terrifies her, for it is the orbital flame, something a monster should not normally be able to use. In the end, such an item is something unexpected during this difficult battle, which makes everything even harder. And so she thinks that she has no choice but to stay hidden until El Palm returns, hoping that he is still alive. The creature trying to capture her fails in its mission as she moves with extreme agility while carrying the man with her. We can see that all the warriors are trying to reach her in vain as she feels the exhaustion of the battle and her breathing becomes heavy. One of the monsters gets in front of her to attack with an axe and end her life at that moment. Noticing this, the girl grabs with all her strength the wrist of her companion who is on her back, thus throwing him upwards while eliminating the monster that was coming at them. Catching him again, she thinks that this guy and the other one are a great help and therefore she cannot let them die, still believing she can handle whatever comes. However, something makes her eyes widen immediately as fear becomes visible. After all, a huge fireball was launched right in front of her, ultimately preventing her from moving forward. The responsible one was the leader, who laughs at that moment while she thinks she cannot face him. Thus, she starts running from another of those spells that is coming her way to incinerate her. We can see that the fireball is extremely fast and is already close enough to singe the tips of her hair. Soon a huge explosion occurs, indicating that the attack ended up hitting. Realizing this, the orc chief starts laughing because he believes he managed to eliminate his biggest obstacle. However, he remains confused upon seeing two figures still standing amidst the smoke. Among them is our berserk, who is standing and is finally awake. The blonde notices this and questions how it can be possible. However, at that moment, the man seems to be in a trance, and we can see the wind blowing through his hair. He quickly advances toward his opponent while his focus is at its peak. The leader extends his hand forward and shouts, commanding all his soldiers to charge at this single human. However, Dibbo is fast enough to take them down at an insane speed. One of them even tries to catch him off guard to satisfy his master. However, the berserk is able to dodge it with an extremely agile movement while throwing his axe and eliminating him. Realizing this, the leader is shocked and can feel the tension starting to course through his blood. Thus, he extends his staff forward, letting out a scream as he launches another explosion. The blonde observes this completely incredulous, as it is an unbelievable scene, because that single human, after all, is only at the first circle, which is something completely inconceivable. And so we can see that Dibbo is in an extreme battle frenzy to advance against the monster. His axe approaches the core of the creature's body at extreme speed. However, the creature managed to make a daring move by using a point-blank fireball at that moment. Soon we can see the man falling into the blonde's arms at that moment. With a broken jaw, the orc can only grunt in pain due to the damage. His entire body is trembling, indicating the clear fear that this single human caused, along with the feeling of imminent death. His forehead starts to bulge with veins due to the growing irritation he feels, and thus he raises his staff, letting out a scream as he summons a fireball above himself. The blonde steps forward, saying he must retreat because she will take care of things from there. We can see the green being attacking with all its hatred to eliminate both in front of it. However, something ends up appearing amidst a telekinetic aura. This is the ability of our protagonist, which completely pierces that extremely powerful spell. The Arch-Mage can only watch it incredulously because he does not understand what it is. However, his eyes widen because a true shot is approaching him at that very moment. And so we can see that the result was the same as always, where the creature could not survive this strike in the end. The blonde observes this incredulously, questioning what it could be. And so we can see the image of our boy with heavy breathing right there. Soon after, he says that he didn't arrive as late as he had thought. In another place, we can see someone yawning from exhaustion at that moment. This is the adventurer outside who says that it's been 4 days without any signal and that lazing around is making him start to soften. But when he looks ahead, he realizes that everything is getting very noisy all of a sudden. And so we can see that the trunk of the portal started to collapse at that moment. He shouts, questioning what this thing happening in front of him could be. Thus, we can see that the portal was closed and destroyed after some strange event. A woman says to call a bishop immediately because some people managed to return alive from the raid that ended up being a failure. The man with a scar on his face becomes tense upon witnessing the scene in front of him, because only 3 people managed to come back from that hell they were thrown into. We can then see our protagonist waking up suddenly with wide eyes. The adventurer says that he finally woke up, noticing the boy's fright. However, he says it's better to tell the truth from now on because it seems that only Gaffer's mercantile group survived. And thus he asks what happened inside the portal, to which our protagonist is surprised to realize they were the only survivors. Soon he says he thought that might be the case, but it's hard to believe that everyone else died. Then he reveals that there was a demon inside that cursed place. Soon after, he asks for a pencil and paper since he's going to draw it for them. He doesn't know what it is called but shows it to the man, who becomes frightened by it. And once he calms down, he realizes that everything finally makes sense. Sometime later in a cabin, someone shouts that it makes no sense, because a total of 100 people, who were the elite, ended up dying in a red portal. One of them, called Toriel, states that even his cousin was inside among them. The man states that they were not lying since he said that was the boss of the 100-person portal. Everyone realizes it was a green ogre, since they are monsters capable of using items, meaning it would be like facing an army of adventurers. But one of the men stroking his mustache states that he cannot accept such a thing, since there is no chance that the 3 Nadisha sisters would have lost to something like that. The adventurer questions what he's trying to say, to which he replies that it is quite obvious. After all, it seems like sabotage, revealing that someone from inside may have betrayed everyone. After entering the place, it would be impossible to know what happened inside, and whether planned or not, it seems that the only 3 who survived were from the same group. Habis, noticing this, says that it was a miracle on his side since one of his managed to awaken the 3rd circle and escape with 2 other members, unlike the others. The man understands this provocation, saying that they seem to be trying to claim they are better than the other unions. Both then start a discussion about climbing the ranking of the 10 great unions and end up in laughter filled with anger. And the adventurer, noticing this, questions in his mind whether they are done with these barbs. The man with the mustache questions if they have any proof in the end. Then the man with the cigar says they didn't bring any items out of the place and thus have no reason to have done anything. Soon we can see the outside where our protagonist bows, thanking them for taking care of them, to which the man says it was nothing. The woman approaches her leader, questioning if it's alright to let them go. And so the old man states that they have already come to a conclusion after all. We can see some time passing and the wind in the forest continues to howl at that moment. Our boy looks to the side, thus noticing a recognizable figure. The blonde is surprised because the little creature actually followed him there, thus seeing an extremely cute little snail staring at them. The blonde questions why he is hesitating after the whole plan has been set up. They already took care of the Black Mage's followers and finished off the orcs, and now they just need to throw the items away and injure themselves a bit. Our boy observes her with a determined look all the way, and so we can see the items he ended up taking from that extremely difficult opponent. The plan is quite simple after all, but there is one item he managed to get that is extremely valuable. His being the Phoenix Feather, which increases all his fire attacks and unlike other items can be stacked infinitely. And the reason the others were killed was because of this single item, and this unexpected gain is something that must be taken out no matter what. The woman tries to say that if they take the item, it will raise suspicions of sabotage, something that El Palm himself had reminded them. He must not be greedy, and thus they will stick to the plan since they found an exit portal. We can then see a small flower approaching at that moment, and the boy and his companion notice it, thus falling silent. It is explained that this is a pet snail, and unlike other monsters, it has no attack power and roams around looking for items to increase the size of its shell. This is a form of life found after the portal had opened in his past life. Thus, we can see that the little creature saved something for our protagonist that he had been longing for, and thus he obtained the Phoenix Feathers, which were precisely his greatest goal. The blonde is surprised to have managed to bring this and questions how he knew how to use it, to which it is said that he thought it better to try something rather than leave with nothing. Then the woman asks what they are going to do now, to which it is said not to rush. Since they managed to infiltrate the Cygnus Knights, they will have to be careful in gathering information as they could hide even more if they sense danger. At this moment, the enemies must have returned, so they will spend some time waiting. Soon we can see another place where someone crushes the paper angrily, saying that all their allies were annihilated, which means the raid was a failure. The woman says that everyone was killed by the boss, and there were suspicions of sabotage aimed at Gafford. Fortunately, they were not exposed, meaning they can already start preparing for the next mission. Soon we can see that the atmosphere is getting increasingly heavy with the presence of that man, and thus he questions if they really were not caught. To which the woman replies yes, because she made sure of it. The plan was to kill all the groups, yet there was nothing related to El Palm. Thus the man realizes that there might be a reason to hide, and if he noticed anything, then he might decide to spread this information. The woman states that they could be in danger if that happens, so they must eliminate him as quickly as possible. And the man with the smile says that this is the perfect chance to extend an invitation, as he will try to accept it. However, it will be better to prepare something different for this situation, because they might be the first and last guests who will know of his existence. We can see someone talking about the world before reincarnation as a true hell. Suffering from poverty, this person could only dream of living as a normal human, and all he could do was watch his brother suffer from black blood disease. In the end, he was not even able to build a grave for his family. And amidst that hell, an angel ended up appearing in his life, saying that someone had been left behind. This woman said that he seemed to be going through some difficulties and asked if he wanted to help. This was his first meeting with Iran, and he could only tell her to go away. Sometime later, we can see a dog charging at the group. Dibbo, with extreme mastery, says that he is taking first place in monster elimination. The other companions say that the cleanup for that day has already been decided, and that's why the one using an axe seems focused on looking cool. The woman says that everything has already been resolved, and with this well-done job, they can leave. That figure was like light for our berserk, who watched her from below. 1 year was more than enough to make him see life differently, and watching her made him see the world in a better way. And his goal became to help her, and thus we can see one of his companions saying that the other is great at cleanup after all. Both had a lively discussion like friends, and the little girl says they must keep moving forward because someone left marks on the roof. Somehow, this place seems different as the Elmas Mountain area appears to have changed at that moment. Thus, we can see some time in the past where someone is begging for help. It's very dangerous to go alone into the abandoned mines, and there is no one willing to go with her, so she needs help finding her brother. The woman tries to say that she does not accept requests from people like that because bringing someone from the third circle could end up being dead weight. After all, there is no guarantee that her brother is alive, and therefore she should ask another adventurer for help. However, the boy suddenly stands up, apologizes for interrupting, and says that after the last day, no adventurer is willing to go to the Cave of Challenges, and that's why he volunteers to help, saying he will guarantee her safety and asking his master to reconsider. Thus, we can see that battlefield completely filled with weapons and corpses. The girl states that the body ahead is not her brother's, and the woman says he doesn't seem to have been eliminated by common monsters or anything like that. In the end, it seems the body has been there for about a week, and she remembers this person as a shadow approaches. Soon, a huge structure ends up falling on the group at that moment. Thus, an explosion occurs due to an attack made to defend themselves. Debo, holding the little girl in his arms, questions what just happened there, and when he looks around, he realizes is a figure he recognizes. In the end, he is called Zakam and tells the young girl to stay behind him as he advances. However, a blue slash is made at that moment with extreme force, hitting the hand of the creature that was about to strike his student. The woman says they will advance from the left to hit the core of the giant creature. The man understands this, saying they will finish as quickly as possible to continue the search. The other members prepare at that moment, thus advancing with all their strength and determination. The battle is extreme, and we can see that the damages are caused with immense force. But the girl observes it and then notices something that catches her attention. It is a cave echoing with something dark calling her. Sometime later, Debo is breathing heavily, saying that it was as difficult as the rumors said. However, the knight suddenly calls out, saying she can't see Shannon around and asks if anyone saw her. Thus, we can see the girl's hair ornament lying on the ground at that moment. And so Debo realizes that she went that way and questions why she acted alone. The heroine tries to tell everyone to prepare even though she doesn't know what it is. Something inside is emitting a strong aura. She cannot say for sure, but it will be dangerous due to the pressure being emanated. Our berserk confidently states that he will bring her back no matter what. Protecting her was his duty, and they must guard the entrance they came in through. But the knight tries to say they need to listen to the heroine. However, the woman says that she will go with him no matter what, since whatever that thing is, it is a threat to the world of Maple, and thus it is her job to deal with it. With that decided, both start advancing while the rest of the group stays behind. We can see that the place is bathed in hot lava, while the stalactites show no dripping water. It is visible that the heat emanating is increasing more and more due to the liquid from the hot area. And so we can see the young girl now sitting next to a strange tree. Thus Debo says that this seems to be the path, and then he looks ahead. Soon he shouts for Shannon and notices that there is a body in front of him. The girl runs her hand over her face, saying that it is indeed her brother. Thus the heroine, watching that, keeps her gaze narrowed as she realizes something. Debo tells the young girl not to move since he will go get her immediately and bring her back. However, the girl starts laughing amid the tears she is shedding. Then she says that he really came just as she expected, since he's a good person, but there is no way to return. The name Zaka means demon tree, and while many believe that the statues move on their own, the giant tree is its true core. You still have to deal with a real one, and Debo questions what she's trying to say in the end. The woman promptly stops him, thanking him for saying that, and says she should stay calm because he will kill this tree. However, the little girl must hide because it will be dangerous, and the creature could hurt her if she is caught in the middle of it. Yet he questions if she still wants to continue using her brother as a sacrifice, just as is happening. The girl holding the orb says that they still have not understood in the end. All of this is just the beginning, and the moment they entered this place, they sealed their pact. Zakam uses mediums, and they have an extra trait, because they are not limited to using only statues as was being thought. Upon noticing her companion attacked, the woman quickly turns back, startled at that moment. And so we can see the warrior with a spear advancing towards her with a black aura around his weapon. A huge attack is performed, throwing her backward with immense force. Debo questions Miria about what she is doing attacking him like that. And then he widens his eyes as he looks at the face of his battle companion, because she says that he was responsible for killing all of her friends there. Amid laughter, the girl says that there is nothing they can do since they will only be seen as targets for her revenge. Now it is time for the grand finale that everyone was waiting for. She must do her best to finish this performance the way it has been staged. After all, it is a gift for her lord called the Black Mage. Sometime later, we can see an explosion happening in that place. Debo starts coughing up ketchup and wonders if that was caused by Zakam. The heroine promptly tells him to stop being a child and end it quickly, as that is no longer the Miria he knows. But one being controlled smiles psychotically at that moment. Debo announces that he knows that, but still, it is a difficult task to fulfill. The woman promptly uses an adrenaline boost to increase the strength of her attacks, thus using a crushing strike towards one of the giant's limbs to eliminate it. And even though the strike is powerful, it still was not enough. The berserk grits his teeth at that moment, unable to think clearly. The entire fight is stretching to the limit, with the explosions of power growing stronger each moment. In the end, it is his fault, and he admits that he should not have suggested coming to this place. And so, with his axe in hand, he starts running while screaming in rage. Then he strikes the chest of his friend, saying in his mind that it is all his fault. And as he looks at her, he says that he is sorry for doing this. The woman, on the other hand, advances with her hand toward the warrior's head to eliminate him. However, he is fast enough to complete the strike with even more force, and thus end the life of his companion. But that hand which was once coming to kill him now caresses his face, and while falling, she thanks him and asks him to take good care of Aaron for her. At that moment, Dibbo can feel his heart racing as sadness knocks at his door. We can see the heroine jumping and heading towards her target, and thus she delivers a lateral slash to the tree that is the main body of this creature. We can see a huge explosion occurring at that moment due to the sheer power. However, a hand made of rocks was able to defend against that strike, surprising a woman. Soon another fist advances toward her to strike once more. The woman is able to dodge it, and Debo approaches, saying they are going to tear this thing apart. Both use all their strength and energy in a combined attack at that moment. After that, we can see that numerous strikes begin to split the enormous statue at that moment, causing immense damage. However, Debo is promptly stopped by one of the creature's attacks coming his way. With his own hands, he holds it back, saying that the creature is extremely unpleasant to face even in this situation. And the girl who brought them there screams that she offers her life to the Almighty while charging forward with a dagger. However, the heroine with the axe doesn't let her do anything and finishes her off with a quick strike. She does not seem sad about it, and instead looks determined for eliminating the one responsible for the death of her companions. And in the end, all that remains is this immense statue to be destroyed. Debo says they cannot relax, but suddenly he can feel something in his mind. His axe ends up falling to the ground as he screams in agony, feeling his brain splitting. The heroine questions what is happening, but realizes it is worse than she thought. The berserk promptly asks Eren to kill him immediately. After all, he does not want to do something he would regret. The woman understands this and thus asks forgiveness from her beloved disciple at that moment. Debo smiles as a memory comes to his mind, because this is the best outcome, as it may be the punishment for his foolish thoughts of the past. Suddenly, that shock finally enters his subconscious all at once. He can see the image of his little sister in front of him, completely lifeless. Staring at her, he questions why he is there and what is happening. And when he looks at his master, he does not recognize her and questions if she was the one who did that. Then the woman says not to worry because she will end this as fast as possible. However, the man, already overtaken by madness, says he will make her regret putting his sister in the middle of this. The woman manages to dodge one of the statue's attacks that came toward her by surprise. However, the man's axe advances toward her, covered in dark energy. She is able to dodge it by ducking, but then notices something coming from below. It is a kick that surprises her, but she is able to block it with one hand. And she says that her student's senses are really sharp, just as she trained him to be. Both begin a duel, clashing their weapons through the air while fighting fiercely. And the woman promptly tries to launch a slash toward him, saying that this might be her final chance, thus cutting the hand of the enormous creature that was trying to protect its only cocoon. The woman appears behind her pupil at that moment with her weapon energized. The man looks back and can feel his heart pounding fast. After all, this is her strongest ability, known as the last play. Debo ends up falling to the side at that exact moment, unable to get up. The woman starts jumping through the air with extreme speed and charges at the huge beast standing in front of her in statue form, thus delivering a powerful blow, saying they are going to end this quickly to save her boy. Soon her weapon materializes the giant bear, being the extremely powerful final strike. However, atop the statue's head, Debo is ready to leap, and thus he advances toward his master with the intent to kill her before she can finish the creature. However, the woman grits her teeth because this is her only chance and she cannot stop, even if it means hitting him in the process. She quickly apologizes to Debo as she launches the extremely powerful attack, thus shattering and completely exterminating the tree without giving it any chance to fight back. The berserk, live on the ground, questions what is happening, as it seems that Zakam was finally defeated. The woman gives a cheerful smile, saying that he finally came back to her, which is a relief because she thought she would have to leave without saying goodbye to him. Completely surprised, Debo watches that scene and recognizes Eren as the woman who was attacking. And then trembling, he says she should have killed him and questions why she didn't. The woman says that they already failed 800 years ago. Now Debo is the one responsible for eliminating the Black Mage since he has such insane talent. However, the man still remains incredulous and says he can't get strong like his master even if he had all the time in the world. All she can do is leave this world she loved so much in the hands of her dear berserk, since she is sure he will do well in the huge game that is about to happen. After all, he is her only disciple and also the boy she loved most in this life. And so it was that Eren closed her eyes forever, and the man had to tell the other heroes what happened. But a world without his master made no sense. It was a hell where he couldn't protect his life's purpose and couldn't even answer the questions of those he loved. In the end, this place never wished for Debo to truly be happy. And facing death, he felt nothing because his heart had been ripped out a long time ago. With that explosion, it was confirmed that it was worse than the hell he was born into to suffer. He suddenly wakes up, opening his eyes in a relaxed manner. He finds himself lying in bed while certain sounds are heard. His sister is surprised that Debo was already awake since he was unconscious even without injuries, and questions whether he had some kind of nightmare. However, the berserk claims not to remember anything, and then his sister hears a knock at the door and says someone is waiting for him. Thus, she calls him, saying someone came to see him, and Debo, with his extremely sculpted body, appears at the door. He soon sees his boss, saying that their plans were moved up and therefore they need to prepare to leave. He says there can be no rest since they are being hunted and asks if he can lend him some money, which the man promptly tries to refuse. We are taken to the Gafor Mercantile Union office, where the man questions if the boy managed to escape just by gaining one more circle, which is confirmed. Quickly, he starts to get irritated and questions in his mind what the boy in front of him is planning, and thus asks if he doesn't know any more details since he won't be rewarded if he doesn't deliver information, and it seems he is in need of money. However, the boy states that he made a mistake and will cover it, thus saying that this is the payment for all his debts at that moment. In total, it is 2 million in cash, and he pays what he owed, surprising the man, who questions whether he is trying to sell information at a higher price, and says that he is a free adventurer and thinks he needs to resign the contract. He soon questions what the signing bonus he desires is to be rehired, to which it is said to be 15 million. Avis, completely shocked, claims it is absurd since he is just a rank C adventurer and no one would pay all that. However, the boy promptly stands up with a relaxed tone, saying that he thinks their conversation ends there since they are not ready to negotiate. Dibo, while walking, questions how it went during that process, to which it is said that he rejected it after hearing the 15 million signing bonus. The warrior says that his boss must be crazy for asking for that amount, to which the response comes in a funny way that's nothing much. However, the other questions why they came to this place since he recognizes it. After all, the slum is a place he knew very well from the past, and now the place he lives in is heaven compared to this old home. There are certain rumors that this area used to be the brightest in the city, but it's all in the past and currently it's a den of bandits. Most likely, this is the worst place to live on the entire Victoria Island. Soon we can observe someone ending up flying after taking a blow, thus falling near the protagonist and his friend. Some men approach, armed, putting both of them in a disadvantageous position. That man thought things were going well up until that moment, and thus Dibbo says that this fight has just begun, so they should turn back since this neighborhood is extremely dangerous, just as he remembers. However, this newcomer says that they are late while calling them brothers. Thus he reports that these gentlemen started calling him a bandit and beat him, and therefore he begs for defense in tears because he wishes for their help, and such an attitude ends up irritating Dibbo, who thinks this old man is completely crazy. The man in front says they really do look alike, irritating the berserk even more at that moment. This fat man points a knife, saying that the man stole the item and sold it, and they must pay 3 million right now to settle the debt. With an evil smile, the one with scars states that nobody saw him stealing, and in the end, he is an innocent man and should leave immediately. However, the old man shouts, saying that the man is truly asking for death with those insinuations. But our protagonist quickly throws 3 million at the bald man's face, thus paying the debt. Right after, he states that with that done, they can now leave, surprising Dibbo, who questions why he did that. The boy quickly looks back at that moment with a serious look, thus calling for Ralph and telling him to follow immediately. This man questions whether they really came to recruit and then asks about the money, to which it is said that he threw it all at that guy earlier. Upon hearing this, the old man states that he has no reason to join the group, and thus the berserk gets irritated, saying that they need 3 million to pay their debt. With a cocky tone, the old man says he never asked them to pay it after all, since they acted without consulting him. And so he announces that if they came looking, they must know his skills and thus must pay accordingly, since he needs at least 3 million to join them. Soon we can see someone approaching the three, asking for permission to step in. There's a woman named Beiju from the Kenya Mercantile Union calling for El Palm. The boy stares at her with suspicious eyes at that moment while becoming serious. Ralph, noticing this, realizes that she is from one of the great unions, and thus the mage smiles, saying it is him. The woman explains it is a pleasure to meet him and states that she highly values his skills that exceeded expectations in the 100-men portal, and therefore will be direct. They would like to recruit him into their group, and of course there will be a simple test where they will pay 3 million upfront plus another 15 million as a signing bonus if he passes. Upon hearing that, the old man questions how it is possible that so much money is being offered for this boy. The woman asks if he would like to join them, while our protagonist gives an excited smile because his plans are going accordingly. She then leaves, saying that the raid will be in 3 days and wishes him good luck, thus exciting the berserk, who says it's great luck. The protagonist throws the money to the man, telling him to grab it quickly. This is the requested bonus, and the contract will be for 1 year, and will give him another 7 million after a successful raid, further confusing the warrior. Both start arguing while our protagonist simply ignores the words of his friend who is complaining. After some time, we can see that his face shows an indignant expression as he sees the scene in front of him, because the blonde who was with them in the previous portal is now among them. He questions why this noisy young woman is there, to which is said that she only came to fulfill her promise. Soon we can observe someone stepping into a puddle of rain after some time. It is the protagonist group, saying that it is a great day to raid a portal. There are a total of 5 teams, adding up to 50 people, and that number should be enough to clear this gate. The man states that with so many people, the money he will receive will end up decreasing. The woman, leaving everything soon, introduces herself and says that the portal is at the orange level this time. The maximum entry number has already been reached, and it has 3 marks, and with that, she believes clearing it will not be a problem. El Palm ends up thinking that the followers are there, and he did not expect the Mercantile Union to contact him, and they must have already started using this place for something. Although it is a different time, his portal has already been cleared once, and there will be no change of plans just like before. They must remember to fire a flare if they find his second portal, which ends up confusing Debo since he doesn't know what that means. It is said to be a dungeon within the limited space itself that once entered ends up having an extra exit that can be crossed. The old man says that Berserk is extremely stupid, and that is worrying him, and he calls for El Palm. He says that although he hired him, it doesn't mean he is the leader because that is decided based on skills. Our protagonist gives a confident smile, saying that he is the greedy type, but they will decide who the boss is based on their contribution at this location. The old man gets excited because this newbie really fell for it, and so he thinks that everything will become very interesting. He manages to become their boss. After a few minutes, the challenge will finally begin, where the warrior states that they can finish off this place and earn more than 50 million in cash. However, the elder says that this first circle kid is useless for thinking this is a walk in the park. Completely irritated, Debo insults the other man, telling him to fight, to which he replies that the result is obvious, and that's why he doesn't want to do it. With extreme fury, he keeps saying that this idiot is ruining the group's morale, but something catches his attention at that moment. As soon as he crosses the portal, he sees a macabre scene of everyone being attacked by huge monsters known as evil eyes. One of the frogs ends up jumping on Debo, dragging him across the ground. The young man questions what this thing is and why it is right at the portal's entrance. The creature promptly charges with its claw to finish off the warrior once and for all and devour his flesh. However, the old man quickly appears, kicking the beast and saving the young man. The blow was powerful enough to throw it extremely far into a tree nearby. He then complains, telling him to pay attention to the targets, and the blonde wonders if the portal really opens right inside the enemy's territory. Soon we can see the creatures continuing to advance with extreme bloodlust toward everyone. However, from the portal, a flame starts to form, giving us a recognizable image. Our protagonist manages to eliminate them with his fire arrow, while thinking that these monsters were not there the last time he entered, which is unexpected. The woman promptly jumps onto the monster while using her Rising Sun skill. However, when executing the move, the creature manages to dodge by throwing itself to the side, surprising her. Trying again, the result repeats itself, with the beast continuing to smile in an extremely sadistic manner. The movements of this beast are completely unpredictable, even for someone well-versed in the battlefield like the knight. Thus, she ends up getting hit directly in the chest, sending her flying backward. As a result, several others approach her fallen figure on the ground to devour and kill her. The woman can only feel frustration and anger at that moment, with her life about to end. However, something catches her attention as suddenly all the monsters are killed at once. We then shift our focus to the warrior, who is struggling greatly against the creature, but he does not notice that a figure advances toward him at high speed, thus striking the creature that was cornering him and executing it immediately. The power is so great that it blows that frog against a nearby tree. The man states that it's 2 for the boy and 1 for the lady he had to look after at that moment. In the end, this situation is exciting and will keep helping since he got his commission. The blonde realizes that these true abilities are frightening, and even though she does not want to admit it, she ends up saying that the third circle is truly a level above. Soon, one of the beasts charges toward the man, drooling with the desire to devour him. But with a series of punches, the old man is able to eliminate it without any difficulty. He even manages to dodge the attacks, saying that they are erratic, but that's all. In the end, the 2 kids are safe and protected. However, our protagonist is a separate case. Since he controls the fire arrow with telekinesis, this proves that his skills are truly good, and his monster elimination speed is much higher than his. In the end, facing El Palm brings something to his mind. Thus, he charges toward another creature that manages to dodge his attacks with absurd agility. However, Ralph was already prepared for this and thus advances with his fist, saying that the young man is definitely someone useful to him. In the end, 50 million in contract fees is not something just anyone could get, and considering a union of merchants, they will probably pay even more in the future. His eyes start to shine at that moment because he sees a scene that satisfies him. After all, this is the path where he will be sitting on a pile of money after taking leadership of this group. He starts laughing at that, while the blonde wonders how it is possible that he is enjoying this whole situation. Soon the fighter gets even more excited and says that his excitement is reaching its peak. Thus we can see that after so many of their own have been eliminated, the beasts start to feel fear of his figure. However, something ends up hitting him from the side, preventing him from finishing the frog. It was our protagonist who had just kicked him, making him question what was being done. Holding himself to the ground, he questions what was with that cheap shot, since it looks like he wants to fight. Our boy says he doesn't need to thank him, confusing the man even more, who doesn't understand what is being said at that moment. However, we can see that the spot where he was standing just received a massive area attack that ended up eliminating the creatures present there. The fighter questions what that was, since it doesn't seem to be from one of the groups that came to attack. Everyone begins to be surrounded by the frogs that enclose the members of this massive raid, and thus we can see a spectral arrow being prepared at that exact moment. But one responsible for this is a mysterious archer who is getting ready to eliminate them. Our boy is able to notice a glow coming from above the trees and wonders if that's where it is coming from. Thus we see the frogs charging at him with immense hunger and brutality. However, the arrows are fired in his direction, revealing that their target is the humans, not the beasts. But amid so much confusion, the young man ends up disappearing among the bodies of the monsters at that moment. The archer gets startled and notices something that catches his attention. It is our protagonist who appears from behind the body of one of the creatures that was hit. This shooter realizes that he is already conjuring a spell at that exact moment to attack him, and as he looks to the side, he notices something that leaves him alarmed. After all, the arrow has already been fired and is heading towards him to end his life immediately. A huge explosion occurs, scaring the forest. The old man watches it and realizes that he blocked the attack using one of the beasts and was even able to counterattack, which is a completely crazy idea. However, the warrior, while dealing with one of the creatures, tells his boss to be careful at that moment. Thus, the boy looks to the side, wondering what it could be. Soon after, he sees several projectiles approaching his rear to attack him. An explosion is visible and everyone gets worried at that moment, thinking the boy might not have survived. However, he only has a slight cut on his arm. The old man is sure he was hit, but suddenly he appeared behind them almost unharmed for that kind of attack. The blonde screams to El Palm that they need to retreat because this place is extremely dangerous. However, the fighter, looking up in shock, questions how this is possible, since the whole battlefield is being attacked from above without any rest for the targets, revealing that there is no way out. More attacks are coming from above, scaring all the other groups who say to leave immediately. However, the strikes are so fast that they end up piercing the one who is speaking. All the other members can feel the damage running through their veins as the pain becomes even more anguishing. The knight swings her sword at that moment to make a daring move, and with a solar slash, she is able to defend one of the people who is on the ground. She screams, questioning what is being done, since they must run to the forest if they want to survive. That is exactly what they would have done if they could, but there is no way for them to get past such creatures. Suddenly, a strange fire missile crosses through everyone, eliminating all the beasts. A path opens up amid the hell, so they can escape safely. The one responsible for that was our protagonist, and thus the older fighter states that he will go ahead to deal with it. The knight starts moving faster, telling them to stop wasting time and to run faster. We can see that their steps become increasingly firm toward an exit. However, the attacks keep coming from above to target and finish them. The warrior tries to call out to his boss, saying they will all end up dead at this pace. Our protagonist quickly uses a fire shot to launch backwards. As soon as the explosion occurs, El Palm states that he has a plan and asks his companion to pay immediate attention. The archer realizes in thought that he located him instantly, which ends up catching his attention. After all, Lord Evoke really had a good reason to be concerned about this young man. While staring, he apologizes internally to El Palm since he is about to eliminate him at that moment. Several arrows are fired, but the boy is fast enough to leap between the trees, dodging as he moves through the terrain. The man wonders why he is so fast, and then something catches his attention. It is the fact that there are only 6 people, with the one wielding a halberd missing. Thus, a huge fireball can be seen flying in his direction and catching his attention. His head turns backward, observing that completely terrifying scene at that moment. The one responsible used the bracelet's ability to create a huge explosion in the tree. It was our protagonist who witnessed it hitting with his own eyes, which is certain. And thus Dibbo, dressed in the boy's clothes, says it turned out great in the end. It seems that the plan of switching disguises worked, and it was all thanks to the great warrior he is. However, while saying he bought a lot of time with it, an arrow suddenly pierced through his abdomen. The knight notices it and screams for the man who is falling at that moment. Our protagonist is equally startled and turns his face in that direction. He soon realizes an energized arrow is flying toward him as its target. All the others start getting shot while a bystander says it's impossible. And as she screams for help, they are all pierced by arrows at that moment. The blonde, while holding her partner, tells them to flee as fast as possible. However, her thigh ends up being pierced by a light attack launched by the shooter. Thus, unable to support her own weight, she falls forward along with her injured companion. The brilliant attacks fly toward them, ready to finish them off, and the woman can only grit her teeth in pain and anguish at that moment. However, someone appears holding them, telling them to stay focused even in this situation. In the end, Ralph ended up playing a father without having kids, which becomes a huge headache. He keeps running as fast as possible while the archer says they won't escape his range. Thus, he knocks 3 more arrows to perform a multiple shot. However, something catches his attention and makes doubt arise in his eyes. The fighter questions why they have to go in that direction, which is answered by saying it was a request from his boss. All 3 finally cross through the forest after much difficulty. Thus, the scene ahead leaves them even more confused. A second portal just appeared there, which should be impossible, but they realize that El Palm knew its location from the beginning. With a smile, Ralph ends up saying that they are only alive thanks to him, and the distance to the enemies is extremely great, meaning the arrows will not reach them. Dibbo tries to say that they can't enter the portal without the boss, to which he is told that this was always the protagonist's original plan to save him. And as he reminds his companion, he doesn't notice several shots coming from in front of them at that moment. Thus, the strikes hit all of them at once with extreme brutality. The warrior falls to the ground at that moment, dropping the mage's staff he was carrying. Ralph wonders how this was possible since he had not foreseen that the enemy could get ahead of him in such a short time. However, a gigantic tree trunk along with the warrior's axe ends up hitting them at that moment, thus throwing them into the portal with an extremely heavy blow. All the figures end up disappearing amid the orange light emanating from that place. Soon the forest goes quiet for a long moment after that scene, and the archer, confused, wonders how the protagonist could be crazy enough to pull off such an act. After a few minutes, something can be seen moving amid the silent woods. An arrow ends up piercing the evil eye in one shot, finishing it off. Its body falls to the ground while its last life grunts fade away. The archer realizes he was caught in a trap again since the protagonist is not moving, meaning he is hiding while searching. However, this is a great stupidity, and he accepts playing this little game, questioning how long the boy can endure. During the 13th year, he was accepted by Lord of Voke in a selection where there were 300 assassins. The slaughter lasted for 7 days, and in the end, no one was able to find him, thus he received the title of Spectre. His eyes dilate and he turns in a direction after sensing a movement occurring. Thus he ends up shooting an arrow and hitting another creature that was passing by. In the end, his irritation is visible for missing again even at that moment. Thus we can see that the fire arrow ends up piercing a tree very close to his. Soon, jumping from branch to branch, he assumes the protagonist is not bad at all. However, he stops at another spot after repositioning, and finishes by saying he should have guessed that his position would also be exposed with that attack. Soon, when he hits the target, he realizes there's nothing there, which surprises him, and thus a fire arrow appears at his side and scares him, because that bastard ended up using telekinesis to confuse him, which is truly considered a cheap trick. The archer finally falls heavily to the ground. Thus he uses a heavy step to escape immediately. 2 fire arrows are fired, weaving through the trees, heading toward the movement. The assassin prepares 3 shots to try to avoid his death, and then fires them, creating an explosion as they collide with the fire. However, this ends up impairing his vision, which is blocked by his arm. Soon behind him, another spell can be seen coming directly toward him. At point-blank range, he fires an attack, trying to hit the arrow directly. Thus, it can clearly be seen that the power rebounded due to the sudden release of energy. The assassin falls to the ground, growing in pain at that moment. And as he gets up, he struggles to think of the name El Palm, because this is becoming the greatest challenge of his entire assassin life. However, that only makes it better and even more interesting. His breath exhales and his eyes take on a white tone at that exact moment. The forest starts suffering a slight breeze while silence spreads. Our boy listens calmly, thinking that it is way too quiet. The decision to hide after so long is truly irritating, and it's impressive that he managed to hide his presence to that level. There was no enemy like that in his past life, so it must be an assassin sent by Kenya after seeing his potential during the participation in the portal of the 100 men. Suddenly, someone shouts, asking for El Palm to come out immediately. The boy turns, noticing that the voice comes from a completely strange side. That man yells at them to stop wasting time since hiding like a rat is not something honorable. And amid laughter, he claims that settling things face to face is much better for both sides in the end. The boy wonders how he got there since it's impossible without leaking his presence and ends up suspecting teleportation. But as he approaches, he realizes it might have been the so-called step of the wind performed at that moment. However, the archer ends up saying he finally found him at that moment. Thus, countless projectiles are suddenly launched in his direction. We then see a scene cut where we are taken to a snowy mountain. The orange portal begins to glow from the people who are arriving, and amid screams, everyone ends up falling to the ground immediately. Debo says they abandoned their boss, to which it is said that there was nothing they could do in the end. The warrior questions how his friend will handle it alone, to which it is replied that the boy probably already has something planned. However, looking ahead, he sees countless corpses in that place, and thus he wonders what it is since he is sure it is a 3-mark portal, yet there are thousands of corpses there. The blonde finally understood that it was actually an extreme trick. All actions so far were suspicious, thus revealing that Kanya is actually an organization that follows the Dark Mage. They must have lured adventurers who crossed their path into this place, and in the end, El Palm was right about them taking the bait. Ralph promptly apologizes for interrupting the narrative because there is something more important. The host of that place seems very angry with the unwanted presence. Thus we can see a huge snow gorilla appearing with extremely powerful arms. The knight wonders if that is really the boss they will have to face in this place. The older one says that he will have to pay his debt after all, and thus assumes that they can consider themselves extremely lucky. After all, what is about to be shown is not something just anyone can see according to him. If one were to describe Ralph's character in a sentence, it would simply be as someone with a terrible personality and extremely bad to work with. In the end, he is the type of person who would do anything for money besides being extremely arrogant. However, if one were to describe the adventurer Ralph, the situation would be different since he would be quite useful because his skills are top tier. And it is very likely that in the end, he is the only one at the peak of the 3rd circle as a healing bishop after all. As soon as this ability is used, both warriors end up feeling a vital energy covering them. Dibbo's wounds regenerate quickly as if it were a step of magic. In the end, this person's class was not that of a fighter, but rather a healing bishop. So it may mean that the skills he was demonstrating earlier were just his physical strength after all. Ralph smiles, saying that they need to prepare since they must make the salary worth it. In the end, this creature in front of them is not going to wait any longer. Everyone starts running while the Yeti charges at them all at once, thus punching the ground and creating huge chunks of stone across the area. Dimbo holds on, stating that the creature is extremely irritating, and so the beast charges with its jaw wide open to bite him immediately. Once it happens, we can see that no flesh was actually bitten in the end. Holding onto the creature's fang, the boy ends up surprising it. Thus, he uses the blow from his axe to deal extreme damage to the creature's eye, causing it to roar. On the other side, the knight uses the solar slash, inflicting extreme pain that cannot regenerate. Soon, a heavy hand advances toward Debo to try and stop him. However, something ends up blocking it as if it were a meteor, surprising the warrior. It was the bishop who ends up jumping back to create distance. Then, holding a Bible, he immediately uses the blessing attribute. The knight realizes she can feel a steady increase of power rising through her body, and thus the healer states that this is going to cost 100,000 in money per skill, immediately irritating both who are there. The giant monster spews blue juice, and the exhausted blonde tells Ralph that she is defeated. He says he will pay her for her services, but realizes that the monster is still awake. Meanwhile, El Palm fights against the ghost and remarks that something feels very strange since he doesn't know where they are shooting from. The ghost is using Aljavaj's flow as a teleportation ability and mocks Palm for being too slow during the battle. He launches more fire, but the ghost warns him that if he continues using his abilities, he will enter mana shock. Then raspberry syrup drips from Palm's mouth, but he still manages to launch more fire. His opponent mocks him, saying he has no chance, but El drinks his blue potion and, as a result, manages to unleash an even stronger flame. The ghost is surprised that he is using a higher level ability than a 3-circle mage able to cast even during mana shock. Then he concludes that El Palm is trying to sacrifice himself. He uses his ability to corner the ghost. The masked one concludes that El is going crazy since he is throwing fire in all directions. Palm is nearly exhausted and tells himself that he must endure. At that moment, the ghost calls him an idiot and says he will never be hit by him, affirming that Palm is doomed to be sealed by mana shock. Using all his remaining strength, El is weak in expelling raspberry syrup from his body, yet he persists in fighting. He throws a fire orb toward the ghost, and the ghost thinks he must escape before he burns. Then he spots an open field and runs there, but quickly realizes it's a trap. Palm surrounds him and throws multiple punches at the ghost. At that moment, the ghost tries to defend himself from El Palm's attacks. He reflects that he won't hold out much longer and needs to end the battle soon, but the ghost strikes him hard. At that moment, he tells himself to get up and thinks he has no strength left to gather mana for offensive magic. Soon, he decides to end it once and for all. A dagger then appears under a blue light, and he concludes that El Palm is using telekinesis since it requires little mana. The ghost tries to strike him, but El Palm manages to defend himself, blocking the attack with his staff. Then the ghost recovers and with his sword attacks Mir, nearly cutting off his arm. But he heals himself and continues defending against the ghost, almost striking him with the dagger. At that moment, the ghost resists, unleashes another ability, and tells El Palm to stop fighting because they are going too far. Mir loses consciousness and the ghost approaches Palm, saying he will help him and that they need to recover the phoenix's feather. However, El Palm wakes up with his eyes radiating blue light and immediately tears off the ghost's head. Mir regains himself and says he is tired of bow users. The battle against the monster continues and it throws one of the opponents far away. The other player resists the snow monster and says it's hard to hurt it. Then they plan how to defeat the monster as a team. One will go behind it and the other will try to find its weak point. The snow monster notices the player's strategy and one of them soon concludes that the monster is not just a big idiot. One of the monster's opponents uses a healing ability but realizes it is running out and tells the blonde to dodge the attacks. The other player tries to find an opening and asks them to spread out. The female player faints and another younger player is severely injured. The younger one, lying down and wounded, reflects on a lesson he learned to enhance his ability. It's the circular ability, and with this power, the player can move in different directions but mainly into the future. However, he needs to find the key to enhance this ability, either by understanding mana or accessing an unforgettable memory. After recalling this lesson, the boy gets up and slashes the monster with a single strike. The older player is impressed by the boy's strength and asks how someone so young can be so powerful. But the monster resists and keeps fighting, and the young one defends the man with healing abilities. Then the older one says he shouldn't worry about him, and the boy finishes wounding the monster. The boy, wielding his hammer, strikes the monster, but the creature resists. Then the young player leans toward Ralph and asks what is happening. Soon, the creature transforms into a giant ice stone and shatters. After some time, the players are recovering and one of them wakes up and asks if everyone has died. The boy replies that he defeated the monster, used its skin to make blankets, and even tried to eat its meat. The player remarks that he is brave for trying to eat the monster's meat and asks if he is waiting for them to wake up. He responds that he doesn't have much choice since there's no way to escape the portal, and adds that maybe it would be good to rest a little. The boy tells the player to rest a little more and leaves the cave. As soon as he steps out of the cave, he encounters another monster and ends up destroying it. When he returns to the cave, the blonde remarks that he came back early. He replies that he ran into some creatures outside and she says that next time she will go with him. But the boy replies that it's better if they go out one at a time and tells her to rest a bit more since they need to help Ralph recover. After saying that, the player lies down and she reflects that the boy keeps acting cool. At night, the young man leaves the cave and encounters several creatures. He defeats them all and thinks that this time he really thought he was going to get hurt. But then he spots a man sitting and realizes that he is frozen, holding a letter in his hands. The boy approaches, takes the letter, and reads it. It says that all his companions were hurt by the snow monster and that if someone is reading it, it means they have defeated the creature. The letter also mentions that near that place there's a portal to leave this dimension and asks the reader to deliver the letter to his home. The young man takes the man's gloves and sword and leaves with the girl and the injured player toward the portal. As they pass through the portal, they encounter masked men, and the young man tells the player that this is bad because he won't be able to fight. Then Kiri fights against the men. An orange beam of light appears and finishes off the masked men. Palm approaches them and says they are late, telling them to buy some sodas and rest. A blue wolf, along with a dark mage, is in a room. The long-haired man, while stroking the wolves, says that someone very skilled has appeared out of nowhere, and no one knows about it. A follower announces the arrival of El Palm to the mage. Then he asks what should be done about the contract. The man orders them to kill El Palm. The follower does not understand the reason for the order. Then he answers the boy's question, saying he doesn't care about public opinion, and that they will come up with an excuse later. The follower replies that El Palm is not alone. Meanwhile, in a hideout, the players are resting, and one of them complains that the food is tasteless. Another replies that he shouldn't badmouth his sister's cooking. Carrie thanks the brown-haired woman. The boy says he didn't want to bring them along, and the blonde replies that Kenya already knows the news, so it's better for everyone to stay together. Palm arrives at the hideout and asks if everyone is okay, and one of them asks where he has been. He replies that he was handling some matters. Ralph asks how they will divide the reward, and the young man shouts, saying he really wants to go to Kenya to ask for money. Then they start arguing about who fought more and who fought less until there is a knock on the door, and a big man asks for El Palm. Earlier, Palm had gone to the eye patch-wearing man's office to ask for the reward. The two argued, and Palm said that Kenya was to blame. He stated that the test portal was a trap and that masked men had been sent to eliminate them. The eye patch-wearing man was outraged and said he would take down Kenya. El Palm asked if his testimony alone would be enough to punish Kenya. At that moment, the man replied that he could manipulate public opinion to tarnish Kenya's image, but they might retaliate. Thus, Kenya had to be destroyed. Later, the man went to Kenya to apologize, saying there had been a misunderstanding between El Palm and the Merchant Union. He then said that El Palm had acted hastily and had come to him because he was very young. He also mentioned that the boy was an official business partner of Garfor and expressed regret as it seemed like he had been stealing from them. The woman replied that she couldn't give the promised contract fee and asked if that was okay, to which he agreed. The man then said that after the incident, he realized that human life is very valuable and decided to treat people as they deserve. The woman asked what he meant by that. The man gave a wicked smile. He responded that he had skilled guards ready and that this also applied to El Palm's group as they were a good team. He also said that if anyone tried to harm Palm and his team, they would have to fight against the Merchant Union of Garfor as well. Meanwhile, at the hideout, the group members were surprised by the reward amount. Then they asked if the guards outside were from the Garfor Merchant Union to protect them. Ralph boasted, saying that he was useful to the group and praised El Palm and the team, especially the young player. He said the boy was very powerful and questioned how he had acquired such strong abilities. The boy responded that he always dreams of a woman and that at times they fight as if they were close. Then he wakes up and remembers that she was using a firearm. Palm was astonished by the boy's dream and reflected that everyone knew before his regression that Debo and Iran were together. He also thought that if the woman in the dream was Iran, then part of his power from before the regression returns when he is unconscious. At that moment, he questioned whether something had gone wrong when he altered the past before his regression. Ralph continued, saying he didn't understand how both boys had advanced so quickly in their magic circles given their youth. Then he turned to the blonde and said there was nothing remarkable about her, suggesting she return to Cigna. Earlier that day, Kiri went to the center. Upon arriving, she was greeted by a boy who said he was surprised she had escaped the portal alive. Then he asked if she was going to speak with the master, and she replied that she was. The young man said she had lowered herself by aligning with explorers and suggested she should resign. She entered the master's room and he asked if she really wanted to be dismissed and questioned why Kiri had joined the infamous group. Kiri responded that she couldn't explain it at the moment. The master replied that he would report to the superiors that she had joined the explorers as part of a secret mission. In that case, she would need to submit reports every 3 weeks. He concluded by saying that she was his disciple and an eternal knight of the Cigna Knights. Returning to the present, Kiri told Ralph that she would not leave the group and that she could also improve her powers. Palm said that Ralph should not comment so much on the group members' abilities as he himself had sent him to the second floor to clean. But if it weren't for Debo, they would all be dead. Ralph replied that the opponent back then was not ordinary. Palm questioned whether a snow yeti was not an ordinary opponent and answered his own question by saying that he had hunted a yeti alone before. Everyone was shocked by what El had said. Palm reflected that this was before his regression and that if Kanya's assassins weren't so strong, he could have handled everything alone. Ralph said he was lying, asking how he could have so much power when, until recently, he was a slave. Palm then told Ralph that if he didn't believe him, he could prove it, but Ralph backed down, saying it wouldn't be necessary. Then L told everyone that they needed to become stronger before the next raid and also said that violence was the way. In a room, the Dark Mage asked two of his disciples how much Gaffer knew that the negotiation had been rigged from the start. They replied that they were unsure and that perhaps only the executors knew. The mage then said that eliminating Gaffer would not be difficult and that the real enemy was the Maple Association. He explained that it had been the same 8 centuries ago. With Empress Signa as leader, the Sigma Knights, the Explorer Association's resistance, and the Nova Tribe had united in an alliance. After the 6 heroes were sealed, the only threat to them was that alliance. Still, if the conflict was only with the Merchant Union, they wouldn't need the Superior's help. Then he concluded by saying that he hoped Palm would be a worthy enemy. In the forest, the group tried to enhance their strength and abilities to face the mage. After training, they all returned to the lodge. Ralph, his face completely bruised, questioned if that was really training. He explained that he thought it was actually personal, and Palm responded that he had only adjusted the training. The young boy started laughing at Ralph, ironically saying how handsome he looked. The brown-haired girl entered the room, and Ralph asked if it was okay to leave her alone behind. Then he said she was probably fine since there were guards around the lodge. The young boy remembered the letter from the frozen man and showed it to Palm, saying that thanks to that relic, he had managed to escape. He mentioned that he needed to return it, but didn't know where and asked if Palm had any idea. Palm looked at the letter in shock and said, "Ring of Cross." The boy looked at the ring and asked what it was, and Palm said he thought he had an idea and that he would return it. He also says that early tomorrow morning, the boy will participate in the training as well. Ralph laughs at the young boy's face. Meanwhile, Kiri continues training in the forest and remembers that some used to say she wasn't talented. Palm goes to a house, and the person at the door asks who he is. He responds that he is the mailman and shows the letter. At that moment, an incident had happened at the portal entrance some time ago, and it was destroyed. An affiliate of the Union went to investigate, but the culprits were never found. Surprisingly, the portal reappeared at its original location, and after this was revealed, the portals were never destroyed again. He looks at the hooded person, and she asks L how he discovered the location. Palm starts thinking about the Cross Hunters, a secret organization that knew the portal was a trap set by the followers. They were the ones who destroyed the portal, making it a noble sacrifice that went unnoticed. Then Palm says that he came to return the ring to them and also comments that he assumes they are not in the mood to reward him. The assassins point a weapon at Palm, and he begins to say that if they hurt him, they will never know where their leader will be exposed. One of them questions Palm about who he is. He responds to one of them saying, "Nice to meet you, Cheryl." Palm remembers that they knew each other in his past life and that Cheryl joined the resistance after the Cross Hunters were dissolved. He comments that they fought countless battles side by side, until one day she sacrificed herself for him, and he says that he still intends to repay that debt. Then Palm says he will be direct, asking them to withdraw the branch in Cunning because the location has already been exposed by the followers. He continues, saying that he recently obtained something, opens a box, and reveals a hand. He says that the Kenya Merchant Union had something interesting. Cheryl asks what that is supposed to mean. He tells her to take a look first and shows her the hand. Carol sees a tattoo on the unknown hand and says it is the tattoo of a follower. She also says that this tattoo can only be revealed by infusing mana into the skin, and then questions him, asking what he wants. He responds that he wants information. Then one of the men questions Cheryl, asking if she believes in Palm, and she replies that she does not, finding him very suspicious. Palm tells himself that Kenya is changing their plans quickly because he altered the future, and he thinks about leaving Kenya's organization alone. Then he decides that the next destination will be Nautilus. Seagulls could be heard flying in a blue sky. Palm watches as people board the ship. He says to himself that he is excited for some action after an entire month. A man with an eye patch demands that a choice be made. He had gathered only the portals that would be of interest to Kenya. More than a month had passed, and he says that they should begin. The protagonist becomes thoughtful and gives a final answer. He says he is not sure about the proposal. Mr. Abbas cannot believe what he has just heard and assumes that he is afraid. The boy states that he has already made his choice. He would go to the Eagle Eye Tomb. Shocked, the man cannot believe that he actually wants to go to that place. Karen, the captain of the Nautilus ship, had a disciple known as Lee Eagle Eye. The Eagle Eye portal is where she died and where a memorial was made in her honor. The reward for that place is high because many adventurers have already failed. Mr. Abbas understands that Kenya wants to face that place. Palm disagrees and asks where that information came from. A man with a scar on his face appears at the door, very interested in the conversation. It was Mr. Racken, who wanted to offer a gift. The man widens his eyes, eager to show what he brought. They were 2 phoenix feathers made by Gaffor. Smiling, the scarred man wishes them success. The protagonist thinks that this was Mr. Racken's way of saying that the harvest should be good to reward his investments. The group was still waiting for some people. Someone shouts loudly, drunken wail, and the protagonist hears it. A man appears carrying a large sack in his hands. Ibaru was bringing items requested by the boss. The new outfits were very light and everyone in the group liked them. Ibaru comments that they were made from the leather of snow yetis and that their boss had left them for them to wear. Elpalm was already wearing the outfits. The man comments that he knew they had cleared a portal with hundreds of people and offers an extra garment. Elpalm decides that this outfit will go to Ibaru, who says the item would be useless to him. He starts hurrying everyone, saying that they don't have time. A man shouts about how bored he is. A submarine can be seen in the waters. The men walk onto the sand and spot the shadow of a woman. It was Miss Minoru, who had been working very hard lately. A shout is heard saying that she had accomplished something. The woman had cleared the 200-person orange-rank portal and had returned. The captain places her pirate hat on the table and responds to someone in denial. Minoru tries to convince her to go to a 74-person portal, thinking it would be easy to clear. She says she is stronger than Eagle Eye was back then. The captain does not like what she's hearing, but Minoru wants revenge for Leah. The captain throws her out of the room without a second thought. Minoru starts crying at the response she received. At the table, she rests her head and starts venting about just ignoring and removing the wanted posters. A man laughs loudly and says this means she loved her, but Minoru thinks she is overprotective. Footsteps are heard, and someone comes running. Bursting through the door with urgency, the man calls for Minoru, saying there is a problem. Someone had removed the wanted posters from Eagle Eye's tomb. Two people look and comment on the group arriving, thinking they are from the mainland. The group enters, marching cautiously. Elpalm feels uneasy in this environment. The blonde woman comments that this was those people's territory and that they should stay quiet to avoid being targeted. Under Nautilus rules, those who remove wanted posters have priority in portal invasions. However, the poster that was removed belonged to a group with specific rights over the portal. Running, Minoru arrives, fuming with anger at everyone. She shouts that the poster that was removed belonged to her. Elpalm asks why she hadn't taken it herself, and she replies that she didn't have permission yet. She needed permission because Captain Karen was her mentor. Minoru calls them idiots and says that the posters on that ship were for pirates, and those who weren't pirates couldn't do that in all of Nautilus portals. A man spits something from his mouth and starts laughing at the whole situation, refusing to return the poster. The group then introduces themselves as the Pirates of Ibaru. From the back, Ibaru steps forward, finding it amusing and laughing at everything happening. Angry, Minoru says they can't just claim to be pirates when they are not. The boy says he is offended to be compared to a fake pirate, which he is not. He asks if she doesn't know Captain Ibaru of the Pirates of Ibaru. He says that a group led by a pirate becomes a pirate group, so wouldn't the rest of the group also be pirates? Minoru is happy to see someone joining the conversation. It was Mr. Marath, who was interested in understanding all the commotion. Elpalm thinks he doesn't recognize that name and replies that they weren't breaking any rules. Marath says that Karen should make the judgment since she was the one who placed the posters. The protagonist says that his entire group was there, all 5 of them. Marath asks for the boy's name and someone from above recognizes him. The man says that the boy is the survivor of the 100-person red-ranked portal. The others begin to consider that the group might be exceptional, given that most people who entered that portal never returned. But that didn't mean anything. The woman says that their invasion would fail anyway, so they were nothing but cowards. One asks if Miss Minoru isn't amazing for having cleared a 200-person portal. Murath starts to understand who Elpalm is and tries to negotiate a deal, giving them priority while asking them to give up the other 69 spots for another group. Elpalm agrees to the offer. He offers 100,000 mesos per person with a limit of 10 people. Minoru is in her quarters thinking about the proposal. She starts setting aside money just in case. She wants to do as she pleases and then beg for Captain Karen's forgiveness. With a look of anger, she declares that she cannot let anyone else take that portal. A man starts raging about the deal. He refuses to accept the opening of only 10 spots out of 69 and that 690,000 mesos were lost. None of them agree to return to the site and say they changed their minds because of the followers. The protagonist thinks that there is no reason to go back on what was said. Their goal was to assassinate Minoru, Captain Karen's second disciple, at Eagle Eye, where the first disciple was killed. Karen went into shock after losing her second disciple in the same portal and isolated herself from everyone. The followers took advantage of the situation to annihilate all the pirates of Nautilus, something that was supposed to happen 2 years from now, but everything had changed. Mania was moving money for Nautilus, meaning the plans were advancing, and Elpalm needed to stay ahead of everyone. He couldn't make that mistake again and had to reduce his mana consumption. Ibaru could only think about all the money that had been lost. Night falls over the ocean. A knock is heard at the door. Elpalm prepares to defend himself. He asks who is knocking, and is shocked by what he sees. He immediately asks them to come in. It was Captain Karen and Murath. He asks why they are in his quarters, and the captain requests sincerity in his words. She looks him straight in the eyes, asking if he is a follower of the Dark Mage. He looks at her with a shocked expression and doesn't understand how she knows about the followers. Murath notices the shock in the boy's eyes and asks if there is any connection between them. The protagonist promptly denies the information. Karen cannot believe his words and asks for some proof. Despite everything, the boy has nothing. He says he thought she already knew about his connection with the followers and that for this reason she was there, or she would have shot him a long time ago. She begins to suspect that he has ties to the Cross Hunters. She confirms that the followers are the only mercantile force of Kenya, meaning El Palm is their enemy, which does not mean that he is an ally of the captain. A proposal for an alliance starts to take shape. El Palm asks if there is anything he can offer her. The captain comments that the whole situation is very serious. The woman knew that the Dark Mage's followers were behind Leah's death, but they were also infiltrated in Nautilus. The boy thinks everything is happening too fast. She says she believes they are after Minoru, who had become an icon for the ship after Leah's loss. If Minoru dies, chaos will reign in Nautilus. Then they begin to negotiate. The captain asks him to protect Minoru in the Eagle Eye Tomb in exchange for a treasure item from Nautilus as a reward. People start entering the portal. Minoru looks at the horizon, deep in thought. A great light spreads through the environment. Now, everyone was inside the portal. The blonde-haired woman comments that this was not a field trip. A giant paw appears in front of the three fighters. It's a small green monster staring at them. They wanted to get rid of the baby creature, until they saw an even bigger monster. It emerged from behind the rocks with its enormous head and massive teeth. The warrior immediately gave up on taking the creature when he saw its mother. A weapon fired extensive shots. The creature began to be shot at and weakened. They wanted to kill them one by one, but the firearms only attracted more of them. They were just Dracos, but they were agile and very large. A great explosion spread through the battlefield. The two fighters were trying with all their might to take down the creature. It fell, injured on the ground, and Zio saw his plan working. The red-haired pirate started shooting with her weapon. More and more Dracos appeared, ready to take down anything in front of them. El Palm turns his back on the group, saying he has matters to take care of. But the monster is too strong and knocks the fighter down with all its might. With his huge mouth, the creature begins to destroy everything in front of it. It roars louder and louder. The fighter reacts. El Palm says that the group fights in a very disorganized way and teaches them what to do. Debo responds that from now on, they are one and they will fight like a family. The man would stand on the front lines, creating chaos. It was okay if they didn't accept his skills at first. His goal was to keep moving forward, no matter what happened, ignoring the attacks coming from behind. After all, his father would protect him. Even if he felt embarrassed, he would be safe. Ralph would be Debo's shield without using selfish combat techniques. He should fight for him from now on, protecting him at all costs. The two fought together against the Dracos and decided to put the plan into action. They ran and injured as many creatures as they could. Ralph noticed a creature approaching the boy and, scared, called out for him to turn around. He hit the Draco head-on. He realized that a father's love for his son was truly great. As for Kiri, she would take on the most important role of all. Her ability would prevent the opponent from healing from the burns they suffered, and she would use that to finish off all the enemies. She began fighting against them all, burning them and making remarkable progress. She was praised by El Palm. The girl found everything too easy. The three continued following orders. Two men were seen in front of the portal. One of them noticed that someone familiar was approaching. It was Cadril, bringing his allies, the members of the invasion. He said he had urgent matters and needed to notify Minoru immediately. A huge Draco lay stretched out on the ground while everyone rejoiced in victory. They managed to collect a mana stone and create find. While speaking, his friend was struck directly. Minoru couldn't believe what she was seeing. The woman started feeling pain. She had taken a very strong hit. A hand reached through the portal. Everyone was terrified and began to run. A battle broke out, weapons firing in every direction. Minoru realized she was in danger and tried to defend herself at all costs. Bullets filled the air along the battlefield. A strong red light reflected behind Minoru. She quickly noticed the incoming danger. She fired a magnum shot in an attempt to defend herself. The rocks began rolling on the ground. She realized someone was approaching. Angry, she demanded an explanation from that person. It was El Palm, who said he was just doing some cleaning. An immense flame began to form, and an order was given for Minoru to stay still so everything could be handled quickly. The group had forgotten someone. Ibru shouted that they had left him behind, and he couldn't understand why Debo had brought him along only to abandon him. He hid inside an anthill to escape the beasts. Ibru began thinking to himself that he couldn't stay hidden forever. From within the anthill, he tried to find a way out. Being a second circle adventurer, he didn't know what to do. He only knew that he didn't want to die in that place. He walked until he spotted a second portal. Something appeared behind the man. He turned around quickly, terrified, and tried to strike whoever was behind him. When he realized it was El Palm's creature, his fear faded. He wondered how long that animal had been there. A sound echoed, startling him. He screamed and a light filled the entire area. It was the portal. The creature remained still watching. Ibru sighed to himself and walked toward the portal. With something powerful in his eye, the protagonist commanded Minoru not to move. He promised to end it all soon. The red-haired woman was furious and demanded an explanation from him. Suddenly, a weapon was fired. A red light beamed from the device attached to the protagonist's eye. Everyone shielded themselves from the explosion, Casual and his companions arrived to help. Palm started fleeing desperately. The white-haired man ordered everyone to go after him. It was Karen who had sensed something was wrong and sent Casual and company into the portal. Minoru asked if it was really Karen who had given the order. The man arrived with all his power. He began relentlessly destroying everyone. Cute retaliated and started shooting. A fierce battle began. Everyone was after Palm. The flames grew all around. People were terrified and shaken. Suddenly, a massive explosion occurred. Like a fugitive, the boy hid, watching as his attacks had hit their targets. He ran until someone started shooting at him. It was Minoru, firing with incredible speed. The woman continued shooting, trying to hit him. The protagonist ran, trying to escape the bullets. He kept running until he spotted a portal. The men continued fighting to prevent the enemy from escaping. A red beam of light shot from the device in his eye. The man used his powers to aid him. A massive piece of earth rose from the ground. The light was blindingly strong. People sought shelter. Chunks of stone began falling. The stones collapsed near the passage where Minoru stood. A huge amount of rocks broke loose and fell. The smoke was so thick, the pirate started coughing. The protagonist was already prepared, staff in hand. Minoru carefully observed his movements. He was ready to attack her with all his strength, and the woman was cornered. The great red staff radiated power, but nothing happened. Terrified, Minoru asked what the man was trying to do. He stared at her, preparing to answer, and asked if she was ready to face the truth. The trigger was ready to be pulled. Meanwhile, the other fighters argued, thinking the woman had almost been hit. A gunshot was heard, and both looked on. Someone shouted, relieved to see Minoru safe. But the woman suddenly started firing at them. They didn't understand the reason for her rage. With her weapon raised, she fired multiple shots. The white-haired man was in shock. He was thrown backward after taking a hit. He couldn't understand the reason for all of this. Minoru stood imposingly atop the rocks. The other man also didn't understand the woman's motivations. She had spoken with Palm, who informed her that he had spent everything due to the girl's stubbornness. The red-haired woman called for the attention of those who had just arrived. She ordered Zio to gather the people and leave the area, and she added that these were Karen's orders. The woman was wearing a large golden necklace around her neck. Someone crossed the giant portal. Meanwhile, Ibaru was with Palm's beast and regretted entering, wishing he had stayed behind and waited. The place was a dark cave, filled with bones everywhere. From a distance, Ibaru saw someone walking. He ran while shouting at the stranger. He informed them that he wanted to walk together since he had been separated from his group. However, he was struck unexpectedly. The attack came from the slug that accompanied him, which murmured Kyo. That was when Ibaru realized who the stranger was. He looked up and saw a massive monster. His eyes widened in shock. More and more of them appeared each time he looked. Minoru kept ordering Zio to leave, but he noticed the instrument on her neck. It looked like a medallion he recognized. Returning to the scene with Minoru and Palm, the woman was arguing with him. She pointed her gun, ready to fire. But the man began telling her about Leah's death. He warned that there were followers of the Dark Mage among the pirates' followers, and that they were the ones who had killed Eagle Eye. He explained that he was there on Karen's orders to protect her from becoming the next target. Minoru, still in shock from the information, did not react. She believed that her own companions had done that to Leah. Palm handed the red-haired woman Karen's necklace. The object was the captain's symbol, and because of that, she believed the man's words. Soon she started thinking for herself, and she didn't understand how the protagonist could know exactly who to attack. A hooded figure spoke with Cheryl, saying he disagreed with something and didn't want to trust someone. The penetration monocle was an item that allowed one to see the flow of mana and distinguish the followers of the Dark Mage. No one had been able to use it after Korra's death. Palm didn't understand how someone who seemed to be a mage could use that instrument. The warriors suspected that everything might be a trap. The man asked them to trust him, saying that everything would be fine. They should observe because if the mana wasn't strong enough, the user wouldn't withstand it. People were paying close attention to Minoru's speech. Except for the three in front, everyone else was a follower. The woman's gaze conveyed immense fury. The accused contested, telling her not to believe the boy. But the monocle had already begun to reveal its abilities. Before the regression, dealing with followers was difficult due to their tattoos, which only became visible when mana was applied. The man stepped closer. And even though it was invisible to the naked eye, that didn't mean the tattoo wasn't really there. Palm grabbed the white-haired man, and now his tattoo appeared on his forehead. It was red and visible to all. It was the Dark Mage's symbol. Everyone was extremely terrified by the monocle's power. Minoru wasted no time and started shooting at the followers. A battle broke out in the cave. The combatant fought without understanding how there were so many followers. A scattering cannon was fired with full force. Minoru was on the front lines, fearless. The pirates shouted and tried to fight back. Palm had used too much mana to track the followers and didn't want to be at a disadvantage. A second portal was seen in the distance. Minoru shouted at the man who wanted to hide. She said she would finish the job alone, and ordered him to leave if he didn't want to get hurt. A skull-shaped object unleashed its power. The fight was not over yet. everyone remained in battle stance. Everything suddenly went dark. The red-haired pirate couldn't see anything. A beam of light appeared in the distance. The woman was startled by the noise. A man commented that she shouldn't be seeing anything and that it would be best to be prepared. No one understood what was happening. The pirates could no longer see. A weapon was aimed at the woman, intending to send her to the same fate as Eagle Eye. A thunderous shot was heard. Minoru found herself cornered after the shot, but she was saved by Elpalm, and the shooter was surprised by the turn of events. The bullet didn't hit her immediately, and Elpalm could still see. The man ordered them to shoot the adventurer, as he was too unpredictable. All the weapons fired at the same time. The protagonist used his mana to defend himself. His power sent everyone into a complete panic. He gripped his staff precisely for battle, and struck down all who sought to destroy him. A cannon's barrel was fired to contain his fury. A massive explosion occurs inside the cave. Many are hit directly. The power displayed was highly advantageous. An order to retreat is given. The phoenix feathers appear, and the revolver's power is unleashed. The fight remains intense, but the direction of the fire arrows has changed. The mage's follower holds the skull in his hands until he suddenly loses his arm and is struck with a dagger in the chest. Minoru regains her sight and sees everything that has happened. Now it was time for desperation. The Dark Mage's followers proclaim that they are doing all of this for him. Several bombs begin falling from the sky, and they all explode at once. The characters are thrown far away. Elpalm manages to save the people, but he is already at his limit and must reach the portal before his mana runs out. The warriors run toward the portal, but Minoru is attacked from behind. The protagonist tries to save her with his powers, but the mage's follower keeps throwing bombs, which hit the fighters directly. A massive explosion scatters debris throughout the cave. Minoru is injured and in pain. She realizes that yet another bomb has hit them. A crater opens in the ground and the portal is destroyed. Observing the destroyed portal, the adventurers fear that they have lost Elpalm and the rest of the group. That's when one of the young men says they shouldn't worry about the portal since it should reappear in a few moments. Instead, they should focus on the main objective, which is to eliminate Menor. With a move called Corkscrew, Pedro tries to strike the young woman, who uses her weapon to defend herself. However, the young man activates his Admiral Wings, worrying the girl as she realizes that her defense had no effect. Her only option is to jump to dodge the punch thrown by her enemy, which would surely have knocked her out. Thus, the adventurer positions herself behind the young man and fires multiple shots in rapid succession using 2 pistols. Mounted on her opponent, she uses his body as a shield against the attacks from the rest of the group, which works perfectly and gives her more time to counterattack. Even injured, the follower of evil tries to complete his mission. However, he is hit directly in the stomach, and finally in the head, instantly sending him to the afterlife. His allies call out his name, and Menor, with a dark look, says they have no time to waste, then asks what they are waiting for to attack her. Far from there, Elpalm observes what appears to be an enormous number of portals. The bearded adventurer explains that these are special portals, meaning that each one is connected to a different location in the second phase. So if a certain number of individuals pass through one, it closes, forcing the rest to use another passage. 3 members of the group cross through and arrive safely on the other side. Suddenly, Ibaru appears, running from monsters that are chasing him, screaming and thanking the trio for coming to save him. In response, Dibbo tells him not to come any closer and to run to the other side. The protagonist appears and, using his magical artifact, delivers a powerful strike. One of his allies, terrified, says that the monsters aren't normal because they are wearing the crew's clothes, meaning they must have been human before. Moreover, the creatures refuse to die even when attacked in the head. Worried, Elpalm wonders how it is possible for a monster to have no core and why things are different from his past life. Looking more closely, the young man finds a mana thread connected to the creatures' bodies, so long that it stretches to the other side of a wall, which is where Dibbo is, fighting bravely. Feeling pain due to his mana exhaustion, he holds his head, frustrated that he can no longer sustain his ability. Sensing that something is wrong, one of the adventurers shouts and tells him to get out of there before he gets hit. Out of nowhere, a huge explosion occurs, destroying the monster attacking the group. Menor appears, revealing herself as the one responsible for the attack. Firing multiple shots, the adventurer lands on the ground, leaving her friends. Without time for conversation, she simply tells them to get out of the way if they don't want to be annihilated. Then she unleashes an extremely powerful attack that even sends the ground's stones flying. On the ground, the protagonist looks ahead and sees a massive crater. Even so, the monsters are still greater in number and prepare to attack again. The red-haired young woman then says that she might be able to fire another shot like that if she uses all her mana. But Elpalm interrupts her, warning that they might need that ability later. Then he asks her to give him 3 minutes before making a move, since that is all he needs to clear the portal. Fighting, Dibbo wonders what is happening as the monsters refuse to die no matter what. To his misfortune, when the creature grabs his neck with all its strength. But the young man is saved by another adventurer, who tells him to stop whining and swing his axe again. Irritated, Ibaru keeps attacking, demanding that the creatures fall already. One of his strikes lands, and his ally says that was a brilliant move. However, a large tentacle starts emerging from the ground, showing that the battle is far from over. Rising up, a giant monster positions itself in front of the group, furious for being woken up against its will, leaving the red-banded young man regretting his last move, which had seemed spectacular. Trying to contain the threat, the adventurers unleash their full firepower. Meanwhile, Elpalm feels as if his heart will explode at any moment if he continues the process. Without the possibility of advancing to the next circle, due to the risk, he realizes that this is his only option. Recalling a time in his past life when he was in the same situation and had to find another method to improve his abilities. That method involves relying on mana stones, which in theory were only used to advance to the next circle. But since these items contain the monster's life force, the young man wondered if it was possible to convert that energy into mana by consuming its core, which theoretically would help the consumer regenerate lost mana provided they could keep the mana increase under control. To do this, the adventurer must make the mana travel to their heart along with the bloodstream and endure it until the process is complete. Minoru, still fighting bravely, is surprised by a voice that praises her good work. Turning around, she sees the protagonist who asks her to prepare to use that special ability. As the battle progresses, one of the adventurers notices a mushroom growing on his body. Realizing that this is how people are transformed into zombies, taking drastic action, he wounds his own arm to tear the mushroom off. Then, using his healing ability, he regenerates the wound. Shouting, he warns the group to avoid direct contact with the monster's tentacles, unless they want to turn into one of those disgusting, repulsive zombies. Dibbo, in his mind, wonders if this creature is the boss of the area. Meanwhile, Cheryl notices that the group is too slow, which will end up costing them all their lives if they don't change their pace. The young man with the axe steps forward and asks his companions to leave this to him and find a safe place. Determined to be the hero, he charges at the creature with all his might, only to be hit directly by the beast's tongue. Falling, he realizes that someone stepped in front of him and prevented his imminent death. On the other side of the wall, Minoru receives instructions from Elpalm, who asks her to focus on maintaining her ability while he takes care of the aim. That way, they can finally create an opening and reach the area where the rest of the group and the boss are. With time running out, he orders the young woman to begin what is their only chance. Obeying, the adventurer fires her crushing bullet, which, as it pierces through the wall, leaves a trail of destruction. In his mind, the protagonist pleads for the projectile to move faster before he and his ally lose their strength. Using all his energy, he urges the young woman to hold on. Then, he unleashes several fire arrows, which enhance the speed of the crushing bullet and the power of the attack. One of the group members shouts, warning that his ammo has run out as he faces the approaching monsters. Trying to help, he tells the dude to be careful. Thinking to himself, Elpalm concludes that these monsters without cores were tricked and used as puppets by the true owner of the core, the boss hiding on the other side of the massive stone wall. That's why all of them seem invincible, which means that if they want to end this, they must target the leader, not its minions. With his fist clenched, the protagonist steps forward and prepares to unleash his move called Rocket Impact, completely destroying the core of the creature that was using other monsters to do its dirty work. On the ground, everyone watches in disbelief as a massive explosion occurs, which causes the smaller monsters to also explode instantly. Iburu, with tears in his eyes, is relieved to be safe. With the process completed, the protagonist smiles and says that now the portal is clean. Returning to the past, Minoru remembers how her parents were horrible people, and that Lee was the only one who defended her from them, becoming her greatest inspiration and heroine. Talking to the woman, she says that it has been 10 years since their master took them in, but it feels like just yesterday. Lamenting, the young girl says that at least her friend is a genius recognized by Kirin. Meanwhile, she feels pressured, as if the distance between them grows larger by the minute. Flicking the adventurer's ear, the woman tells her that confidence is definitely not her strong suit. Then she asks her not to feel pressured since she will always be by her side. On the battlefield, Dibbo asks Kiri if she's okay. In response, she says yes, thanks to the new equipment she is wearing. Angry, Ralph disagrees and says that in reality, she's only fine because of his healing ability. Suddenly, something catches the group's attention. As they approach, they see Lee's body tied with ropes to a stone. Intrigued, one of them questions whether the young woman had tied herself up on purpose before turning into a zombie mushroom. In her pocket, there is a letter stating that the Dark Mage's followers have returned, and that they have already infiltrated deeply into Nautilus, but she will not be able to return soon. Her master must take care. Additionally, she wrote something for Menor, warning that half of the group's members were traitors. Therefore, she should not trust anyone. Reading all of that makes the red-haired adventurer break down in tears. Meanwhile, outside the portal, the Dark Mage's followers comment that the others should have returned by now. One of the men says that Cadril took the fragment of the night, so he should not worry about the members' safety. To his surprise, one of his allies is struck, making everyone realize that they have fallen into a massive ambush. A woman holding a pistol appears and asks one of the men how it feels to be deceived for the first time. With all of them eliminated, she orders her soldiers to hold their positions. Standing before her, a man tells the woman not to worry. After all, they sent that man with the group for a reason. Worried, Carvin says that if Menor does not return, she will never be able to forgive herself. Suddenly, someone calls her name, surprising her. The red-haired adventurer appears, carrying Leah's body in her arms, leaving the woman and her ally completely in shock. Crying, Minna says that she has brought her sister back, making Chiron unable to hold back her own tears. Later, numerous people gather in boats with torches lit. Dubo is surprised by the number of people, and Curie says that basically all of Nautilus is present. After all, this is Eagle Eye's funeral. Curious, the young man asks where El Palm is. He is drinking a mana potion in the company of Chiron, who says that what he's asking for is a major request. After all, mana potions are incredibly valuable, especially since the recipe has been lost. In response, the young man says he knows, and that is exactly why he is asking her, as she possesses great financial power. Curious, the woman asks why he wants to help them again, and he says that he believes there are still things they need to work on together. Due to the adventurer's distrust, the young man says that she should see this as another deal and provide him with 2 items from her stock instead of just 1. In exchange, he will locate all of the Dark Mage's followers within Nautilus. After the funeral, an adventurer approaches and asks Minna why she looks so deep in thought. Sad, the young woman says it's nothing and just asks him to leave her alone. He then tells her that she should accept El Palm's recruitment proposal. After all, everything worked out thanks to the young man. Furthermore, the followers who eliminated Leah are still walking around freely. And if there's one thing he knows she wants to do, it's to get revenge, which is also something he desires. Ending the conversation, Zio smiles and says he will protect the place if she decides to go. But the young woman, jokingly, says she can't trust him due to his weakness, starting a playful exchange of insults. The next day, El Palm accompanies Karen on a boat. They arrive before a massive gate guarded by armed adventurers, who, upon seeing the woman, allow them to enter. Seeing the environment inside, the young man is shocked to discover that this is where the pirate keeps her treasures. He asks if he can get brief descriptions of the items he chooses, but the woman says that a pirate never reveals the value of a treasure, adding that the deal was for her to provide 2 items and nothing more. Observing the riches, the young man in his thoughts says that the place is even more incredible than he expected. So he needs to choose wisely which 2 items he will take. Karen notices when the young man seems to have already decided what he wants and is surprised by his quick decision. El Palm approaches an item that radiates a blue light, revealing that in the past, when the followers took their activities to the surface, there were some who committed genocide against the Allied forces. One of them was a young man named Leek, known as the Traitor of Humanity. He had infiltrated the ranks of the Allied forces as a spy and betrayed everyone at a crucial moment when they were preparing to counterattack, carrying with him the very item now before El Palm, which turned him into a symbol of fear. Taking the object and placing it on his arm, the young man informs the pirate that this is his first choice. Without saying anything, the woman simply thinks that he has a good eye, though she doesn't understand why he picked that specific item. Taking another walk around the place, something gleams amid a pile of gold coins and catches the protagonist's attention. Getting closer, he sees that it is a ring that appears to emit no energy at all. To his surprise, the object flies onto his finger. Startled, he asks Karen what that item is and why that just happened. In response, the woman apologizes but tells him that the ring is reserved for someone else, so he must choose something else. The young man says he understands perfectly, except for one small issue. He cannot remove the object from his finger. Far away, someone kneeling informs another person that the mission in Gold Ritchie was successfully completed. Intrigued, the man asks about El Palm, stating that by now, everything should already be over. Before him, the young woman begins to tremble and, apologizing, says that this particular mission was a failure. Furious, the Vogue starts shouting and asks how everything could have gone wrong, even though they had the fragment of the night. Then he warns that he will give her only one more chance, and that if she fails again, she will have to pay with her own life. Meanwhile, Minna repacks her things, showing that she is determined to leave. On the boat, the bearded adventurer smiles and says that they will return soon. Then he tells Zio to improve his dart skills until then. Dubo asks the protagonist if they can leave, and he confirms, but the red-haired adventurer appears and tells him to wait. Then she asks if the boat has space for one more person. Elsewhere, far away, 2 people are fighting bravely. One of the young men, upon seeing an ally being annihilated, tells the other to just keep running, while the other orders him not to look back. Shouting, the braided young man says that if things continue like this, they won't be able to survive. Spotting what appears to be a trap, Bukran tells his friend to run inside while he activates the device. The plan works, but before the young man can run as well, a massive sword strikes him directly. Injured, he tells the other young man to escape while he still can. Behind them, a knight in armor mounted on a skeletal horse prepares to attack again. Mr. Abbas, furious, demands to know how El Palm has the audacity to enter his office like that after returning empty-handed. The young man, unfazed by the scolding, simply says that he has an idea. Then he informs him that Minoru, the target of the followers in the raid, has decided to join the group, which means that the enemies will surely attack again. Shouting, the man asks if the young man really thinks he is an idiot who will just sit around and wait. Thinking to himself, the protagonist says that he cannot reveal everything he knows yet, since launching a war now won't solve the entire problem. So he simply tells the man out loud that it won't take long for things to happen. Later, an adventurer questions El Palm about why he accepted another member into the group without everyone's consent. Interrupting, Debo asks why he thinks the leader needs his approval, considering he is the team leader. The The man argues that the young man is only a temporary leader. El Palm responds that may be true, but if he doesn't like something, he should say so, since he can challenge him for leadership whenever he wants. Irritated, the bearded adventurer says that he only cares about the money he will receive and that now, with another person in the group, his share will be reduced. Standing up, the protagonist announces that he needs to go somewhere, so they will take a break from training for the day. Watching as each member of the group goes off in different directions, the bodyguards wonder if they could all just stick together to make their job easier. Deciding then to separate as well to protect everyone. Remembering his conversation with Curia, the protagonist goes to meet the owner of the ring, which refuses to come off his finger. Arriving at the place, he tells the blonde young woman that he came seeking her approval, but she is confused. Showing the ring, the young man says he would like the ownership of the object to be transferred to him. Widening her eyes, the young woman appears shocked upon seeing the item, saying next that she cannot do anything, as the true owner is not present at the moment. The young man then asks where he can find the owner, and the young woman says that, for that, he needs to rescue him, who is Pyre, the tracker of heroes, the same young man who was previously fighting against the Skeletal Knight. It is revealed that on the day of the apocalypse, the only hope for humanity on the brink of extinction was Evan, the successor of Freud, Luminous, the challenger of fate, Phantom, the great thief, Mercedes, the queen of the elves, Aran, the heroine of the axe, and Shade, the mysterious hero, who together formed the group of the 6 legendary heroes. Together, they made everyone witness absolutely supreme powers, and with the miracle they performed, they restored humanity's hope that they would eventually save the world whenever necessary. However, this did not happen, and during the battle against the Black Mage 800 years ago, the heroes' items fell into the Rift of Time, being discovered in the portals of this era for some reason. With the Alliance in ruins, the heroes were unable to recover their powers, which means that in this life, solid shields must be placed to protect them. El Palm says he will serve as bait to lure the followers out, as well as unite the factions of Maple World to form an even more powerful alliance and change history once and for all. Approaching the destination, Yibo is enchanted by the landscape. The protagonist then asks everyone to place a piece of cloth with symbols somewhere on their body. When everyone does so, a great portal opens. Shocked, Menor says that on their own, they would never have found that. Thinking to himself, the young man with the ring still stuck on his finger says he must save Pure at all costs, since he is capable of tracking the hero's items. Inside the place, in a great fortress, the axe-wielding adventurer celebrates the fact that they managed to clear the first portal in just 3 hours. Kiri then asks him to wipe the ashes off his face before saying that the task was a piece of cake. Surprised, the red-haired young woman asks if he only had the first circle, but the young man says he is a genius and grows very fast. Joining the conversation, El Palm tells him not to rush so much because, contrary to what others say, leveling up in circles is not always good, since doing so means that all his attributes will change quickly, which creates tension in the body, potentially even hindering growth. Concluding the explanation, the young man says he only did it because he had no choice and, in his thoughts, remembers how it harmed him in his past life where he could not advance beyond the 7th circle. Thus, now he needs to progress at the right moments to reach the 8th. Interrupting his daydream, Kiri asks if they didn't get there too quickly, since the goal was to find someone, not clear the portal. Reassuring her, the protagonist says he has already checked and that they have not lost track of the target, and using his magical eye patch, he warns that they have company. Suddenly, monstrous, skull-faced flying creatures appear, ready to attack. Due to the number of enemies, the group leader asks everyone to start running. Menor says that, since they are all skeletons, bullets will not work. Out of nowhere, someone appears shouting, ordering everyone to drop to the ground. The person activates a trap, and all the creatures are annihilated. Appearing behind the group, Pyre says that move is called Monocle of 7 Penetrations, then pleads for the group to give him something to eat, as he is starving. Recovered, the young man reveals that he knows the skeleton's behavioral patterns and the setup of the devices due to the long time he has been trapped. The only problem being that his food ran out 5 days ago and there were no monsters in the place to hunt. El Palm, interrupting the story, says he has a favorite ask, then decides to wait until the young man finishes eating. Happy, the red-haired adventurer says that since the young man knows where the exit portal is, they just need to make a run for it, all without needing to defeat the boss. Upon hearing this, Pyre falls to his knees and begs them to be his bodyguards for 3 days because he needs to find an item, and if he leaves, his friends will have died in vain. Since he is not good at fighting, if he tries to do it alone, he will meet the same fate as the others. Therefore, if they help him, he promises to give them a reward. Intrigued, the protagonist asks how he plans to find something in 3 days if he couldn't find it in a month. Responding, the young man says he didn't find it because he didn't look in the dangerous regions. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Evoke says that his plan is beginning and that El Palm won't be able to escape this time. Surprising him, someone appears behind the man and asks if he is sure. Turning around, he finds himself facing a giant spider, which says it is disappointed that he can't even get rid of the little explorer. then questioning how much longer he intends to disgrace himself. On his knees, the man says he has no excuses for his failures and will accept any punishment, begging only for one more chance, as his plans are already in motion. The monster, whose name is Will, agrees and asks him to explain his plan in more detail. Inside the portal, the group of adventurers continues fighting against the skeletons, which keep appearing. The creatures are smart and even use shields to protect themselves while attacking. Another trap is activated, trapping them inside a room. Smiling, Dibbo says that now that the path is blocked, the mission will be easier. But someone says they don't have time since the devices are not perfect, and as soon as one path closes, another opens. Facing a massive knight with an even bigger sword, the protagonist says that in any case, they just need to find the item Pyre is looking for. The axe-wielding adventurer questions if they are really in the right place. Answering, Elpalm says that the air there feels different. His friend then asks who he thinks built that place, and he says he has no idea. Kiri catches everyone's attention and asks them to look at something she found. A text engraved on a plaque that appears to be in a different language, which is quite suspicious. Approaching, Pyre says is a riddle written in ancient text, seemingly giving clues about the item's whereabouts. Minoru then asks if he thinks a strange symbol drawn on a large door has something to do with it, and the other two adventurers inform them that they found identical doors. The young man says that each symbol must mean something, some being simpler than others. Thinking for a moment, he suggests that everyone channel mana through their hand onto the light symbol, following a clue from the text. Dibbo obeys, and one of the doors opens, leaving him surprised by how easy it was. However, to his misfortune, a large explosion occurs. As the smoke clears, the young man is fine, just a bit shaken. Pyre then says that, in this case, the sun was not the light the riddle referred to. Reflecting a bit more, he concludes that the answer must be the moon. This time, the bearded adventurer steps up, saying that he trusts the young man, only to be struck by a massive rock. Panicking, the treasure hunter promises to get it right next time. Kiri says that the only thing they know for sure is that the traps are triggered when they get it wrong, which seems to be related to the rock element, but she has no idea what the X means. Elpalm, presenting a solution, says that, in that case, they should solve the riddle first, and then try to find the matching symbol. Since the text says an actor is watching them from above, it might be the moon, the stars, or the clouds. Eliminating the clouds, they should pursue the light. Pyre has a realization and says it must be the stars, as even when they move, their lights do not disappear in the night sky, and what represents them must be the X symbol. Taking the lead, he places his hand on the door, and a great blue light begins to radiate. Inside, a dark corridor appears, and the young man, relieved, says it seems they succeeded. Now they should be able to find the item if they follow the path. A dark-haired woman appears and says that, in that case, she and her allies will take care of the rest. The protagonist steps in front of the braided young man and prevents him from being hit by the woman's attack. She retaliates, and the young man blocks her again, then takes her down in succession with an attack from his staff. However, the woman uses a teleportation skill and appears behind the young man. This angers the rest of the group, but before they can do anything, more enemies appear, taking them by surprise. Surrounded, another woman appears and says they should take it easy after all, they need the hero's item. Pyre asks the protagonist how those people found the portal entrance, and he says he has no idea. Someone then says that it seems they caught them off guard, given the look of curiosity on their faces, and launching into an attack, asks why they don't clear up their doubts with him. Ralph attacks the group leader, and Debo asks what he thinks he's doing. Responding, he says he's doing it for money, revealing himself to be a complete traitor, flashing back to the past when he was admiring his riches. Someone knocked on his door, making him quickly lock his safe and hide it under the bed. Annoyed, he opens the door to whoever it is, and upon seeing that it's his bodyguards, he orders them to return to their posts and stop bothering him. One of the men tells him to shut up and says they are there because someone wants to meet him. Scoffing, the adventurer says he's not interested at all after all, who sends henchmen without offering anything first. That's when the woman from the mercantile group Kenya appears and says she was hoping to discuss the offer in person. In the present, seeing Kiri's expression, Ralph asks her not to look at him like that. Debo, furious, curses him and asks how he dares to betray them for a bit of gold. Laughing, the man says that actually it's not just a bit of gold. After all, Alpalm's head alone is worth an astonishing 100 million mesos. Then questioning who would be crazy enough to pass up such an opportunity, Menor decides to attack to put an end to the nonsense of their former ally turned traitor, prompting the Black Mage's followers to attack as well. The gray-haired woman attacks Kiri and politely says she will begin. Furious, the young woman asks if she really thinks that cheap trick will work. Confirming, the enemy says that although Kiri has learned to wield two-handed weapons, she still tends to use only her right hand to deliver powerful attacks. Thus, knowing her movement pattern, dodging her attacks is a very easy task. While fighting, she also says that Debo is quite skilled in one-on-one combat but often shows weakness against multiple enemies, then asking everyone there to simply accept their fate as they know everything about them. Menor starts firing multiple shots and an enemy appears behind her, stating that such a reaction was expected from Chiron's protege. The young woman shoots at the woman, but she teleports and uses her chains to immobilize her. However, Ralph, who is fighting El Palm, ends up interfering, then saying that it's not easy to keep the young man under control, even with broken ribs. Pierre is hit directly and can't even defend himself. But to the enemy's surprise, it was all just an illusion and the real Pyre wasn't there. The young man appears behind him, revealing his true location, then placing his hand on one of the symbols to activate a trap. A large hole opens in the ground and all the enemies fall in. Meanwhile, the heroes shout to each other to grab onto something and avoid falling. Debo embeds his axe into the wall and tells his friends to hold on tight. Hanging on, they prepare to enter a passage in the walls, successfully achieving their goal, though just barely. Suddenly, a door descends, sealing the hole they pass through. Meanwhile, the floor above also closes, leaving everyone trapped underground. The place they were in resembled a labyrinth, and judging by the diverging paths, they could be connected to a different area. Kiri comments that the routes through the openings in the walls would lead them there. Menor says they might find El Palm if they were lucky, but the chances were slim. While walking, she steps on a trap. Immediately, bars descend from the ceiling. The adventurers dodge them but end up separated. Now they were sure they were screwed. The girl shakes the bars and ends up blaming Debo, calling him an idiot, but he says he didn't do anything. At that moment, a loud sound of gears turning can be heard. To their shock, the walls where Debo and Menor were begin to close in. Kiri tries using Solar Slash to cut the bars. However, they don't even crack. The portcullis was protected by an energy barrier. Menor decides to use her weapon and fires the crushing bullet, which causes an explosion against the door. On the other side, Kiri shields herself and the bars begin to bend as if they are about to give way. But even so, they don't break, and the explosion passes through them. Amid the smoke, she looks on hopefully, but is frustrated to see that it didn't work. As she stands up, she realizes that the walls are getting closer and closer. Debo places each hand on the walls to try to slow their advance. He screams, and it seems that his strength is making a difference. Kiri watches the scene and shouts his name. The adventurer says he refuses to fall that way. Minoru uses her legs and asks the woman for help because she doesn't want to join Leah so soon. On the other side, she wonders if there is any way to assist. Dripping with sweat, Debo says it's time to change plans. He says he hates owing favors to people and was planning to save her from a tough situation, just like she did last time. But since he has no choice now, she'll have to be the knight in shining armor once again. So he asks her to save him again. Smiling, Kiri calls him an idiot for joking in that situation and grips her sword. She shouts for him to try holding on a little longer. The gate was probably operated by magic, meaning something must be supplying mana to the mechanism. Running, she tells her friend that he now owes her 2 favors and not to die before paying them back. At the same time, El Palm and Fur are fleeing from Kenya, and she comments that each of them is a beast. They end up at a dead end. The labyrinth is absurd, and they wonder where they should go. Looking at their pursuers, he shouts for them to wait. Grabbing his spear, he activates his skill. To push them back, the 2 attack while retreating. Ralph yells that they shouldn't underestimate them. The woman says they have already cornered them and that they can't run forever. But above her, something appears. Causing an explosion, one of the members is hit, forcing the others to back away. She takes no damage, and the man tells her not to die until she pays what she owes him. One of them throws a knife at Fur, and she uses the protection talisman. However, her opponent enhances the weapon with a shuriken explosion. Before she is hit, a sudden yank by the neck pulls her back away from the forming explosion. El Palm escapes with her, dragging her by the clothes while the girl complains about the pain in her neck. When they get far enough, he throws her to the ground. Looking at their approaching opponents, he prepares for battle. He manages to strike one of them in the stomach with his skill. The others keep throwing enhanced knives, and with speed, the fighter begins dodging. Where they land, they explode, hitting everything around. El Palm is surrounded by dozens of members of the mercantile group Kenya. With determination, the warrior manages to cut down those who get close. Due to the sheer number, the young man starts to get tired and breathless. Even with several down, others are still around him. They look at him in astonishment, saying he is a monster. Kiri is in a place where an energy surge is being released through a device. Exhausted, she wonders if that's what she was looking for. Either way, she has no time to find another one if it isn't. But that structure supplies mana to the entire area. Looking at the device, she notices a massive amount of mana and realizes she could free her friends if she destroys it. However, behind her, someone smiles and calls for her attention. The woman launches a Badajetsu at her, striking her directly. Stopping and turning to face her, she says Kiri is lucky because she only needs to kill her to finish off the other 2 as well. To provoke her, she says that the girl is the weakest among them, that things couldn't get any easier than this. Kiri tells the woman to get out of her way because she won't waste time. Kasha introduces herself and says she can't grant her request. She asks her not to be aggressive and to discuss the situation. Grabbing her sword, Kiri uses the Rising Sun skill, telling her to be quiet and move along because she's busy. Grabbing her weapons, Kasha calls her foolish and stubborn. Throwing them all at once, she says she has no choice but to kill her. Defending herself, Kiri wonders where she keeps so many throwing knives. Then she realizes that some of them aren't real. One comes straight at her, and when she dodges, she notices the destruction they cause on the ground. This is bad because she can't tell which ones are real. While defending herself, one of the weapons moves to strike her from behind, but Kiri quickly notices and intercepts it. Kasha is changing the direction of the blades with telekinesis, and the situation is getting worse. When she looks, she notices that two of them are crossing paths. In that moment, a sword is thrown directly at her, striking her fully. To her surprise, Kiri manages to catch it with her arm before it hits her stomach. Her opponent wasn't using telekinesis, but was instead controlling the weapon's trajectories with wires. Grabbing one of them, she says she could use them to her advantage. When she pulls, the girl is dragged toward her, smiling. Several blades pass through the wires at the same time, striking the woman who tries to protect herself at all costs. Kasha propels herself with one of her wires and uses the Batojutsu skill again, swiftly heading toward her. The explosion caused by the weapon lifts several stones and dust from the ground. Walking on her wires, the girl says that the other has no talent for the job but could abandon her companions and run away. Seeing her on the ground, she says that she should do that unless her pride won't let her. She says that Kiri was born into a house of great prestige, wealth, and global influence, and that she left it behind to follow a dangerous path. Irritated, the woman tells her to stop talking, but the other tells her not to get upset and frown. It's bad for her skin. Approaching, she says that Maple World does not provide opportunities for people of humble origins. She asks if it is fair for someone from a good family to get a second and third chance even without talent. Kiri remembers someone in her childhood telling her to get out of their sight and that she wouldn't be there if it weren't for her family. She says her group consists of extraordinarily skilled adventurers, except for one. She begins listing all the others' abilities to belittle her, but Kiri interrupts. She admits she is weak and that she hasn't been able to bring a smile to her master or her parents. She still has a long way to go to reach the level of her companions. Running toward her, she says that doesn't mean the other is superior. She repeats that she should move aside and says she doesn't have time. Grabbing her sword, the opponent calls her stubborn and trash, while below, Kiri prepares to attack. Using the wires, her opponent starts maneuvering the knives to strike her. She counters with the Falling Moon, Lunar Division skill. Kasha wonders what kind of skill that is and why no one told her about it. To her surprise, her wires begin to be cut. Flying toward her, Kiri says that silly tricks won't get her far. Once again, she swiftly uses the Hitokuri 100 strikes. Remembering her childhood, someone asks her if she really believes she was chosen to be an adventurer because of her family. Slamming his hand on the ground, the man says that some people struggle to see the true value of a treasure. He tells her not to let others influence her and not to set limits on her own progress. Approaching, he says that if she truly understands, she will be able to believe in herself and become more powerful than anyone else. Kasha can't believe her opponent has matched her speed, and now they are face to face. With a single strike, Kiri manages to hit her. Counterattacking, Kasha asks how she dares, but the woman dodges her attack. Burning the enemy wasn't the only thing she could do. The power within her was like the vast universe that exists beyond. She uses the Equinox cycle, unleashing a massive fireball toward her opponent. Using her sword, Kasha tries to approach and slashes through the fireball with a gust. Maybe she is starting to understand what her master meant, that she wouldn't find her true self by forcing herself to be someone she's not. But she was afraid of realizing this too late. However, she still believes in her friends who trust in her and in themselves. The Kanya members are behind them, calling them filthy rats and saying they need to find them. Fur says they can't keep avoiding them with tricks like that. Looking at her companion, she asks him to hold on. They'd find them and corner them to capture them, but El Palm manages to strike down those who get too close. They go after Fur, saying she doesn't know how to fight and that she is a rookie, which offends her. Using magic to attack them, she shouts that they are underestimating her. Noticing that the enemy won't be affected, she starts crying and says she lied. She begs them to underestimate her. Behind her, two blasts of power hit the men approaching her, and looking to the side, she sees her companion amid the dust. One of them says he looks tired and swiftly strikes him in the stomach, making him spit red juice and leaving Fur worried. Viewed injured, El Palm extends his hand toward the enemy's face to unleash his skill on her. Where they are, a massive explosion occurs, lifting stones and dust. The woman calls him persistent, but as she moves in to attack them, she realizes they have disappeared. Rao says this is getting irritating and that they underestimated El Palm, but she says it's fine, because their prey has already been bitten. Elsewhere, Fur asks the man if he is okay when she sees him spitting his red juice. When he sees what he vomited, he notices that smoke is coming out and asks if it was poison. His enemies start running, knowing that he would last a maximum of 40 minutes. The poison that hit him was a potent substance, causing excruciating pain and fatal damage. Rao says that he won't be able to run for long. They reach two passageways and Bijou separates from them, telling him to do his job. Fur carries him through the corridor, saying she didn't expect things to be this bad and that she shouldn't have insisted on exploring the ruins. With his head down, he begins to worry. El Palm tells her not to worry because the woman's ability would have caught him sooner or later. Just wasn't a trick like when he faced the twins. She was really using teleportation abilities. He says he will take care of Beiju and asks him to do what he came here to do, leaving him confused. Looking up, he says that what was above them must be the door that only a device could open. If his guess was correct, solving the puzzle would provide mana to the device. Touching the stone, she tells him to hold on because she will try her best. Fur begins assembling the puzzle. Sitting behind her, the young man says there's no need to rush because he also has something to do and begins activating his ability to look through the labyrinth's rooms. Running, Ralph tells everyone not to do anything because the young man is his. One of the members says they have no reason to listen to him. Turning around, he tells them to talk to the boss and doesn't notice a fireball heading straight for him. Lightning bolts are fired and one of the men next to him is hit. The man says he can't see him anywhere. Ralph wonders if El Palm is using the monocle to bring the entire structure within his reach. As he is thinking, one of the lightning bolts heads toward him, but he manages to escape before getting hit. At the same time, Fur completes the puzzle. Turning to the young man, she says that now the device should activate immediately. However, when she looks at him, she realizes he isn't responding and starts to panic. Something breaks behind her, and she wonders what's happening. She quickly realizes that the mana flow was cut off when someone arrived at their location. Ralph says he finally found them and places his hand on her shoulder. Dubbo asks the others if they heard a noise behind them. Approaching one of the corners, he notices that the walls are vibrating. A massive wave of water rushes toward them, and they start running desperately. They don't run fast enough and are caught by the wave. The water is strong and comes from all directions, throwing them away. Beiju asks what that annoying sound is and says they need to hurry, but someone tells her she talks too much. He explains that the place is going to be flooded, and the woman comments that she thought he had run away. Carrying Fur and El Palm, Ralph says he has suffered a lot. He talks about the other people who died and noticing a certain concern, asks if someone there was important to her. He says he finished the job and asks for the rest of the payment before handing over the warrior. She says the young man is still alive, and the other responds that he couldn't kill him because of the deal. Throwing the money to Ralph, she comments that his attitude is annoying but that she can trust him. The payment is 100 million mesos. Throwing the two near her, he says it was good doing business with her. Approaching the young man, Beiju says that this is a pretty boring ending for him, considering what he did to the group, but that it was for the Black Mage. Then she corrects herself and says that it was for her master, Lord Evoke. Laughing, the woman begins destroying the bodies on the ground. But when she stops, she realizes she was destroying one of her men's bodies and not theirs. At that moment, Ralph shouts in surprise and jumps at her. She dodges the attack and says she shouldn't have trusted him. At that moment, she notices a jet of energy heading straight for her neck. Beiju keeps dodging, but the jet follows her, making her wonder how he dares to play with her. She doesn't need to worry as enough time has passed for the poison to spread through his body. She just needs to confirm the corpse. Turning around, she thanks El Palm for showing up and making her job easier, saying that he's almost dead. Behind her, the man uses his bow to launch flaming arrows at her. Looking at him, she wonders how he is still fine, but she doesn't have time as the attacks start getting stronger and a massive explosion occurs. Amid the smoke, Ralph asks them to take it easy. In front of them, the smoke wall begins to dissipate. Seeing Beiju appear, they realize how resilient she is. She asks the man why, as she thought he would do anything for money. He explains that if they won, the world would be destroyed. In that case, all the money he worked so hard to earn would turn into rolls of toilet paper, so it wouldn't help. Joining her had been his master's plan from the beginning. El Palm knew that Kenya was cornered and would want an assassin, and when he looked at him, the result was obvious. She asks if hurting the young man was also part of the plan to deceive her, but Ralph reveals that he is the best healer in Maple World, and that the wound would heal in no time. Of course he would have problems if he had actually attacked, and he says he doesn't want to brag. Smiling, he says he managed to get 100 million thanks to her, now she was alone. Using her Beiju ability, she says she will make him regret that decision. Elsewhere, Kiri was underwater when Dibbo swam toward her. He touches her, and she wakes up with a start. Surfacing, the young man asks if she is alive. Menor also appears, asking what happened. Dubbo says this is not a good situation. Water was gushing from all sides, and it wouldn't take even 30 minutes for the place to be completely flooded. Looking up, the girl says the only way to escape is by opening the ceiling. But there was no way to open the path because she had destroyed the power supply. Behind Menor, something appears, spraying water everywhere. When Dubbo asks what happened, he is confused. Where they were, a statue begins to move. The girl is panting amid the fire surrounding the place. Looking at the fallen body on the ground, she calls him scum. She says that hell is too good a place for trash like him, and that he merely paid the price for his actions. Behind her, a man says that her future is no better than his because she has blood on her hands. Amid the fire and all the dead bodies on the ground, he says that his revenge is over. He states that, as promised, his life now belongs to her. Beiju was destroying all of El Palm's and Ralph's clones. She wonders when they will give up and asserts that using clones is an outdated trick. Most of them are mere illusions and therefore harmless. Seeing the young man, she realizes the real problem is that some of them are actually real. Fur tells them to hurry because she can't keep using her talisman abilities forever. El Palm uses his monocle to launch several arrows toward the woman. The arrows explode upon hitting the ground. She appears behind the girl and dodging the attack counterattacks, saying she almost got her. Far away, Fur comments that she bets Beiju can't tell which one is real. Ralph also appears and punches her, asking what happened to her confidence. Beiju tries to use her chains, but the man dodges her attacks. However, due to a mistake, one of them wraps around his neck. He says it was a good attempt, but that wouldn't work. However, the chains continue to tighten more and more. Then Elpam appears and cuts the chain, only to be struck immediately afterward. The three stare at each other, and the girl calls him trash. Walking toward the girl, he says she will be the first, then suddenly dashes away, apologizing. The man uses his ability against his opponents, and the fight continues. Watching the battle, Fur thinks that all three of them are monsters. They fight fiercely against the girl, who resists everything and counterattacks. The abilities they unleash cause explosions, lifting stones from the ground. Biju uses Flash of Darkness, creating a massive explosion of purple light, and attacks the two simultaneously, throwing them away. Dropping her weapon, she says she will kill them, even if it is the last thing she does. She stops and observes the passages, which are making an increasingly loud noise. Behind her, water starts pouring from the passages, sweeping everything away. All of them are dragged away, unable to hold on to anything. Ralph manages to climb one of the pillars and comments that their time is up. Even underwater, the woman quickly rises and strikes him before he can retreat. He starts spitting his red juice due to the attack. Filled with rage, the only thing on her mind is that she will kill them all. From behind Ralph, the woman attacks again with force, piercing his body with her weapon. Emerging from the water, the two shout his name. Beiju and the man continue their fight, even underwater. He tries to punch her, but the woman evades. Soon he begins to feel unwell and realizes he has been poisoned. When he opens his eyes again, the only thing he can do is raise his hand in an attempt to stop her. Reaching into his pocket, he pulls out a shining object. The object glows intensely, and as she dodges an attack, the woman wonders how that was possible. She notices that it is neutralizing the poison, which means it has already healed Elpam. He starts making some movements with his back turned to his opponent, but when she tries to attack him, she realizes it doesn't work. Ralph had shouted about a sacred magic barrier. Behind it, he could attack freely, and then he clenches his fists to punch the girl, who dodges just in time, surprise. However, she notices an object in his hand that makes her uneasy. As she flees, she wonders if the man figured it out because of her movement. From inside the barrier, he says he came close but couldn't resist because she was bragging about it. About her teleportation artifact. Swimming toward his opponent, he says it's time to end this. Quickly, she dodges another punch, but then another one lands directly. Showing the object in his hand, he tells her it's useless. Protected, the man swims in front of her and kicks her in the stomach, making her scream. Still hitting her, he says he's not stupid, that he memorized her movement pattern and that it was fun while it lasted. Using her ability, Beiju swings her scythe to cut through the barrier, shouting at him to shut up, and a massive explosion occurs. Due to the explosion, he is thrown back, and above, the woman tries to slash him, saying it was not fun at all. However, before she can do anything, he grabs her arm. Elpam stands with his flaming bow ready to attack again. She was so surprised to see him that she didn't pay attention to Ralph, who says he's still here preparing the attack. The punch was so strong that it hurled her against the wall, making stones fall loose. Her teleportation artifact shatters into several pieces from the impact. She could no longer use the darkness of teleportation, and if things continue this way, she wouldn't complete her mission. Thinking about fulfilling her master evokes order, she runs toward them with determination. Seeing that the man is preparing his bow, she decides she will kill him no matter what. He releases his flaming arrow at the same time the girl activates her ability. The purple and red colors collide violently. Beiju tries to find a path through the fire. She says that Elpam will not leave her alive, even if it means disintegrating her own body in the process, she must do this. When everything ends, her burning body falls toward them. With a knife between her teeth, she says she will do this for Master Evoke and rushes toward them. But the only thing she hears is the man saying it's a shame, but he has one more shot as he prepares his arrow. It is fired straight at Beiju. A massive circle of fire forms upon impact. The only thing she sees in front of her is her master, telling her she did a good job in reaching out his hand. Smiling at him, she moves toward him, apologizing, and then the fire consumes her. From the water, the statue rises. Menor uses the crushing bullet to hit, but it doesn't work, and she asks how it can move underwater. An explosion occurs where the statue stands, stirring the water around it. The hit landed perfectly, but once again, it takes no damage and counterattacks. The statue shifts its form to knock her into the water, raising a massive wave around it. Dibbo manages to catch her, using his axe to hold onto the wall. Kiri manages to part the waters and unleash her power against the giant. It turns into ice, paralyzing its movements. She shouts that killing the statue is not their priority. They need a new power supply to open the ceiling, but she can only think of one thing. Sliding down the wall and firing shots, the girl says she understands. Along with the shots, Diggo swings his axe at its head and says she needs the statue's mana stone. She shouts at him to be careful and not break the stone, only to aim at the breakable parts until he finds it. It works because seconds later, the mana stone becomes visible, glowing brightly. Just as she is about to mention the damaged part, she realizes her foot is trapped. Noticing this, the statue moves to grab her. Kiri shouts for him to be careful, and before he can be caught, he is protected by the sacred magic shell. He turns and sees Ralph, who calls him son and says it's been a long time. He breaks the barrier and grabs the young man before the giant can. Debo calls him a traitor, and he replies that it's not a nice thing to say to his father. Someone shouts for them to stop fooling around while the water continues to rise toward them. Elpalm uses his bow to fire a flaming arrow at the statue. The impact was so strong that it shattered the ice, throwing everyone into the air. The girl says she knew he was alive and is happy to see him approaching. Debo shouts for him to be careful not to break the Mana Stone. He uses his monocle to locate the stone inside the statue. He asks the other to hold on tight and activates his ability. The young man feels his weapon moving on its own and is launched upward, screaming that he's going to get hit as he heads straight for the giant. Menor shouts that she likes the tactic and is going to help. Holding onto the weapon, the young man says he doesn't understand. The two lose their patience and yell at him to go already, calling him an idiot. Finally, Debo understands that he will be the hero this time, and with determination, swings his axe in the right direction. The force of the impact causes an explosion where it strikes. A hole opens, revealing the Mana Stone inside the stone giant, so he throws himself toward it. The giant senses the movement within itself and is surprised. Ralph asks if his son's taste is any good and rushes toward him. Using his fist, he lands a punch demanding that the giant spit him out. The punch hits, breaking another part of its body. He delivers a series of punches to open another hole, this time in its stomach. When he succeeds, Debo is sent flying away. Holding the Mana Stone in his hands, he declares that the statue is dead. As soon as he lands, stones begin to fall behind him. Now without mana, the stone giant can no longer move. Thus, bit by bit, its body collapses until it is completely on the ground. The problem now is that the water is nearly reaching the ceiling. He tells them not to worry, and they'll make it soon. Below them, Elpalm is swimming with a Mana Stone in hand. Less than 3 minutes remain, and he hopes it's not too late. With the device activated, it should open as soon as it has enough power. Using his monocle, he thinks that he needs to find the shortest route to them. Ralph is worried because they are running out of air. They begin a countdown to hold their breath. At 1, everyone submerges. Elpalm knows that, as things stand, it will be too late. It would take at least 5 minutes if he follows that path, so only one solution remains. He decides to create his own path. He starts using the power of the ring to create a vortex. He only has one chance. Quickly, he tries to break through the walls to the right room. He uses the flame orb ability to clear the way. When he finally reaches the location, he throws the Mana Stone into the equipment. With precision, it lands in the correct spot. The stone shatters and energy begins to flow throughout the area. The energy rises from one end to the other, connecting and passing through the pipes to the puzzle. The gears begin to turn, catching the attention of everyone underwater. A large door opens where they are. They emerge and breathe a sigh of relief. Leaving the area, the young man comments that he thought he was going to die. He is disgusted and exhausted from this place. In the room they are in, another statue appears and Menor asks if it will move too. The other responds that she doesn't know. Debo starts worrying about the master. Below them, Elpalm appears, swimming rapidly toward them. However, he is already running out of air, and there is still a long climb to the top. Water begins to fill his lungs, and he starts to lose consciousness. Menor jumps into the water to save him, holding his face to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. When he wakes up, a woman tells him that he is overexerting himself again. Getting up, he asks where he is. The members of his old group smile and look at him. Jadam tells him that he can rest if he is getting tired. Alexis asks him not to push his limits and says he did well. Elpalm realizes that this is a memory from the past. In the past, he had also smiled and said he was fine before making that promise to them. Back to reality, he wakes up coughing up water. Wiping his mouth, he asks what happened and if Menor saved him. Dibbo says he was worried because he took too long to wake up. Looking at the man, he notes that he is not injured, and Ralph comments that it's thanks to his healing ability. Turning to the girl, he asks if something is wrong, and embarrassed, she says it's nothing. Ralph explains that it was all part of the plan, except for the final part. The young man says they should have told him in advance, and the other comments that to fool the enemies, they had to fool their allies too. Elpalm starts asking about his first attack, but the man decides to change the subject. He then asks why he was carrying Beiju, and he responds that he had a promise to keep with Gaffor. At that moment, Fur suddenly starts running away, leaving everyone puzzled. Reaching a room where there was an artifact, she shouts that she found it. It was the hero's item. However, they weren't sure if it was real. Fur insists that she is certain as it matches the description exactly, and says is the key to Phantom's vault. The greatest thief in Maple World, Phantom, had a vault filled with all kinds of treasures, and the necklace was the key to it. Picking up the artifact, she thanks everyone. But at that moment, several stones begin falling on their heads. The room was collapsing, and everyone starts running. She is scolded for grabbing the item without thinking of the consequences, and she simply thanks them. The tower ahead of them had an exit, but they weren't sure if it was open. To make things worse, skeletons appear, rushing toward them. Ralph says it's his turn and charges to attack them. He uses his artifact, which causes an immense explosion of light and disintegrates the skeletons. When they ask why he didn't use it earlier, he says it consumes too much mana, and that he'll be charging each person 500 mesos for it. Another armored skeleton mounted on a horse rushes toward them. They panic and beg the man to use his ability again. Unfortunately, he could only use it once, and as he runs, they call him useless. Menor steps on a weak spot and everyone falls into a hole that opens beneath them. Using her last spell, Fur manages to create a plank, allowing everyone to slide down. They fall into the water, but the knight chasing them also knows how to swim. Elpalm calls out to Kiri, who knows what to do. She uses her Lunar Division ability, freezing the water to keep the knight at bay. The skeleton roars in fury. Ahead of him, Menor points her weapon and tells him to stay quiet. With an explosion, everything around is swept away, including the knight. Fur warns them that they're about to crash into a wall. Using his bow, the young man breaks the wall. They needed to be careful, because the bridge was about to collapse. They start climbing the stairs when they find the portal. Fur tells them not to stop and to jump when she gives the signal. Everyone leaps toward the portal, with the tower collapsing behind them. A spider says that it no longer senses Biyu's energy and that this was yet another failure. Below it, a man says he has no excuses. He states that he will take responsibility for this with his life. The spider says it can take his life whenever it pleases, but before that, it wants to show him something. It says it's time to switch players. The Lord says there is still hope. He comments to the young master that he is alive since the portal is still active. Fortunately, they were not yet a full team, meaning 6 more people could enter the portal. He volunteers to form a rescue team. He becomes irritated and slams his fist on the table. A young man talks about a group carrying several items and having special bodyguards, just as expected from the son of the richest man in Maple World. The girl wonders if Keniad's afraid that everything will backfire. She says it's all very suspicious and that they should hire Goldrich. Churro becomes suspicious when she hears someone entering, but she stops when she hears a voice. A person opens the door, saying they couldn't let this go, and the girl becomes even more certain that she recognizes the voice. Fur asks Elpalm why he can't give her the ring, and he says it's simply because he doesn't want to. Excited, the woman is now sure she recognizes him. Running over, she cries tears of joy upon recognizing him. But she stops when she hears someone yelling loudly for her to shut up. Grabbing the young man by the collar, the person demands the return of their ring, and annoyed, Elpalm says he took it as promised. They continue arguing and the girl feels relieved. Good news was spreading in the newspaper. They reported that Jack Rich was trapped in the portal, and people said it made no sense, as his group was one of the best. Everyone talks about how the 150 million meso ransom amount is high, and many want to volunteer to go. Debo, reading the news, says it has become the talk of the town. Ralph says his desire to save people is burning and the master isn't around. The other replies that he just wants the money. The two are walking down the street because their boss wants something from a store. The man says he has his plans. Stopping in front of a house, he says that they will see once they arrive. Opening the door, they find a man sitting inside. Debo asks if this is the right place because it looks dusty. Inside the establishment, one of the men calls for Gary and tells him the customers are here, so he should stop sleeping. Looking at Ralph, he immediately recognizes him, leaving his companion confused. He says he thought Ralph was dead. Pointing a knife at him, he says it's the first time he's seen him since he stabbed him, and the other man insists that he didn't do it. Seeing how the man was threatening him, the young man wonders what happened. Ralph says he had his reasons, but now he was there for another matter and pulls something from his pocket. Showing the money Elpalm gave him, he says that he brought a lot of it here. The man angrily calls him a bastard, but then he suddenly hugs him and says he missed him, making the young man realize what kind of people they were dealing with. Starting the negotiations, he says he has everything, except what he doesn't have. He asks for a strengthening scroll. Pulling several out of a box, the merchant says he has them. Debo says they are just regular scrolls, and the other man asks if he is blind. They argue about it for a while. Those were items that had a chance to strengthen other items by a certain percentage. Picking one up, he says the success rate is 100%, but he is told that it's garbage. Ralph says they are being scammed and asks to take a look. The success rate is what determines whether a scroll is good or not. They need one with a low chance of success but high rewards. The man says he only makes money selling what he doesn't have, and the young man calls him a fraud. Things have changed. High-ranking scrolls are now military equipment, and selling them is illegal. Leaving the shop, the warrior says he wasted his time and really needed them. Smiling, he says he planned to buy 50 of them if they were available. Suddenly, he feels a hand on his shoulder. Also smiling, the merchant says he hadn't finished speaking yet. The Arch-Mage Freud, Dragon Master, or Draconic Mage was called by many names, but the most special was Master of Time Magic. However, he didn't appear on the last day. 800 years ago, when the Black Mage was about to be sealed away, he cursed 6 heroes, freezing their time at that moment. Freud remained unaffected and wandered the world looking for ways to save his companions. However, he could not find a solution and disappeared like the wind. That was all Fur knew, as he must have made some arrangements. The only remaining part of him was the hero's ring, which was now in Elpalm's hands. The answer to the question of why he returned. It may lie with him if he could manipulate time, and he wonders how someone 800 years old could do that. Carol says he was chosen by Freud, but wants to ask something. Then she asks why he was fighting against the followers. He says he has his reasons, but then admits that he wants to save them. At all costs. In the forest, someone is panting. Kiri is training her sword movements. The training is so intense that sweat drips from her. Dubo appears and asks if she never gets tired of doing that every day. She says she was looking for him, and he responds that he had something to tell the master, so he went to see him. A little awkwardly, the young man starts speaking, stammering. Finally, he says he needs a favor from her, leaving her intrigued. Embarrassed, he asks if she could go somewhere with him. She agrees, and the next day, the young man waits in front of a clock, wondering if he arrived too early. To his surprise, Kiri appears wearing heels and apologizes for making him wait. She then explains that Minoru made her late by deciding to dress her up, even against her will. Embarrassed, she asks why her friend is looking at her like that and if it's because the outfit doesn't suit her. Sweating nervously, he says that actually she looks beautiful. They head toward their destination, unaware that they are being followed by the rest of the group who are curious about why the two are meeting. Flashing back to the past, Kiri talks to Minoru and tells her that Dibbo asked her to help pick out a birthday present for his younger sister. The red-haired adventurer says that was definitely just an excuse. But her friend says that since she isn't good at choosing gifts, she would like Minoru to come along and help. Returning to the present, in a shop, the young man shows her a brass knuckle and asks what she thinks. He says it seems very useful for self-defense. The girl then asks why, in that case, he doesn't just get a sword. The day goes by as they move from stall to stall, looking for the best gift. Happy, Kiri says that going out dressed like that was easier than she thought. Since she had started her night training when she was young, she was no longer used to going out without armor or weapons. Dibbo then suggests that they check out the explosive stall, and she agrees. Meanwhile, their three friends are watching everything from hiding, and Minoru is annoyed that the two are so inexperienced in romance, even though it's obvious that they like each other. Sighing, the red-haired adventurer says that at this rate, both of them will end up alone forever. Suddenly, Dibbo's sister says that this is why people call her brother an idiot all the time. Surprised, the bearded adventurer asks how she knew they were there, and the young girl says she was the one who cried for a present. Watching the two lovebirds, the man asks if he also looked good next to that other person in the past. But Minoru says she doesn't care about his romantic stories. Jumping into the conversation, El Palm says they are wasting time, and his friend says he only said that because he doesn't care about these things. Surprising her, the young man says that actually he does care and has even dated once or twice before, but now he has no time. Curious, the red-haired adventurer asks what happened then. But her friend says it's all in the past and that his love is not even alive anymore. Thinking further, he remembers that he went back in time and realizes that maybe she actually is alive. Night falls, and Dibbo thanks Kiri for her help. Saying that he thinks Denev will like the gift, the young woman smiles and says she's happy to have helped. She says goodbye and prepares to leave, but the young man calls her to wait. However, when she turns around, he says it's nothing and that he will see her the next day. Overjoyed, the adventurer, with a big smile, tells him to let her know if he ever needs help again. When the young man enters his house, he finds his sister and his friends and asks what they are doing there. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone screams for help. A hooded young man tells the monster to stop because he won't let it pass. However, a man with the mark of the wicked and a snake on his back unleashes his power, easily entering the place where there is a stone that seems to be his final objective. Smiling, he says that he has finally gotten his hands on the sealing stone of the hero Freud, which holds the power of time. But when he picks up the object, to his surprise, he doesn't feel any magic coming from it. Furious, he starts breaking the place apart while questioning who dared to do something like that, concluding that he must find the person responsible at all costs. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.